Chapter 199. Lu Ping ignored them and landed on the island. Li Xin said anxiously, "Junior Martial Brother Zhao, this formation is still quite powerful. Even if your cultivation is much higher than the person in charge of the formation, it will still take a lot of effort to break it. If Junior Martial Brother Zhao is determined to capture that Lu woman, then go down with the rest of us." As soon as Li Xin finished speaking, Zhang Weiqing volunteered himself and said, "Count me in." Then, another two people followed Lu Ping into the formation. All four of them were in the 7th or 8th layer of the blood condensation realm. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared into the formation. This Zhao Changyun is really impatient. If he can't take down this formation in one piece, we might have to spend more effort. You don't know how badly Junior Martial Brother Zhao was harmed by that Lu woman. Out of the entire group of 20 cultivators, only he managed to escape back to Hai Yen sect. Even now, not only has his status not been revoked, it has been extended for another 10 years. The one who spoke was Xianling sect's Zhou Weilong, and his tone was filled with schadenfreude. With 4 late blood condensation cultivators working together, that woman will definitely be captured easily. If we can use this frost forest formation to trap that Lu Zipping, it will be much easier to capture or kill him. After all, even though it won't be a problem for us to defeat him, it's not like we won't suffer any losses either. How are we going to split the treasures on him? This person was also one of the surviving cultivators. As soon as this person finished speaking, the remaining 6 people tensed up. Miao Weidong coughed and said, "Let's talk about it after we kill Lu Zipping." Of course, they didn't know that Lu Ping had long been suspicious of Yuan Zhan. Ever since he went out to sea, he had been very careful. He had long noticed their tracks and had even schemed to kill Zhao Changyun, then hid among them. The frost forest array in front of him was not only the most powerful array that Hu Lili had mastered, it was also the array that Hu Lili had explained the most to Lu Ping. Lu Ping did not have much knowledge about array formations. However, array formations were after all frequently used by cultivators. It was fine if Lu Ping did not know about them, but he had to have some understanding of them. Especially after Hu Lili found out that Lu Ping had been besieged several times by people using array formations, she explained a few methods of breaking array formations to him. This frost forest array was Hu Lili's proudest achievement, so naturally she explained the most. After Lu Ping entered the formation, he removed the mirage robe that was wrapped around his body and restored his original appearance. Then he followed Hu Lili's instructions and walked within the formation to avoid triggering the power of the formation. Lu Ping's powerful divine sense spread out and followed the gaps in the formation. In an instant he found Hu Lili. Hu Lili, who was meditating to recover, raised her head and looked around. Lu Ping could feel that although her aura had weakened, she was not injured. It was obvious that the continuous fighting and maintaining the operation of the formation had exhausted her arcane energy. Seeing that Hu Lili was unharmed, Lu Ping heaved a sigh of relief. The tension that had been building up over the past few days finally subsided. Zhang Weiqing followed closely behind Lu Ping. By the time he entered the formation, he had already lost sight of Lu Ping. Zhang Weiqing was in the late blood condensation realm. Even if the person inside the formation activated the formation, it would still take a lot of effort to deal with him. As long as he could hold on for a while, the other 3 would naturally be able to break the formation. At that time he would be able to capture this woman. At the thought of using this woman to humiliate his greatest enemy, Zhang Weiqing could almost see Lu Ping being driven mad by him. He couldn't help but feel a burst of excitement in his heart. At that moment, Zhang Weiqing seemed to hear something and immediately became alert. However, there was not the slightest movement around him. Zhang Weiqing looked at the branches of the forest above him. Because of the array formation, they were all covered in frost, forming a scene of rhyme. Zhang Weiqing thought to himself, "This formation is not bad for enjoying the scenery." At that moment, an ice shard hanging on a branch fell from the branch as if the branch could not bear the weight of the ice shard. The ice shard fell about 2 to 3 feet away from Zhang Weiqing. Zhang Weiqing did not mind. However, when the ice shard fell to the same height as Zhang Weiqing, it made a strange turn and shot out a sword light, slashing towards Zhang Weiqing's throat. This happened so suddenly that Zhang Weiqing did not expect an ice shard to turn into a top-grade flying sword. Zhang Weiqing did not have time to say anything. He hurriedly took out a high-grade magic artifact from his storage bag and raised his protective chi. However, it was too late. Under Lu Ping's invisible sword art, the Qinghan sword had decapitated the person who had tried to frame him several times. Looking at the corpse on the ground, Lu Ping sighed. Such a person could no longer enter Lu Ping's vision. Lu Ping turned and smiled at the depths of the formation. He knew that Hu Lili had already sensed his arrival, so she used the formation to cooperate with Lu Ping's actions. This caused Jiang Weiqing to be killed by Lu Ping with one strike without even a chance to warn her. Just as Lu Ping looked back, Hu Lili seemed to have a telepathic connection with him. The frost tree behind Lu Ping swayed from side to side, and the icicles hanging on the tree tinkled as if Hu Lili's laughter was echoing in his ears. With the concealment of the formation, Lu Ping was not afraid that Miao Weidong and the others outside the formation would see his face. With Hu Lili's cooperation, Lu Ping used the formation to silently kill the other two. After collecting the spoils of war, Lu Ping turned here and there. The frost forest in front of him suddenly moved away from Lu Ping, and a clearing in the forest appeared in front of Lu Ping. A beautiful figure in green was sitting cross-legged on the lush green grass. Who else could it be but Hu Lili? Hu Lili tucked a strand of hair behind her. Her face was slightly pale from overexertion of transcendence energy. She smiled at Lu Ping crisply. Her bright eyes were like crescent moons. There was a hint of gratitude, a hint of gratification, a hint of pride, and a hint of playfulness from a little girl succeeding in her scheme. The two of them looked at each other. A hint of relief remained in Lu Ping's gaze. The hint of pride and playfulness in Hu Lili's gaze was even stronger. Her two pitch-black eyes became like two full moons in a deep well. I knew you would come to pick me up. Hu Lili stood up with a smile. Lu Ping had already walked to her side. Are you injured? Lu Ping asked softly. With all the pills you left behind, even if I was injured, I would have long recovered. Hu Lili spun in a circle in front of Lu Ping, indicating that she was unharmed. In front of Lu Ping, Hu Lili had always presented herself as a mature and intelligent person. This was the first time she had displayed such a timid behavior in front of Lu Ping. Hu Lili looked at Lu Ping's stunned gaze and giggled. Lu Ping also laughed softly. Hu Lili laughed blissfully and Lu Ping laughed joyfully. The 6 people outside the frost forest array finally sensed that something was wrong. The 4 of them had entered the array for such a long time, but there was not the slightest movement from the array, nor was there any news coming out. Even if a school of flying fish demonic beasts had entered, it would still cause the person in charge of the array to expend some effort. Could it be that among the 4 of them, there was an expert proficient in array formations who had already infiltrated the array's eye and killed the woman in charge of the array with a single slash? Chapter 200. Something's not right. There's something wrong with that Zhao Changyun. Everyone finally sensed that something was wrong. Li Xin, who was more meticulous, thought of something. Everyone present was an elite of the blood condensation realm, so they were naturally quick-witted people. They immediately noticed that Zhao Changyun hadn't revealed his true appearance since the beginning. They only knew his identity from the mirage robe that was unique to the Sea Flame sect. However, there was one thing they didn't understand. If this Zhao Changyun was really an imposter, then how could he use the mirage robe that only the Sea Flame sect's secret technique could use? Could it be that this person was Jinling's spy in the Sea Flame sect? Clearly no one thought so. In the Frost Forest Array, Lu Ping told Hu Lili everything that happened in Lu Ziyuan's cultivation room on Huangli Island. It was completely different from what Hu Lili had told Lu Ping. That day it was exactly as Yuan Zhan had said. The 3 of them protected the unconscious Jiang Zishuan and got separated from the rest of the group. However, the demonic beasts that were chasing them seemed to have locked onto Hu Lili's group of 4. 8 late blood condensation demonic beasts and 30 to 40 mid-blood condensation demonic beasts chased after them relentlessly. Once they caught up to them, the 4 of them would definitely die. Hu Lili's cultivation was at the 5th level of the blood condensation realm. She was the weakest among the 4, and she was also an array cultivator. Compared to Yuan Zhan and Leng Qian, who were carrying the unconscious Jiang Zishuan, her speed was much slower. Gradually, the distance between Hu Lili and the 3 of them widened. However, Yuan Zhan and Leng Qian seemed to have forgotten that Hu Lili was still behind them. They only focused on flying, ignoring Hu Lili's shouts. At this time, how could Hu Lili not know that the 2 of them had abandoned her to block the demonic beasts? Forget about Yuan Zhan, but when she thought about how Leng Qian, who was close to them and Lu Ping's senior sister, actually did such a thing, Hu Lili shuddered. Hu Lili was also a decisive person. With her intelligence, how could she allow the 2 of them to use her as a tool? Ever since Huangli Island's patrol team was attacked and Yang Xian and Mu Jinling were heavily injured, Hu Lili had already guessed something. Thus, Hu Lili decisively turned around and fled towards the north. Just as Hu Lili expected, only a few mid-blood condensation demonic beasts led more than a dozen early blood condensation demonic beasts to chase after Hu Lili. The rest of the demonic beasts continued to chase after Yuan Zhan, Lung Qian and Jiang Zishuan. Hu Lili had used up a lot of her magic power to escape to this coral island. She knew that if she continued to escape, sooner or later she would be overtaken by the demonic beasts due to the exhaustion of her magic power. Therefore Hu Lili had laid down this frost forest array on the island. Fortunately, Hu Lili had been helping Lu Ping manage the shop on Huangli Island for the past few years, so she was quite wealthy. With Lu Ping as an alchemist, she also had plenty of healing and spirit recovering pills. With a pair of high-grade jade hairpins Lu Ping gave her and the help of the array, she managed to repel the demonic beast's attacks several times. 2 days ago, for some unknown reason, more than half of the mid-blood condensation demonic beasts had left, leaving only 2 to 3 red flag blood condensation demonic beasts and about a dozen early blood condensation demonic beasts. Hu Lili used a day to recover her magic power. Just as she was about to rush out of the demonic beast's encirclement, she noticed that Xianling sect cultivators had suddenly appeared outside the island. They hid outside the island, and the faint aura of a late blood condensation cultivator made Hu Lili afraid to act rashly. By now, Lu Ping had finally sorted out the sequence of events. Yuan Zhan told Lu Ping the wrong location and asked Lu Ping to search for Hu Lili nearby so that he could inform Zhou Weilong and the others to find Hu Lili and set up an ambush. Then they would leave clues to lure Lu Ping into the ambush and kill him. The only thing they didn't expect was that Zhao Changyun of the Hai Yen sect was too far away and delayed his arrival. Instead, he was spotted by Lu Ping's blue Yuan in the sky. Due to a freak combination of factors, Lu Ping was able to disguise himself as Zhao Changyun and sneak into the frost forest array, killing 3 people without anyone noticing. Just as Lu Ping and Hu Lili were discussing how to break out of the 6 people's encirclement, a series of rumbling sounds of spells could be heard. The frost forest array began to shake. Clearly, the 6 people outside the array had finally realized something was amiss and began to attack. Lu Ping thought for a moment and passed the ashen mask on his face to Hu Lili. Then he passed the jade crystal bottle containing a heart-dissolving pill to her, as well as a bunch of medicinal pills and spiritual materials that Lu Ping had no use for. He said, "I'll hold them off later. Their target is me. You take the opportunity to escape, and I'll be able to deal with them without any worries. You must wear the mask." I'm guessing that Yuan Zhan must have left some people outside Huangli Island and Tianling Mountain. The Yuan family's influence in Jinling isn't small, so we can't let them discover us. Do you remember the coral island south of Huangli Island? The one with Pillmaster Sheng Tao's secret cave abode? Hu Lili's eyes wandered around. Lu Ping smiled and said, "I was there that day too. I received Sheng Tao's inheritance, but I almost died in the hands of that snake demon. Wait for me there for 2 days. Don't return to Huangli Island. If I don't come back in 2 days, find a way to sneak into Tianling Mountain. I don't need to tell you what to do next. I trust you can handle everything on Huangli Island for me." Hu Lili knew that her arcane energy was weak, and her forte was formations. In a battle between late blood condensation cultivators, not only would she be useless, but she would also be a burden to Lu Ping. Hence she nodded and agreed. She then asked worriedly, "The 6 people outside are all in the 8th or 9th layer of the blood condensation realm, and 2 of them are part of the North Sea's 18 generals. That Zhou Weilong's strength isn't any weaker than Miao Weidong's. Are you confident in fighting against the 6 of them?" Lu Ping scrutinized Hu Lili, then suddenly smiled and said, "Don't worry, I just realized that you're a beauty today. I haven't seen enough of you, so I definitely won't let these clowns get away with it." Hu Lili's fair and delicate face instantly turned red when she heard his words. Then she said generously, "I knew you were up to no good. I'm happy that you came today, so I don't care about anything else. I just hope that you can return safely." Hu Lili's words were like a wife's to her husband who was about to leave for a long time. Lu Ping's heart warmed, but he didn't promise her anything. He smiled and walked out of the formation. Even though the Frost Forest formation was exquisitely set up, it wouldn't last long under the combined attacks of a few late blood condensation cultivators. One of the cultivators used the magic artifact in his hand to bombard the magic array once more. Next, the white frost forest magic array shook and the white frost on the trees melted away. In just the blink of an eye, the trees had turned green, brimming with life. It was as though in the blink of an eye, the weather had returned from autumn and winter to spring and summer. The fallen trees were the only proof of the devastation that the small island had suffered. Just as the cultivator was about to retrieve his magic artifact, a cyan-colored sword beam shot out from the forest. Over 100 sword beams formed a simple sword array of tri-talents, which charged towards the cultivator. The cultivator didn't panic in the face of danger. He conjured up his earth energy barrier and a high-grade white bone shield appeared above his head. Seeing the rising sword rays, Miao Weidong had a bad feeling. He quickly shouted, "Spiritual sword ray. Be careful, this person's sword technique is powerful." Lu Ping had already flown out of the forest and rushed towards the cultivator. At this point there was no need for them to hide anymore. Lu Ping also recognized the three people who didn't speak earlier. They were the three late blood condensation cultivators from the Zhonglang sect, Feiyu sect, and Linggu sect, who had ambushed him on the nameless island. When enemies meet, their eyes turn red. This Zhonglang sect's late blood condensation cultivator was quite strong. With the help of his magic tool and white bone shield, he managed to withstand Lu Ping's sword technique. However, he was pushed back a few dozen meters by Lu Ping's sword. His face was pale, clearly frightened by the power of Lu Ping's sword technique. Lu Ping's face turned solemn. He didn't expect this person to be able to withstand his full power attack. Lu Ping didn't follow up with another attack. Instead, he grabbed Hu Lily's hand and flung her out of the encirclement. Run! At this point, because the Zhonglang sect's cultivator was pushed back, the six people's encirclement had been broken. With Lu Ping's help, Hu Lily immediately flew towards the west like a flying sword. No one could stop her in time. Lu Ping was worried that one of the six would chase after Hu Lily, so he swung the Qinghan sword in a circle and cast the Stormy Waves Crashing Shore sword skill. This sword skill was most suited for group battles. More than 100 sword rays split into 6 waves and attacked the 6 people separately. But to her surprise, the 6 of them paid no heed to Hu Lily's departure and focused on attacking Lu Ping. Lu Ping was their target. Hu Lily was just a bait for Lu Ping. That was why they let Hu Lily stay in the Frost Forest array for so long. After a few moves, Lu Ping realized that the 6 people in front of him were far stronger than the ordinary late blood condensation cultivators he killed before. Among the 6, the strongest were Miao Weidong, He Lisin, and Zhou Weilong. The other 3 were slightly weaker, but they were still stronger than ordinary 8th or 9th layer blood condensation cultivators. Lu Ping quickly felt the pressure. He realized that these cultivators were probably nurtured by their sects to become core forging cultivators. There was no need to talk about Miao Weidong and He Lisin, but Zhou Weilong and the other 3 were once the leaders of their sections. They had infiltrated deep into Jinling's buffer zone as bandits and survived Jinling's encirclement unscathed. Naturally, they were extraordinary. Lu Ping thought to himself, in this situation, the longer it drags on, the more disadvantageous it will be for me. Although my spiritual energy is much stronger than the others, the opponents have the advantage in numbers. Breaking 1 finger is better than injuring 10 fingers. After figuring it out, Lu Ping suddenly gathered the scattered sword lights and turned them into a green water jiao. The Qinghan sword pierced out from the top of the water jiao's head like a sharp horn, 2 jiao eyes, and 4 jiao claws, each formed by 9 sword lights. The water jiao charged at the Zhonghai sect cultivator who was knocked back by Lu Ping's attack. The water jiao bared its fangs and brandished its claws. The Zhonghai sect cultivator was shocked. He had experienced the power of Lu Ping's sword attack. He had used up a third of his spiritual energy to block Lu Ping's attack. Because of this, his internal organs were shaken and he almost suffered internal injuries. The Zhonghai sect cultivator put the white bone shield in front of him again and the flying sword by his side. The cultivator who was still worried gritted his teeth and crushed a talisman. The blue and white protective energy around him instantly turned into a sticky blood-red color. At the same time, the other 5 people surrounding Lu Ping saw Lu Ping attacking the Zhonghai sect cultivator with all his might, but they did not help him. Instead, they aimed their magic weapons at Lu Ping, hoping to injure him severely. Chapter 201. Lu Ping didn't care about the other 5's attacks. He only attached the cloudy sky to Lu Ping's golden protective aura. Magic clouds flashed under his feet as he tried his best to dodge the 5's attacks. Those that couldn't dodge were hit by the 5's magic tools and spells. A series of explosions rang out, and the Azure Wave sect cultivator only had time to let out a blood-curdling scream. His flying sword had already been slapped away by the Azure Flood Dragon's claw, and the horn formed by the Azure sword struck the white bone shield, instantly shattering this high-quality high-grade magic artifact into 8 pieces. The cultivator's blood-red protective aura was clearly strengthened, but the green flood dragon coiled around the protective aura and clawed at it. The blood-red protective aura instantly thinned. Finally, as the cultivator's protective aura shattered, the sword light that formed the green flood dragon also lost its magic power. The Azure sword turned around and retreated back to Lu Ping. The Azure Waves sect cultivator heaved a sigh of relief. He finally managed to block the attack. However, he saw Lu Ping raise his hand. Under the reflection of the sunlight, the cultivator only saw a faint flash. He cursed inwardly and hurriedly tried to summon back the flying sword that was struck away by the green flood dragon, but it was too late. 2 jade blood needles pierced the cultivator's heart, destroying the core space in one fell swoop and turning the cultivator's heart into a pile of red meat paste. The Azure Waves sect cultivator died in the blink of an eye. However, Lu Ping had already withstood several attacks from the other 5. Even with the cloudy sky and the myriad meteorite poison essence shield, Lu Ping's face still turned pale. He hurriedly summoned the Azure Sword back and used a sword technique to block the other 5's attacks. He was secretly shocked at their tyrannical strength. Miao Weidong and the others were even more shocked than Lu Ping. They didn't expect Lu Ping to be able to block all 6 of their attacks and kill one of them at the same time. One had to know that all 6 of them were capable of becoming personal disciples in their respective sects and were nurtured to become core forging realm cultivators. None of them weren't proud and arrogant. But now, the 6 of them couldn't do anything to this 7th layer blood condensation realm cultivator. While they were worried for their safety, they also swore to themselves that they couldn't let this monster escape. However, Lu Ping knew that such an opportunity would never come again. If Lu Ping attacked one of them with all his strength, the others would no longer sweep away the snow in front of them. Instead, they would work together to block his attack. Moreover, the consumption of magic power and divine sense was unbearable even for Lu Ping. Since he couldn't win, Lu Ping decided to escape. Thus, Lu Ping retreated towards the west while blocking the 5 people's attacks. Miao Weidong had always been one of the leaders of the blood condensation realm in Shenling sect. He was the first to notice Lu Ping's intention and said, "He's going to escape. Everyone, we must stop him. If we let him escape today, none of us will be able to live in peace in the future." The crowd recalled Lu Ping's strength as a 7th layer blood condensation realm cultivator. If he were to advance further in the future, none of them would be able to survive. Hence, the 5 of them unleashed their respective abilities determined to take care of Lu Ping. Miao Weidong and Zhou Weilong worked together to block the west, so Lu Ping couldn't escape towards Jinling. To the north, He Lisin tried her best to delay him while the others supported her. The east was the monster race's territory, so Lu Ping naturally wouldn't consider it. If he made a mistake, he would be attacked by the monster beasts and the cultivators behind him. If that happened, Lu Ping's situation would be even worse. Miao Weidong and the others were obviously planning to drive Lu Ping into the monster race's territory. Ever since the North Sea sects attacked Golden Jiao Island, the monster race's territory seemed to have calmed down a lot. However, the monster beasts were clearly gathering instead of fighting individually. If Lu Ping panicked and ran into the monster race's gathering area, he would definitely die a horrible death. Lu Ping gritted his teeth and swung his arm behind him. A 3-inch silver jade metal seal flew out and collided with Fei Yu and Ling Gu. Lu Ping slashed out with his sword and another water flood dragon sword from the water's surface, flying towards He Lisin with its claws and fangs bared. He Lisin's expression changed. The scene of Lu Ping killing the Azure Wave Sect's cultivator was still vivid in her mind. He Lisin did her best to defend while shouting, "Senior Martial Brother Miao, Senior Martial Brother Zhou, come help me." Miao Weidong stretched out his hand and threw out a jade pendant. The jade pendant transformed into a flaming bird and flapped its wings to attack the water flood dragon. However, a crystal bowl suddenly appeared above Lu Ping's head. As Lu Ping cast an incantation, a huge wave 20 zhang high rose from the sea's surface and rushed towards Miao Weidong and Zhou Weilong. Miao Weidong and Zhou Weilong were ready for battle. However, Lu Ping suddenly turned around and followed behind the metal seal, rushing towards the south. The 2 cultivators in the south, one wielding an iron hammer and the other wielding a flying axe, attacked the incoming iron stamp together. However, the iron stamp suddenly expanded, turning into a huge iron stamp with a length, width, and height of 3 zhang, 3 qi, and 3 cun. Then it charged towards the 2 cultivators. When the iron hammer and flying axe hit the metal seal, they only produced a few sparks and did not hinder the metal seal in the slightest. The metal seal continued to rush towards the 2 cultivators. The 2 cultivators looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. The 2 of them simultaneously moved out of the way of the metal seal. One of them was a little too slow and the metal seal brushed past his defensive mystic tool and protective aura. The mystic tool wailed and was immediately knocked away by the metal seal. The cultivator's face turned pale and he suddenly had the thought of a mantis trying to stop a chariot appeared in his mind. Just as the two of them moved out of the way of the metal seal, they heard He Lisin's shrill shout, "Don't let him get away!" Only then did the two of them see that right after the metal seal, Lu Ping turned into a blue light and followed close to the surface of the sea. The two of them hurriedly took out their iron hammers and flying axes again, but they were blocked by the Qinghan sword. The two of them hurriedly drove their respective mystic tools to chase after Lu Ping, but they saw that He Lisin had already turned into a light mist and was chasing in front of the two. Lu Ping used the Qinghan sword to force He Lisin to retreat. Miao Weidong had already driven an osprey towards Lu Ping. Lu Ping used the cloudy sky to protect himself and the Qinghan sword stabbed towards the osprey's abdomen. Miao Weidong hurriedly blocked the Qinghan sword. The osprey grabbed onto the cloudy sky and couldn't move an inch forward. On the contrary, the surface of the cloudy sky flashed with a golden light and the demon's spiritual force in the osprey's body was instantly corroded by the myriad meteorite poison gang. The osprey screamed and hurriedly flew up. Then Zhou Weilong tangled with him. Just like this, the few of them took turns to fight with Lu Ping, intending to consume Lu Ping's mana. Lu Ping fought and retreated, trying to avoid being besieged by the five of them again. The six of them rolled and fought all the way to the southeast, gradually entering the demon territory. The more Miao Weidong and the others fought, the more fearful they became. The five of them took turns to fight Lu Ping and Lu Ping fought as he fled. Even after a whole day, Lu Ping's arcane energy was still abundant and his spirit was still high. This made the five even more fearful of Lu Ping, and they were even more determined to kill him. Just as the five of them entered the demon territory, many early blood condensation demonic beasts swooped up from the bottom of the sea to attack Lu Ping's group. However, as the six of them went deeper into the demon territory, the number of demonic beasts intercepting them decreased. The mid and late blood condensation demonic beasts that should have attacked them earlier were nowhere to be seen. Miao Weidong's group was focused on killing Lu Ping, so they didn't notice this phenomenon. Lu Ping had long been paying attention to the abnormal behavior of the demonic beasts. As soon as he noticed this, he immediately prepared himself for the worst. He Lisin and the others were, after all, the elites of their respective sections. Although they didn't notice anything unusual in the Monster Races Sea region at first, as they ventured deeper into the Monster Races Sea region, they finally noticed something amiss. They secretly raised their guard and became distracted from their fights with Lu Ping. Chapter 202. Right at this moment, Lu Ping seemed to have discovered something. His face suddenly turned pale. Ignoring the attacks from the five people fighting him in a continuous battle, he used the cloudy sky to wrap the water curtain heaven flower that was fused with the meteorite prime of myriad poison and flew towards the southwest direction guarded by the two cultivators from the Soaring Feather sect and Linggu sect. Lu Ping's sudden attack caught the five unprepared, but the five of them still tried to intercept him at the same time. Five magic tools landed on Lu Ping's body at the same time. The cloudy sky was like a cloud that was blown away, revealing a golden aura. Fortunately, the aura that Lu Ping had strengthened was able to block the five's attacks. Lu Ping's face turned pale and a faint trace of blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. However, Lu Ping still didn't dare to look back. He took out a top-grade spirit recovery pill from his storage ring and swallowed it. The magic cloud beneath his feet flashed and he flew even faster. The five of them naturally wouldn't let Lu Ping escape so easily, but Lu Ping's actions still raised their vigilance. Miao Weidong and He Lisin looked at each other as if they had thought of something at the same time. Right at this moment, a deep drum sound suddenly came from the bottom of the sea. Dong! When the five of them heard the drum sound, they simultaneously felt the magic power within their bodies fluctuate. Their flying figures couldn't help but slow down. Lu Ping, who was in front, also paused. However, he was faster than the five of them in breaking free from the disturbance of the drum sound. He continued to fly towards the southwest direction, increasing the distance between them. Dong! Another drum sound rang out and the magic power within the six of them went out of control again. This drum sound is strange. Everyone leave this place first. He Lisin suppressed the uneasiness in her heart and said anxiously. The other four also panicked for no reason. When cultivators reached this stage, some of their senses and premonitions would also become more acute. Without needing He Lisin to say anything, everyone quickened their pace. Dong! The third drum sound rang out. Miao Weidong seemed to have thought of something. This red-faced man's face finally turned pale as he cried out involuntarily, "True Spirit War Drum, it's the True Spirit War Drum. Hurry and run." When He Lisin heard Miao Weidong's cry, how could she not know what had happened? She screamed, Beast tide how? Why is there a beast tide now? Right at this moment, the beating of the true spirit war drums suddenly became continuous. Dong dong dong. Dong 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 dong. Zhou Weilong inadvertently turned his head to look. Suddenly, his eyes widened as he looked behind him in disbelief. He saw a black line suddenly rising from the surface of the sea in the east. The black line rose higher and higher until it covered the sky and the earth. Zhou Weilong immediately cried out in alarm. When the other four heard this, they all turned around to take a look as well. The black lines that blotted out the sky turned out to be an endless horde of flying demonic beasts. A cacophony of cries came from nowhere, growing louder and louder. How could the crowd still care about exclaiming? All they had left was the thought of fleeing for their lives. Right at this moment, the blue sea behind them suddenly turned darker. It was as though something was about to float up from the bottom of the sea. Not long after, a huge splash appeared on the surface of the sea. It was as though the entire sea was boiling. The sound of water splashing rang out and countless demonic beasts suddenly emerged from the bottom of the sea. Accompanied by the beating of the true spirit war drum, they advanced towards the northern sea islands. The roars of various demonic beasts came in all shapes and sizes, shaking the world. Seeing the 5 human cultivators running away, the group of demonic beasts cried out in excitement. They immediately broke away from the huge horde of demonic beasts heading west and chased after the 5. At this moment no one dared to look back. There was only one word left in their minds: run. At this moment, Lu Ping had already left the 5 of them far behind. However, when he heard the deafening roars of the demonic beasts behind him, how could Lu Ping dare to feel even the slightest bit of joy? Lu Ping controlled the magic cloud bracelet with all his might to flee. Under the influence of his magic power, it slowly turned into a blue cloud. Suddenly, sound rang out. There was a trace of curiosity and surprise in the voice, clearly audible amidst the roars of the demonic beasts. To think that I would bump into a few familiar fellows here. Oh, there is also a person that this young master is interested in. The one who spoke was an ethereal voice, seemingly unconcerned about the approaching demonic beasts. Young Master Jin. Sage Jin Li. Miao Weidong and He Lisin were both cultivators who had participated in the 7-star celestial operation. Naturally, they knew who the one who spoke was. They could not stop themselves from crying out in fear. At that moment, Lu Ping felt like dying. An elegant and handsome young master with a folding fan in his hand was walking over the sea from the north. His movements appeared slow but were actually fast. In just a few steps he had arrived before Lu Ping. Who else could it be but the one who had caused his scalp to go numb, Sage Jin Li? Sage Jin Li had come from the north and was blocking Lu Ping's path. Without a word, Lu Ping avoided Sage Jin Li and continued to flee southwest. How could the 5 cultivators behind him still have any clear sense of direction? Seeing that Lu Ping was fleeing southwest, they also followed Lu Ping. The group of demonic beasts following behind the 5 of them also headed towards the southwest direction. Under the leadership of this group of demonic beasts, more and more demonic beasts followed the group of demonic beasts like the wind, chasing after the 5 of them. Sage Jin Li frowned as he looked at this group of demonic beasts that had gone out of control. However, compared to the massive beast tide, although this group of demonic beasts was large in number, it did not affect the overall situation. Moreover, under the stimulation of the true spirit war drum, these blood condensation demonic beasts had become abnormally violent. Even Sage Jin Li found it difficult to restrain them. Sage Jin Li coldly snorted. The reason why this group of demonic beasts had gone out of control was because of these 6 human ants. Sage Jin Li stood on the surface of the sea, not pursuing them. Instead, he clenched his right hand and a flying sword suddenly appeared in his hand. This flying sword style was exactly the same as the top-grade flying sword Sage Jin Li had used in the 7-star celestial operation. However, at this moment this flying sword was glowing brilliantly. A mysterious and sharp chi, stimulated by Sage Jin Li's true essence, flew straight towards the 6 cultivators. Lu Ping, who was running at full speed, suddenly felt a chill run down his back. A sword intent was pointing at him from afar. He couldn't help but turn his head and see Sage Jin Li casually waving his hand. It was exactly the same as when Lu Ping had first encountered the Jin Young Master in the 7-star celestial operation. However, this time Sage Jin Li was using the true essence of a core forging realm cultivator. A sword chi, several dozen zhang long, shot out from Sage Jin Li's flying sword. In the air, it suddenly split into over 600 sword lights. Then the sword lights reformed into 6 swordfish, which streaked across the sea, chasing after Lu Ping, Miao Weidong, He Lisin, and the others. Seeing the core forging realm cultivators make their move, Miao Weidong and the others clearly understood that this was a moment of life and death. How could they possibly be the slightest bit lucky? They all used their trump cards and attacked the swordfish with all their might. Two cultivators from the Soaring Feather sect and Linggu sect let out miserable screams as they were severely injured by the swordfish. They fell into the sea and were soon drowned in the beast tide, losing all signs of life. Zhou Weilong spat out a mouthful of blood as he struggled to keep up with Miao Weidong and He Lisin. Their faces were pale. It was obvious that they had expended a large amount of their transcendence energy to resist the swordfish. Lu Ping turned around to look at the swordfish chasing after him. This swordfish was clearly a size larger than Miao Weidong and the others, and he cursed inwardly. This sage Jinli really thought too highly of him. Lu Ping didn't dare to hold back any longer. He wielded the azure sword with all his might, and his cultivation instantly rose from the 7th layer of the blood condensation realm to the 8th layer. His vigorous transcendence energy flowed into the azure sword along with the strong heartbeat of his heart. The azure sword flew through the air and drew over 100 sword lights, forming an azure flood dragon about the same size as the swordfish. It dove into the sea and charged towards the menacing swordfish. Ah! Sage Jinli exclaimed in surprise once again. He didn't expect that this kid's swordsmanship had already reached the sword light psychic realm. If Lu Ping could escape with his life this time, then in the future when he formed his gold core he would definitely be a match for him. Thinking of this, Sage Jinli's interest in Lu Ping grew even more. The azure flood dragon and swordfish collided in the sea, instantly creating a huge wave that blocked the path of Miao Weidong and the others who were trying their best to escape. The three of them didn't expect that Lu Ping's cultivation was actually at the 8th layer of the blood condensation realm. How was this possible? It had only been 3 months since he broke through to the late blood condensation realm in the 7-star skies. The 5 of them had chased Lu Ping for an entire day, yet they hadn't been able to force out Lu Ping's true strength. The 3 of them suppressed the shock in their hearts, dodged the huge wave and continued to flee. At this time, the demonic beast horde chasing after them was getting larger and larger. Gradually it began to affect the beast tide. What the 3 of them didn't know was that it wasn't that Lu Ping would rather be chased by them than reveal his cultivation at the 8th layer of the blood condensation realm. Instead, it was because Lu Ping had some misgivings. Every time Lu Ping broke through to the blood condensation realm, he would make ample preparations and build a solid foundation. Every time he broke through, the new condensed blood bead he formed would always be 1/3 the size of the original one. Moreover, after consuming the heart-dissolving pill this time, because Lu Ping had just broken through to the late blood condensation realm, he wasn't able to make as much preparations as before. As expected, after Lu Ping luckily broke through to the 8th layer, his 8th condensed blood bead was only 1/6 the size of the previous 7 beads. How could Lu Ping feel at ease revealing his 8th layer blood condensation realm cultivation? Of course, what Lu Ping didn't know was that when most blood condensation realm cultivators formed a new condensed blood bead, it was only 1/6 the size of the original condensed blood bead. The 2 spirit beasts formed from sword lights tumbled in the sea, and the victor was decided in an instant. The green flood dragon's head and claws wrapped around its body, while the swordfish bit its back and swung its tail. However, if one looked closely, they would notice that every part of the swordfish's body seemed to have a mind of its own. It was able to adjust flexibly during the battle, and the entire swordfish looked very lively. On the other hand, Lu Ping's green flood dragon only had a pair of intelligent eyes and 4 sharp claws that were comparable to the swordfish's. The rest of its body was rigid, and it was quickly at a disadvantage as the swordfish devoured it bit by bit. Fortunately, the green flood dragon still had the Qinghan sword on its head. Before the green flood dragon collapsed, it forcefully sliced off 1/3 of the swordfish's body. The rest of the body was torn apart by the green flood dragon, leaving only a set of fish bones. Chapter 203. Although Lu Ping had also reached the realm of sentient swordsmanship, how could he compare to Taoist Jin Li's swordsmanship? Even so, Lu Ping's strength caused Taoist Jin Li to have a whole new level of respect for him. The fishbone collided with Lu Ping's cloudy sky. Lu Ping borrowed the force of the collision to fly southeast, once again leaving Miao Weidong and the others a distance behind. Taoist Jin Li took 2 steps forward, and the seawater beneath his feet surged up, sending him directly behind Miao Weidong and the others. His flying sword soared into the sky. It was still the same 600 or so sword lights, but this time, there was an additional flying sword, a flying sword of the transcendent grade. Zhou Weilong was directly shredded to pieces by the sword light. He Li Xin and Miao Weidong's faces were deathly pale, and they each took out a talisman treasure. Each talisman transformed into a giant net that covered the sky, catching a portion of the incoming sword lights. However, even more sword lights tore through the net. He Li Xin's defensive transcendent artifact was instantly broken, and one of her legs was separated from her body. She only had enough time to let out a shrill scream before she was drowned by the horde of demonic beasts. Miao Weidong's talisman transformed into a giant water lion that pounced towards the sword light. It was actually a beast talisman. This beast talisman was obviously of a higher grade than He Li Xin's talisman treasure. However, no matter what kind of talisman treasure it was still activated by a blood condensation cultivator, and was equivalent to an attack from a core forging enlightened master. Under the continuous attacks of a core forging enlightened master, the talisman was unable to withstand for long. In the blink of an eye, it was surrounded by hundreds of sentient sword lights, completely nibbling away at it. Fortunately, this beast talisman had bought Miao Weidong some time. After paying the price of having his protective astral energy destroyed, Miao Weidong was finally able to use the blood escape technique to temporarily escape the entanglement of the sword lights. He even managed to run ahead of Lu Ping. At this moment, Lu Ping's expression was solemn. What he was about to face was no longer a sentient sword light, but a silver flying sword, a transcendent artifact. Lu Ping formed a seal with his hands and shouted, "Go!" A foot-long pestle flew out from Lu Ping's hand, which he had been preparing for a long time. It flew straight towards Taoist Master Jin Li's silver flying sword. Taoist Master Jin Li sneered, "You actually have a transcendent artifact? But do you think that just because a blood condensation cultivator has a transcendent artifact, they can contend against a core forging cultivator? What a joke. Today I'll show you the true difference between the blood condensation and core forging realms." The silver flying sword suddenly became agile in the air. Instead of colliding with the pestle, it dodged and fiercely struck the side of the pestle. Lu Ping tried to command the pestle to avoid it, but found that it was difficult to control the pestle with his divine sense. The flying sword lightly hit the pestle from the side, and it immediately flew to the side. Master Jin Li laughed heartily as if mocking Lu Ping for overestimating himself. Lu Ping hardened his heart, and used all of his divine sense to control the pestle. His divine sense was rapidly being consumed, and Lu Ping couldn't care less. The pestle finally became agile again, and it turned around, finally catching up to the flying sword and smashing into its blade. Taoist Master Jin Li's flying sword had only been inscribed with a single treasure seal. Taoist Master Jin Li had high standards, so he naturally wouldn't place a second treasure seal on his own flying sword. This would reduce the power of the flying sword for no reason. However, this also meant that the flying sword's current power couldn't compare to that of the pestle's two identical treasured seals. Taoist Master Jin Li's expression finally turned serious. He coldly said, "I didn't expect your divine sense to be so outstanding." Ignoring his splitting headache, Lu Ping summoned the Azure Phoenix and continued to flee southwest. At this time they were already close to the buffer zone of the sea. The monster horde behind Lu Ping was growing larger and larger. From a bird's eye view, one would discover that the entire monster tide that was advancing west from north to south had been torn apart by Lu Ping's group. Moreover, the further south they went, the thicker the monster tide became. The Azure Phoenix knew that this was a moment of life and death. It let out a clear cry, and wind began to swirl around its wings. At the same time, it ignited with Azure Phoenix flames. After a short while, it had once again left Miao Weidong behind. Lu Ping sat on the Azure Phoenix's back, doing all he could to recover his exhausted divine sense. At this time, Lu Ping suddenly sensed that from behind the monster tide, there was an oppressive and powerful aura. The Azure Phoenix wailed under the pressure of this soaring demonic qi. Lu Ping knew that these tyrannical auras belonged to the Yao clan's enlightened masters hidden within the monster tide. However, Lu Ping didn't know why these enlightened masters didn't try to stop him. However, this was exactly what Lu Ping wished for. A blood-curdling scream rang out. Lu Ping didn't need to guess to know that it was Miao Weidong. How could he escape from the monster tide and Taoist Master Jin Li's pursuit? At this time, Lu Ping had already fled south to Xianling Sect's buffer zone. The Yao clan's enlightened masters hidden within the monster tide had finally begun to make their move. The demonic beasts that Lu Ping and the others had lured away were now part of the monster tide. However, There were still some demonic beasts that were in high spirits and didn't listen to the Yao clan's enlightened master's commands. Lu Ping had inadvertently split the demonic beasts from the northern monster tide. Starting from Xianling Sect's buffer zone, he made his way south and joined the monster tide. However, Lu Ping knew that if this continued, he would fall sooner or later. Taoist Master Jin Li had already caught up to him for the third time. At this time, Taoist Master Jin Li's expression was grim, completely devoid of his previous elegant demeanor. What Lu Ping didn't know was that after Taoist Master Jin Li's 2 attacks were countered by Lu Ping, the Yao clan's enlightened masters hidden within the monster tide had already sent out their divine sense, laughing and joking as they transmitted their thoughts. Taoist Master Jin Li was a rising genius of the North Sea monster tribe. Not only was his cultivation speed fast, but his swordsmanship was also superb. He was also the adopted son of Golden Flood Dragon Island's master and had reached the core forging stage at a young age. Because of this, the arrogant Taoist Master Jin Li had frequently sparred with other Yao clan's enlightened masters of the same realm. Many Yao clan cultivators of the same realm had been defeated by his sword, and they couldn't help but feel resentful towards him. Compared to humans, the Yao clan was more straightforward and less tactful. When the crowd saw that Taoist Master Jin Li was unable to take down a few human cultivators, they began to ridicule him. Lu Ping and the others flew past the crowd of Yao clan's enlightened masters. The enlightened masters didn't obstruct them and simply watched as Taoist Master Jin Li made a fool of himself. At this time, apart from Taoist Master Jin Li, Lu Ping's group had temporarily escaped the threat of the beast tide. However, Lu Ping's intuition told him that Taoist Master Jin Li's attack this time was clearly different from the previous 2 times. During the previous 2 attacks, Taoist Master Jin Li had mostly tried to understand and probe Lu Ping's strength. After all, Taoist Master Jin Li regarded Lu Ping as his future sword art whetstone. He was looking forward to fighting Lu Ping once he reached the core forging stage. However, after Taoist Master Jin Li's 2 attacks had failed, Lu Ping's strength made Taoist Master Jin Li feel increasingly uncontrollable. Coupled with the ridicule from the other enlightened masters, Taoist Master Jin Li finally decided to go all out and eliminate this potential unstable factor in the future while it was still in its infancy. At this time, after a long period of flight, Lu Ping had already flown past Xianling Sect's buffer zone and was about to reach the southeast of the northern sea islands. The Blue Phoenix, Lu Qin, had been flying at full speed and was beginning to show signs of fatigue. Lu Ping popped a spirit recovery pill into her mouth, then placed her into his spirit beast pouch. Beneath his feet, the magic cloud circle flashed, and he continued flying southwest. Seeing Taoist Master Jin Li and the beast tide chasing after him, Lu Ping's eyes lit up. The southeast of the northern sea islands was the Qiu family's sphere of influence on Qiu Island. It was also a possible secret base of the Overturned Sea sect. More importantly, Lu Ping knew that on a nameless, uninhabited island outside of Qiu Island, there was a secret transmission array of the Overturned Sea sect. Chapter 204. Lu Ping didn't know where the transmission array's destination was, but by using it, Lu Ping could at least shake off the pursuit of Taoist Jin Li and the demonic beast horde. At this critical juncture, he could only try to save a dead horse. A majestic sword Qi soared into the sky as Taoist Jin Li's life-flying sword once again produced over 600 sentient sword lights. Then, the flying sword transformed into a magic treasure phantom that was several tens of zhang long. The 600 sentient sword lights were all embedded within the phantom, transforming into a gigantic sword that pierced through the heavens and chopped down at Lu Ping. This was a moment of life and death. Lu Ping had already prepared a waterspout talisman in his hand and crushed it. This talisman contained the final waterspout spell that his teacher, Taoist Master Lu Xianling, had created when he was at the 7th layer of the core forging stage. 7 waterspouts lined up side by side in front of Lu Ping. Using a waterspout on the surface of the sea undoubtedly increased the spell's power by 30%. Lu Ping stretched out a finger, and the 7 waterspouts converged towards Taoist Jin Li. Taoist Jin Li's expression finally changed. Although using a talisman to deal with a core forging stage master wasn't very reliable, using a spell that was the pride of a late core forging stage master was naturally a different matter. If things went wrong, Taoist Jin Li might actually fail miserably and be seriously injured by this talisman. The majestic sky-piercing sword carried with it a momentum that could split mountains and split seas as it destroyed 4 of the waterspouts in succession. The sword itself suffered quite a bit of damage, but it still continued to cleave towards Lu Ping. Lu Ping knew that this was a moment of life and death. He poured all the magic power in his body into the azure sword. Lu Ping used the Thousand Snow Sword art, borrowing the strength of the windless seawater to create 3 waves. Each wave contained 18 sentient sword lights, and the other 36 sentient sword lights formed a sword wave that slammed towards the gigantic sword. As Lu Ping concentrated on controlling the sword art, the sword light within the waves changed once more. The 18 sentient sword lights suddenly became 36. 2/3 of the 162 sentient sword lights that Lu Ping had split into had reached the sentient realm. The 3 sword waves finally cleansed the psychic sword light from the giant sword, leaving only Taoist Master Jin Li's origin flying sword. It broke through the sword waves and struck the cloudy sky, like a sharp knife cutting through a high-quality cloth. As the gigantic sword flew towards him, Lu Ping began to retreat with all his might. However, how could a cultivator's speed compare to that of a flying sword? His protective stellar chi was quickly torn apart. Even though the meteorite origin of myriad poisons did its utmost to wear down the flying sword's true essence, the flying sword still managed to pierce through Lu Ping's golden inner armor. Lu Ping let out a long sigh of relief. Fortunately, he had reacted in time and used all sorts of methods. After the flying sword pierced through his inner armor, it was already an arrow at the end of its flight. In addition, Lu Ping had already consumed all 6 of his golden indomitable pills, causing his fleshly body to strengthen significantly. In the end, the flying sword managed to avoid being hit in a vital spot, but it only managed to cut an inch-deep wound on the right side of his chest. However, the pure sword chi of Taoist Jin Li contained within the flying sword still managed to injure Lu Ping's internal organs. Lu Ping spat out a mouthful of blood. With a wave of his finger, the magic cloud bracelet suddenly turned blood red. The blood escape technique, which he hadn't used in a long time, once again increased Lu Ping's speed to the limit. He flew in the direction of Autumn Cloud Island from Lu Ping's memories. Surrounded by the remaining 3 waterspouts, Taoist Jin Li finally managed to hold on until the end of the spell. Leaping out from the collapsing waterspouts, he was no longer as calm and composed as before. His face had turned golden from anger, and golden scales abruptly appeared on his body. However, there was no trace of Lu Ping in front of him. All that was left was a blood-red trail in the sky. At this moment, it was as if Taoist Jin Li could once again hear the whispers of the other Taoists hidden within the beast tide. The flames of fury that filled Taoist Jin Li's heart were finally ignited. His feet gathered together, transforming into an enormous golden fish tail. The fish tail swayed in the sea, leaving a golden trail in the air. Taoist Jin Li had already disappeared. Autumn Cloud Island was in the distance. Lu Ping's heart was filled with joy. As long as he could escape to the island, then when Taoist Jin Li and the beast tide arrived, Autumn Cloud Island's Taoist Jin Li and the other cultivators would naturally join forces to resist. He wouldn't have to fight alone and would be safe for the time being. However, Lu Ping's excitement didn't last long. A long, angry howl came from behind him. In the distance, a golden figure with a human body and the tail of a fish had caught up to him like lightning. From a distance, who else could it be but Taoist Jin Li? Lu Ping couldn't care less about Autumn Cloud Island, which was several hundred li away. Instead, he headed straight for the nameless, desolate island. When he reached the shore of the desolate island, Lu Ping pressed down on the seawater according to his memory. The center of the desolate island, which was originally filled with strange rocks, suddenly sank down. 2 7th-layer blood condensation cultivators suddenly leapt out from the sunken ground and shouted, "Who is it?" As Lu Ping walked over, he tossed a command token to one of them and said, "The overturned Sea Gang's Ocean Calming Hall's Hall Master has been ordered to return to the palace. Please activate the transmission array." The cultivator who received the command token confirmed that it was real and didn't think too much about it. He stepped aside and returned the command token to Lu Ping. After receiving the command token, Lu Ping calmly walked towards the center of the transmission array. Right at this moment, another cultivator suddenly said, "That's not right. He isn't the Ocean Calming Hall's Hall Master." What? The cultivator who received the command token earlier was stunned. The command token was obviously real. While he was still in a daze, Lu Ping's Qinghan sword had already beheaded him. The other cultivator cast out a mystic instrument and was about to attack the teleportation array, wanting to destroy it. But how could Lu Ping let him have his way? With a flip of his hand, he parried the mystic instrument with the Qinghan sword, and a water column shot out from the crystal bowl and bound the cultivator tightly. Before the cultivator could react, 2 blood jade needles pierced through the cultivator's heart core. Lu Ping arrived at the transmission array. 49 mid-grade spirit stones were embedded in the center of the array. At this moment, Taoist Master Jin Li had already seen Lu Ping land on the desolate island and was rushing over. Lu Ping placed the command token in the center of the transmission array and poured his transcendence energy into it, connecting the 49 spirit stones one by one. The transmission array immediately activated, emitting a faint white light. By this time, Taoist Master Jin Li had already flown near the desolate island. Seeing that Lu Ping was activating the transmission array, Taoist Master Jin Li became furious. His natal flying sword shot towards Lu Ping within the array. As the array activated, Lu Ping saw the storage pouches hanging from the waists of the two cultivators guarding the array. His heart stirred, he put them away. By this time, Taoist Master Jin Li's flying sword had already arrived. At this moment, the faint light of the transmission array suddenly brightened. In a flash of white light, there was no trace of Lu Ping within the array. Taoist Master Jin Li walked forward and looked at the two corpses on the ground. He opened his mouth and swallowed them, seemingly savoring the taste of the two cultivators. Then he circled the transmission array twice, deep in thought. Finally, as if he had made up his mind, he took out 49 mid-grade spirit stones from his storage belt and inserted them into the transmission array. Then he poured his true essence into the command token that Lu Ping had left in the center of the array. The array immediately emitted a faint light, and a moment later, Taoist Master Jin Li disappeared from the array in a flash of white light. After an unknown amount of time, Lu Ping finally finished the transmission process. He could feel solid ground beneath his feet. Lu Ping opened his eyes and looked around vigilantly. He was in the middle of an underground cavern. In front of the transmission array stood two 8th-layer blood condensation realm cultivators in bright silver robes. They were staring at Lu Ping with vigilance. "Who are you?" the cultivator on the left asked coldly. "I am the overturned Sea Gang's Peaceful Sea Hall's Hall Master. I was ordered to return to the palace to take care of an important matter." Lu Ping made up a story. The cultivator on the right's face relaxed, but he still asked sternly, "The palace hasn't issued any orders recently. Whose orders did you receive?" Lu Ping's expression was calm as he replied, "It wasn't an order from the palace. It was an order from the Qiu family's Grand Elder, Qiu Yuan. As for the contents of the order, I have no comment." "So that's how it is. In that case, senior apprentice brother has come down. It's more important to take care of this matter as soon as possible." The two cultivators finally stopped questioning Lu Ping and smiled. Lu Ping didn't reply. He slowly walked down from the transmission array and walked towards the exit. His figure slowly inched closer to the cultivator on the left. "By the way, which enlightened master is senior apprentice brother cultivating under?" the cultivator on the left asked casually when he saw Lu Ping walking towards him. "My teacher is the palace's." Lu Ping suddenly slowed down halfway through his sentence. Just as the cultivator on the left was about to finish his sentence, he heard the cultivator on the other side shout, "Senior apprentice brother Wu, be careful. How dare you!" When senior apprentice brother Wu heard his companion's warning, he turned around to look, but it was already too late. A flying sword had already pierced through his protective astral energy and pierced into his throat. When the other cultivator saw senior apprentice brother Wu being killed by Lu Ping in one move, he knew he wasn't Lu Ping's match. He hurriedly ran out of the cavern and opened his mouth to shout. Right at this moment, the cultivator suddenly panicked. He saw an iron seal descend upon his head without him noticing. The cultivator didn't have time to shout and quickly raised a protective magic artifact, the azure glass umbrella, over his head. However, he suddenly felt a boundless force coming from the umbrella, and the azure glass umbrella shattered into pieces. The cultivator looked up and only saw two large words, "Landslide," and then he lost consciousness. Landslide fell on the ground, shaking the cavern. The soil fell down. Fortunately, this cavern was obviously blessed by an array when it was opened, so it wouldn't collapse. Lu Ping packed up the two storage bags and turned to walk out of the cavern. At this moment, the transmission array behind him flashed again. Lu Ping's heart trembled. He naturally knew who was coming. Without any hesitation, Lu Ping's Qinghan sword slashed at the transmission array. After a series of crackling sounds, the glimmer that just appeared disappeared along with the collapse of the transmission array. Lu Ping looked at the collapsed transmission array and sighed helplessly. He probably couldn't go back in a short time. Then Lu Ping carefully walked out of the cavern. He didn't know what kind of world was waiting for him outside the cavern. Chapter 205. Lu Ping used the spirit concealment technique to hide his cultivation level to the 6th layer of the blood condensation realm. As soon as he emerged from the underground cave, he immediately smelled a faint smell of blood. Lu Ping's heart skipped a beat. He quickly used the mirage robe to conceal his tracks, and at the same time he used the invisible sword art to conceal his aura. Then he stood at the entrance of the cave and observed his surroundings. This was a mortal's courtyard. Lu Ping was currently in the backyard of the courtyard. The entire courtyard was littered with the corpses of 7 or 8 cultivators dressed in the same bright silver robes as the ones in the cave. The corpses had obviously been searched, and their storage items were nowhere to be found. Lu Ping turned around to look at the cave that he came out from, but he discovered that there was only a pile of hay there. There was no cave at all. What a brilliant illusion array. Lu Ping rubbed his chin with his fingers. There was no spirit vein here, so it was obviously an illusion array set up with an array disc. The cultivators who killed the silver-robed cultivators obviously did not discover this underground cave. However, these cultivators were too inexperienced. They even forgot to destroy the corpses. Lu Ping brandished the Qinghan sword and slashed at the pile of hay. The pile of hay was instantly torn apart like a painting, revealing a dark cave entrance. Lu Ping took out a small array disc that was embedded above the cave entrance. On it were densely engraved spirit sparking wires, forming a delicate but extremely complicated array formation. There were more than 100 low-grade spirit stones embedded in the disc, but they were all turned to dust by Lu Ping's sword strike. Lu Ping felt a headache coming on as he looked at the complicated array formation on the disc. He decided to give this to Hu Lili to study in the future. He didn't know if Hu Lili had safely returned to the sect. Yuan Zhan would definitely arrange for people to assassinate him and Hu Lili in order to prevent them from returning to Jinling. However, he didn't expect that Lu Ping had already seen through his plans. With Hu Lili's craftiness, it wouldn't be difficult for her to avoid these assassins and return to the sect safely. This was not a place to stay for long. Lu Ping thought about it and released Samling from the spirit beast bag. Samling spat out its forked tongue and sniffed around. After that, Lu Ping kept it inside the spirit beast bag and turned the corpses on the ground to ashes. He made it look like the murderer killed the silver-robed cultivator in the courtyard and accidentally found the hidden crypt. Finally, he destroyed the teleportation array in the crypt and escaped. After doing all this, Lu Ping turned into a blue escape light and disappeared from the courtyard. He didn't expect to be in the East Ocean. In his hand, Lu Ping held a jade slip that he obtained from the cultivator guarding the teleportation array in the crypt. Inside the jade slip was a map of the East Sea. At this time, Lu Ping's location was on a small island in the northern part of the East Sea. If this island wasn't deliberately marked on the map by the cultivator, Lu Ping was afraid that it would take some time before he could determine his location. Although this map was vast, it only marked small islands and above. Lu Ping was now going to the nearest medium-sized island called Majia Island. It was called Sanjia Island. As the name suggested, this island was jointly controlled by 3 cultivator clans. There were 3 cities built on the island. Most of the cultivators in the cities were rogue cultivators, so Lu Ping was not afraid of attracting attention. Sanjia Island occupied a large area, almost a quarter of the size of this medium-sized island. As soon as Lu Ping entered the city, the buildings and the bustling market immediately attracted Lu Ping's attention. Even though Lu Ping was quite knowledgeable, he still felt a little dizzy. A city managed by 3 medium-sized cultivator clans was almost as prosperous as Dikuan Island, which was managed by a large sect like Jinling. Moreover, according to the map, Sanjia Island was located at the northernmost part of the East Sea. Its geographical location was not ideal. From this, it could be seen that the legend of the Middle East Sea being the wealthiest in the outer seas was not a lie. At this time, a dozen or so cultivators, led by a peak blood condensation female cultivator, hurried through the city gate. 2 of them were seriously injured and could no longer move. The other cultivators used levitation techniques to carry them into the city. Lu Ping stepped aside and heard the cultivators beside him whispering, "Isn't that the young Miss of the Li family? I heard that Miss Li has reached the peak of the blood condensation realm and has been preparing to condense her core?" "That's right. Miss Li went out to sea this time to hone her cultivation. At the same time, she was looking for a few precious materials to prepare for condensing her core." "I see. But it seems like the process did not go smoothly." "That's right. The Li family's cultivators are all in the late blood condensation realm. 5 of them are in the 9th layer. I didn't expect 2 of them to be seriously injured and unconscious. It's not that easy to enter the endless sea. That's the territory of the monster race. From the looks of it, did Miss Li's group encounter a core forging monster cultivator? It's hard to say. Lu Ping listened to the discussions of the cultivators around him. He looked at the Li family cultivators in the distance with a playful expression. He stroked his chin with his left hand and patted the spirit beast pouch on his waist with his right hand to calm the agitated Samling inside. Lu Ping waved his hand and called over a minor repairs guide. Every city would have a few rogue cultivators with a low cultivation of minor repairs cultivation. They would act as guides for unfamiliar cultivators at the city gates to earn some spirit stones to improve their cultivation. The guide called over by Lu Ping led him to a cultivator's inn. This Li family inn was the property of the Li family in the Three Families city. There used to be a small spirit vein on the Three Families island. Later on, the Three Families divided the spirit vein into 3 branches and nurtured them meticulously. After hundreds of years, each branch returned to the level of a small spirit vein. The cultivators' inns were actually Immortals' caves. Because these Immortals' caves were located on the outskirts of the Zhang, Wang, and Li families' encampments, these Immortals' caves allowed the cultivators to absorb some of the spiritual qi from the Three Families' encampments. Through the conversation with the minor repairs guide, Lu Ping gained some understanding of the Three Families' island. Seeing that the minor repairs guide had brought him to the Li family's inn, Lu Ping asked in confusion, "Little Sima, why did you come here? Didn't the Zhang and Wang families' cultivator inns have more abundant spiritual qi because their Immortals' caves are cultivated better?" The guide Little Sima replied, "What Senior Lu said is correct. However, the Immortals' caves in these 2 inns have always been in short supply. Moreover, they are extremely expensive. If you are not familiar with them, you will not be able to rent one. Although the Li family's inn is also very popular, there isn't much of a rumor. As long as you have a spare Immortals' cave, you can buy one." Lu Ping nodded and followed Little Sima into the Li family's inn. The innkeeper quickly came forward and asked, "Sir, are you here to rent a cave?" Lu Ping was impressed by the innkeeper's straightforwardness, so he nodded. The innkeeper quickly called for a waiter to serve tea and said, "Our Li family's cave is divided into 3 classes. The outermost class is for early blood condensation cultivators, the middle class is for mid-blood condensation cultivators, and the innermost class is for late blood condensation cultivators." Lu Ping took a sip of the spiritual tea. This tea was made from the lowest grade of spiritual tea, so the spiritual qi contained in it was nothing special. The spiritual water used to make the tea was still acceptable, but it was not as good as the underground spring in Lu Ping's Huangli Island cave. The innkeeper was a discerning person. He saw Lu Ping take a sip of the tea, frowned and put down the cup. He knew that this was a big customer, so he asked, "Sir, are you here to rent a mid-grade cave?" Chapter 206. Heh, Lu Ping chuckled. "Can't I rent a high-grade cave abode from your clan?" The innkeeper's face lit up, but then he thought of something and hesitated. "I dare not hide this from you. According to the rules, high-grade caves are usually rented to late blood condensation cultivators in the city. I'm afraid it will be inconvenient for you to rent a mid-grade cave abode. Also, the latest batch of cave abodes will expire in a month's time. If you can't wait, you can rent a mid-grade cave abode first. Although the environment there isn't as good as a high-grade cave abode, it's still not bad." In a month's time? Lu Ping was a little hesitant. This time he was besieged by Miao Weidong's group and enlightened Master Jin Li. Although he managed to escape with his life, he also suffered serious injuries. He needed to find a place to recuperate. Moreover, because of the continuous battles, Lu Ping had consumed a lot of spiritual energy and healing herbs. His body had accumulated a large amount of medicinal toxins that he didn't have time to refine. If he stayed here for too long, it would inevitably affect his future cultivation. Therefore, a cave abode with sufficient spiritual energy could undoubtedly shorten the time it would take for Lu Ping to recuperate. At this time, a cultivator wearing a red cloak rushed into the inn. His gaze swept across Lu Ping, then he turned to the innkeeper and said, "Innkeeper, I have urgent matters to attend to. Please return the extra spirit stones quickly." "All right." Innkeeper Li was obviously familiar with this business. "You rented the cave abode for a year, 5 months. Our in use is half a year as the rental period. Anything less than half a year will be counted as half a year. Therefore, we can only return 1,200 spirit stones to you. Please accept this. We look forward to your next visit." The cultivator obviously had urgent matters to attend to. After taking the spirit stones and returning a token, He hurriedly left without looking back. From beginning to end, Lu Ping didn't say a word, acting like an irrelevant person. After the cultivator left, Lu Ping stared at the cultivator's back with an expressionless face. When the shopkeeper returned, he smiled and said, "That cultivator is clearly at the peak of the blood condensation realm. He must be renting a high-grade cave abode. Shopkeeper, why don't you rent this cave abode to me?" Manager Li was delighted when he heard this, but he still hesitated and said, "This doesn't conform to the rules of the clan. The clan has always rented the abodes uniformly." Lu Ping placed a storage bag on the table and pushed it towards the shopkeeper. "Shopkeeper Li, here are 3,000 spiritual stones. According to your family's rules, renting a high-grade cave dwelling for a year and an additional month will only cost me 2,600 to 700 spiritual stones. As for the fact that only late blood condensation cultivators can rent a high-grade cave dwelling, I believe it won't be a problem for Shopkeeper Li." Shopkeeper Li took the storage bag and scanned it with his divine sense. His face immediately lit up. As long as he reported to the clan that this high-grade cave abode had been rented by someone else for a year, who would know? He would be able to obtain 600 spiritual stones without anyone noticing. Lu Ping naturally knew what the shopkeeper was planning, but he didn't expose him. He only smiled as the shopkeeper passed the token to Lu Ping. Then he turned to Xiao Sima, who was following behind Lu Ping, and said, "You should know the location of the cave abode. You can bring this guest there." Xiao Sima nodded and said embarrassedly, "Senior Lu, please follow me." Lu Ping smiled and didn't say anything. He didn't expect this Xiao Sima to be a shill for the Li family inn. From the tone of their conversation, it seemed like this wasn't the first time Xiao Sima had introduced business to the inn. Lu Ping's cave abode was located in a large manor on a high ground in the west of the city. This manor was the Li family's residence. According to Xiao Sima, the Li family's spirit veins had been cultivated to the extent of 2 small-scale spirit veins. The concentration of spiritual energy in the high-grade cave abode was equivalent to that of 2 small-scale spirit veins. This was the Li family's way of gathering spiritual stones and befriending the rogue cultivators in the city. The other 2 clans also did the same, but the Zhang clan and the Wang clan's foundations were much stronger than the Li family's. Lu Ping rewarded Xiao Sima with 20 spiritual stones and told him to come back 5 days later. Xiao Sima was only in the 3rd layer of the blood refining realm, so 20 spiritual stones was a huge sum to him. He immediately patted his chest and promised Lu Ping that he would come back in 5 days. Lu Ping looked at Xiao Sima's back as he skipped away. He recalled the time when he was still in the blood refining realm and worked hard to earn spiritual stones to cultivate. He suddenly empathized with Xiao Sima's joy. Lu Ping didn't expect to meet someone he knew the first time he arrived at the East Sea. It was the cultivator in a red cloak who had just cancelled the lease of the cave abode. Lu Ping had a deep impression of him. This person was the hall master of the overturned sea gang's raging ocean hall, Hong Shikue. When Lu Ping returned from the demonic sea, he saw with his own eyes that Hong Shikue was accompanied by Yuan Shikong, who later died at his hands. Hong Shikue returned to the mysterious palace, through the teleportation formation on the deserted island outside of Autumn Cloud Island. Lu Ping didn't expect to bump into him here today. As he recalled the deaths of the silver-robed cultivators in the small manor, Lu Ping's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that Hong Shikue was in such a hurry to cancel the lease of the cave abode because he discovered something was amiss in the small manor? However, Miaoyi had already destroyed the corpses of the cultivators there, so he probably wouldn't discover that someone had used the teleportation formation to travel from the North Sea to the East Sea. He would only think that someone had ambushed the small manor, discovered the secret crypt, killed all the cultivators in the manor, and destroyed the teleportation formation. As for the cultivators from the overturned sea gang and the Chiu clan, they probably wouldn't discover anything either. After all, the beast tide following behind Lu Ping would destroy all evidence. In that case, only enlightened Master Jin Li would know the truth. However, it was likely that enlightened Master Jin Li was no longer in the North Sea. Lu Ping chuckled coldly. Although he didn't think that destroying the teleportation formation would be enough to kill enlightened Master Jin Li, if an accident were to occur during the teleportation, it would be more than enough for enlightened Master Jin Li to bear the consequences. However, he didn't know what the current situation in the North Sea was like, or if Hu Lily had already safely returned to Zhenling. The North Sea monster tribe had launched the beast tide several years in advance. This was clearly premeditated. The various sects of the North Sea were unprepared and would most likely suffer a great loss. However, he remembered that he, Miao Weidong, and the others had attracted a portion of the beast tide south, inadvertently helping Jinling weaken the power of the beast tide. However, the Xianling sect, Yujin sect, and Linggu sect to the south would be in deep trouble due to the increased strength of the beast tide. Especially since Lu Ping had directly disappeared from the vicinity of Autumn Cloud Island. The beast tide that was following closely behind could only vent its anger on Autumn Cloud Island. If things went badly, the overturned Sea Gang might suffer another heavy blow. Lu Ping was currently in the East Sea, so the situation in the North Sea had nothing to do with him for the time being. However, what surprised Lu Ping was that the murderers of the cultivators in the small manor were actually the first miss of the Li clan and her group. That day, before Lu Ping destroyed the corpses, he first asked Samling to collect the cultivator's aura that lingered in the air. He didn't expect that when he entered the city today, he would coincidentally bump into the first miss of the Li clan and her group, who had just returned from a hunt. Samling instantly discovered something. The aura on this group was exactly the same as that of the cultivators who had killed the cultivators in the small manor. Lu Ping had taken care of the aftermath for this first miss, but he didn't know if the cultivators had left a tracking spell on the first miss of the Li clan and her group before they died. However, Lu Ping saw that they didn't even think of destroying the corpses and evidence. It was obvious that they had no experience in this sort of thing. They probably didn't even realize that someone had left a mark on them. However, there should be a core forging cultivator in the Li clan, so these marks should be discovered and erased. This matter was getting more and more interesting. Lu Ping thought with great interest. The cultivators in the small manor, Hong Shikue, and the mysterious palace behind them were obviously a tyrannical force that spanned the East Sea and the North Sea. And a medium-sized cultivator family on this island actually had the guts to raid their stronghold. Lu Ping didn't expect that he would encounter such a strange thing as soon as he arrived in the North Sea. Lu Ping suppressed these thoughts from his mind. After he closed the cave residence, he found that there was indeed a faint spiritual aura inside. The most important thing about a spiritual vein was that it flowed slowly and imperceptibly. This was much better than using spirit stones to cultivate, and there was almost no waste. Lu Ping released all of his pets. Normally, when he wasn't in front of others, Lu Ping would never keep his pets in the spiritual beast pouch. Therefore, although Lu Ping's spiritual pets were mischievous, they were very intelligent and had a good relationship with Lu Ping. This closed-door cultivation lasted for 5 days. After he temporarily stabilized his injuries and refined the excess poison in his body, Lu Ping felt that his cultivation had improved a little. Lu Ping came out of his closed-door cultivation feeling refreshed. Xiao Sima was already waiting outside the cave residence's protective formation. He was so bored that he was kicking the pebbles on the ground to play with. When he saw Lu Ping come out, Xiao Sima's eyes lit up. He immediately jumped in front of Lu Ping and said, "Senior Lu, where are we going today? Bring me to all the places that sell spiritual herbs on the island." For some reason, Lu Ping felt a natural sense of closeness towards Xiao Sima. Perhaps it was because Xiao Sima's current experience was very similar to when he was young. Under Xiao Sima's guidance, Lu Ping swept through all the 500-year-old spiritual herbs that were being sold in the three family cities. Although he managed to harvest a few hundred stalks of different types of 500-year-old spiritual herbs, most of them were ordinary ones. There were even some rare spiritual herbs that were used as main ingredients that were not sold at all. However, this was still not bad. Ordinary spiritual herbs were easier to cultivate, but rare spiritual herbs usually had harsh conditions to grow. On an ordinary medium-sized island like this, once they appeared, they would probably be kept by the three families. Although this kind of large-scale shopping was expensive and could not be hidden from the attention of those who were observant, Lu Ping did not care about this. As a qualified alchemist, there were only 3 things he was concerned about every time he went to a new place. The first was to buy as many spiritual herbs as possible. After a cultivator entered the blood condensation realm, pills used for cultivation would become scarce. Other than the difficulty of concocting pills, the most important factor was the scarcity of spiritual herbs. Therefore, it was every alchemist's instinct to collect spiritual herbs regardless of the cost. Actually, the so-called regardless of the cost was only the opinion of outsiders. Once a cultivator passed the apprentice level and became a pill master, there was no such thing as a loss. The second thing was to collect as many pill recipes as possible to improve his alchemy skills. There were many kinds of spiritual herbs. If a pill master focused on refining a single type of pill until he died, not only would it be a waste of spiritual herbs, but it would also be difficult to improve his alchemy skills. The third thing was to collect all kinds of alchemy tools. This was the principle of the saying, to do a good job, one must first sharpen his tools. As for whether exposing his identity as an alchemist would cause others to covet him, that would be a joke. How could an alchemist's inheritance be obtained by robbing others? Moreover, every alchemist had a large network of cultivators. Moreover, the alchemist circle was quite strange and xenophobic. The biggest taboo was for outsiders to steal an alchemist's inheritance. Alchemists might look down on each other, but they would never allow others to look down on any alchemist. Every alchemist would receive sufficient respect in any faction. Chapter 207. Xiao Sima was dumbfounded as he watched Lu Ping spend tens of thousands of spirit stones in the blink of an eye. He looked at Lu Ping with sparkling eyes. Lu Ping looked at Xiao Sima, who was walking behind him like a robot. He patted his head and said, "Are you stupid? Hurry up and bring me to the next shop that sells spirit herbs." Xiao Sima immediately snapped out of his daze after being patted by Lu Ping. He said, "There's nothing else. I've already visited all the shops that sell spirit herbs." "That's all?" Lu Ping did a quick calculation. The spirit herbs he collected this time and the ones he originally had were only enough to concoct about 30 cauldrons of pills. Most of them were early and mid-stage blood condensation pills, which were of little use to him. Even with the late-stage blood condensation pills he had on hand, it was only enough for him to cultivate for half a year. Pills were always in short supply. Lu Ping asked again, "Are there any other places that sell spirit herbs on this island?" Xiao Sima scratched his head and said, "Yes, the mortal market. That's where rogue cultivators and mortals set up stalls. However, the spirit herbs there are more scattered, so it's time-consuming and laborious." The mortal market of the Three Families City was located in the southern part of the city. It was a place where cultivators and mortals lived together. Some rogue cultivators made a living by adventuring. They were willing to spend their time setting up stalls in order to sell their harvests for a few spirit stones. Many mortals knew the likes and dislikes of cultivators because they lived together with cultivators. They would often bring their spirit herbs, spiritual materials and other strange items to the market to sell, hoping that they would be lucky enough to reach the heavens in a single step. Previously, Lu Ping spent most of his time cultivating. Moreover, he had always been wealthy and didn't care about the cost when it came to alchemy. Hence, he didn't have to waste time searching for treasures in the marketplace. He would rather spend more spirit stones to buy from the shops in bulk. Hence, ever since Lu Ping entered the blood condensation realm, he rarely visited the mortal market. The mortal market had always been relatively lively. Many cultivators liked to wander around here when they were free. Most of them had the thought of finding treasures, hoping to get a big bargain. However, who would come here to set up a stall with bad eyesight? This kind of thing rarely happened. Some loose cultivators would even place some items that they were not sure of on the list. Once they encountered someone who could tell the difference, they would immediately raise the price and earn a lot. However, the cultivators were still very happy about it. Most of them were just holding on to a thread of hope. Lu Ping and Xiao Sima passed through the mortal market. Many of the people who recognized Xiao Sima saw Lu Ping behind him and they all recommended the items on their stalls to Lu Ping. It seemed like Xiao Sima often brought other cultivators who had just arrived at the Three Clans Island to find treasures. Ever since Lu Ping received the pill-forging master enlightened Liao Ding's jade slip, his knowledge of spirit herbs had improved by leaps and bounds. Not only were there many 500-year spirit herbs that Lu Ping did not know of, but there were also a large number of 1,000-year spirit herbs. There were even records of 3,000-year spirit herbs. This greatly widened Lu Ping's horizons. 7 Nights Flying Grass, one of the supplementary spirit herbs used to concoct early blood condensation realm pills. 20 spirit stones. This is 3 Autumn Dew Grass, a supplementary spirit herb used to concoct mid-blood condensation realm pills. 30 spirit stones at most. Strong Wind Grass. Not bad, a main ingredient used to concoct late blood condensation realm pills. 100 spirit stones. What? 200? 120 at most. Forget it if you don't want to sell. Lu Ping passed through the mortal market along the way. As long as it was a 500-year spirit herb, Lu Ping would not let go of a single one. He would quote a suitable price for every single one of them. When he came across an opportunist, Lu Ping would directly tell them the name of the spirit herb, its growing environment and its medicinal properties. If they continued to pester him, Lu Ping would leave immediately. At this time, the cultivators in the mortal market knew that they had met an expert. They no longer dared to try and deceive him. As Lu Ping swept through the market, he managed to obtain more than 200 500-year spirit herbs. Some of them were even the main ingredients used to concoct blood condensation realm pills. This made Lu Ping very satisfied. Many of the cultivators in the mortal market saw that Lu Ping was honest, fair, and not calculative. They all took out the spirit herbs they had accumulated in the past for Lu Ping to choose. Many cultivators even took out some spirit herbs they didn't recognize for Lu Ping to appraise. Lu Ping also told them the usage and age of the spirit herbs. In this way, Lu Ping managed to buy more than 100 500-year spirit herbs. In addition to the spirit herbs he had previously bought and the ones used to concoct late blood condensation realm pills, it was enough for Lu Ping to cultivate for a year without worrying about a lack of pills. At this time, laughter suddenly came from behind Lu Ping. "Erlai, you're here with your treasure again? Erlai, stop daydreaming all day long. Even the pill masters from the 3 major families said that those things of yours are just ordinary weeds. If you have the time, hurry up and think of a way to condense your blood." "That's right, Erlai. Although your brother risked his life to get these 3 grasses, he just wanted to exchange them for spirit stones to buy blood condensation pills for you to reach the blood condensation realm. You're always hugging those grasses and not letting go, delaying your cultivation. If your brother knows about this, he will only be sad." Lu Ping turned around and saw a shabby man walking towards Lu Ping with a jade box in his arms. Clearly, he had heard that an expert in identifying spirit herbs had appeared in the mortal market, so he hurried over. Lu Ping looked at Xiao Sima beside him. Xiao Sima was obviously familiar with this generation. He said, "Uncle Erlai's name is Li Erqiang, his brother is Li Daqiang, an early-stage blood condensation cultivator. For Uncle Erqiang to reach the blood condensation realm, Uncle Daqiang risked his life to hunt demonic beasts in the depths of the endless sea realm in exchange for spirit stones, hoping to buy blood condensation pills. Unexpectedly, Uncle Daqiang was heavily injured by the demonic beasts and died without leaving any words. When Uncle Erqiang was sorting out his belongings, he found 3 spirit herbs in jade boxes. Uncle Erqiang thought that Uncle Daqiang died because of these 3 spirit herbs, so he decided to sell them for blood condensation pills. However, 2 years have passed, and all the cultivators in the mortal market say that these 3 spirit herbs are worthless. Even the pill masters from the Zhang, Wang, and Li families were curious about these 3 spirit herbs and specially came to take a look. They said that they were ordinary weeds, but they looked strange. Uncle Erqiang didn't give up and said that they didn't know what was good for them. Li Erqiang came in front of Lu Ping and carefully handed the jade box to Lu Ping. His eyes were filled with anticipation and fear. He said nervously, "Senior, please take a look at these 3 spirit herbs." When everyone saw Li Erqiang hand over the jade box, they didn't say anything. Lu Ping took the jade box and looked around. The surrounding cultivators all stopped what they were doing and looked at Lu Ping. Many of them had anticipation in their eyes. It seemed that they also hoped that the spirit herbs that Li Daqiang risked his life to get were really treasures. They pitied Li Erqiang. There were also people who were looking at Li Erqiang mockingly, waiting to see him make a fool of himself. Most people shook their heads and didn't have much hope. Lu Ping opened the jade box. There were 3 pitch-black spirit herbs inside. Apart from their color, they looked ordinary. There wasn't a trace of spiritual energy fluctuation on the leaves and branches. They were no different from ordinary weeds. When everyone saw Lu Ping holding the jade box and not saying anything for a long time, they sighed. It seemed that even this expert senior did not know what this spirit herb was. It seemed that it really wasn't a spirit herb. When Li Erqiang saw Lu Ping's expression, the last trace of anticipation in his eyes disappeared. Xiao Sima looked at him with sympathy. "Wait." Lu Ping mumbled to himself, "So it's this kind of spirit herb." Lu Ping's face suddenly showed surprise. "I found a treasure." Chapter 208. When Lu Ping's words fell into Li Erqiang's ears, it was like throwing a dried-up fish into the water. His entire being was revitalized. The surrounding crowd also went into an uproar. They quickly quieted down and listened to Lu Ping's explanation. Lu Ping pondered for a moment and said, "This is a 1,000-year-old spirit herb required to concoct a special type of pill. Ordinary alchemists rarely use it, so not many people know about it. Right now, I need it to concoct a type of pill. If you have any requests, I will try my best to satisfy them." When the crowd heard that these 3 dark and swarthy weeds were actually 1,000-year-old spiritual herbs, cries of surprise rang out from all directions. They didn't expect that such a treasure would appear in the market where mortals and cultivators mingled. Hearing Lu Ping's words, the crowd quieted down. They looked at the dumbfounded Li Erqiang standing beside Lu Ping, waiting to see what request he would make. However, Li Erqiang was still immersed in great joy. He murmured, "It really is a treasure. Big brother, you saw it? It really is a treasure." Finally, someone recognized it. Seeing Li Erqiang's excited expression, Lu Ping was afraid that Li Erqiang wouldn't be able to shake off this huge emotional gap in a short period of time. If this went on for too long, it might even affect his cultivation. Lu Ping coughed. This cough was like a sudden clap of thunder in Li Erqiang's ears. Li Erqiang looked at Lu Ping gratefully and said, "If Senior didn't recognize these 3 spirit herbs today, this Junior might have given up on this treasure. Therefore, this Junior will listen to Senior's instructions." A 1,000-year-old spirit herb was too far away from a blood-refining realm cultivator, and it might even get him into trouble. Hence he said, "Fine, I won't take advantage of you." Although these 3,000-year-old spirit herbs are rare, ordinary cultivators wouldn't be able to recognize them. I'm the only one who needs them for a secret technique. I can see that you're already at the peak of the blood-refining realm, so you must be preparing to enter the blood condensation realm. There's a blood condensing pellet in this jade bottle. I'm sure it'll be enough to help you break through. When Li Erqiang heard the words blood condensation pill, his mind went blank. He took the jade bottle from Lu Ping in a daze. Only after Xiao Sima's reminder did he come back to his senses and nodded in thanks. Lu Ping waved his hand and said, "Hurry up and find a place to cultivate in seclusion. Before you reach the blood condensation realm, it's best if you don't leave the 3 family cities." Li Erqiang's unfocused gaze finally shook as if he understood something. He pretended to look around casually and saw a few people's eyes flickering. He couldn't tell what they were planning. Clearly, the people around him didn't hear Lu Ping's warning because Lu Ping had cast some spell. Li Erqiang hurriedly bowed to Lu Ping, then hurried out of the market. Not long after, Lu Ping noticed that a few cultivators who had set up stalls had unhurriedly packed up their things and were walking in the direction that Li Erqiang had left as if nothing had happened. Lu Ping shook his head and continued to stroll around the market under Xiao Sima's guidance. With Li Erqiang as an example, quite a few people in the market took out some of their treasures for Lu Ping to appraise. However, Lu Ping didn't encounter any more surprises like Li Erqiang's. Even so, Lu Ping still managed to find a few stalks of 500-year-old spirit herbs, which could be considered a small harvest. However, even so, the few people who had their spirit herbs appraised were extremely grateful. These spirit herbs were too obscure, ordinary cultivators and even pill refiners wouldn't be able to recognize them. Moreover, this place was located in a remote area, and there might only be 1 or 2 pill refiners in the 3 great clans. Normally, these pill refiners were very elusive, so how could anyone fawn over them? In the blink of an eye, a day had passed. Lu Ping brought Xiao Sima back to his cave abode with an excited expression. No wonder so many cultivators liked to stroll around the mortal market. The feeling of hunting for treasures was indeed wonderful. Moreover, as a pill refiner, he had a deep understanding of the various spirit herbs. The respectful gazes of the rogue cultivators around him greatly satisfied his vanity, making him feel a little high-spirited and high-spirited. When Lu Ping thought of this, he couldn't help but smile. It seemed that there wasn't much difference between cultivators and mortals. He gave Xiao Sima 10 spirit stones as wages, and Xiao Sima repeatedly begged Lu Ping to look for him if there was anything he needed help with. Seeing Xiao Sima leave happily after obtaining his consent, Lu Ping smiled and returned to his cave abode to cultivate in seclusion. The last 5 days of cultivation had only allowed Lu Ping to relieve the depletion of his transcendence energy and mental exhaustion caused by the continuous battles over the past few days. However, as Lu Ping's cultivation became more and more profound, this kind of situation rarely occurred during battles. However, once it did occur, he wouldn't be able to completely recover in a short period of time. Lu Ping swallowed a medicinal pill and began to cultivate qi on the spirit-gathering praying mat. The powerful restorative abilities of the North Sea Wave Listening Technique wrapped around the spiritual qi around Lu Ping's body and refined it bit by bit into his bloodline to replenish the damage it had suffered. At this moment, Lu Ping's bloodline was like a hungry Taotai, devouring all the spiritual qi and refining it into strands of pure transcendence energy. However, every time Lu Ping's cultivation technique circulated to the bloodline on the right side of his chest, a sharp sword qi would appear out of thin air and stab at Lu Ping's bloodline, obstructing the circulation of the cultivation technique. This caused Lu Ping's circulation of the North Sea Wave Listening Technique to slow down for a period of time. Lu Ping's complexion became somewhat gloomy. He hadn't expected that Taoist Master Jin Li's sword qi would be so troublesome to deal with. That day, Lu Ping had originally believed that Taoist Master Jin Li's sword qi would only cause him minor injuries after being weakened by him. However, in the past few days, every time Lu Ping circulated his cultivation technique to cultivate, a sharp sword qi would appear near the wound on his right chest. Not only did this prevent the wound from healing, it also affected Lu Ping's cultivation. At the same time, this sort of pain, as if one's flesh was being cut, was truly unbearable. He had been careless. Lu Ping fiercely smacked his lips. Worthy of being a magic treasure, worthy of being a core-forging Taoist master. Taoist Master Jin Li had left this sword qi in Lu Ping's body. Aside from affecting Lu Ping's cultivation, it also had another function: to leave a mark on Lu Ping's body. Even if Lu Ping ran out of Taoist Master Jin Li's perception range, Taoist Master Jin Li could still use this remnant sword qi to quickly find Lu Ping. He had to expel this sword qi from his body as soon as possible. For the next 3 months, Lu Ping once again returned to his previous state of arduous cultivation. Every day apart from cultivating he would refine pills. Every half a month or 20 days he would take Xiao Sima on a stroll around the 3 family cities' shops and mortal markets, sweeping through all the 500-year-old spiritual plants. However, it was clear that apart from the 3 black spiritual plants from last time, Lu Ping wouldn't have the same harvest as his first purchase. However, Lu Ping didn't really care. On the other hand, the people in the mortal markets all viewed Lu Ping as an expert. Often, people would ask Lu Ping for advice on spiritual plants. Lu Ping didn't refuse any of them, answering each and every one of them. These rogue cultivators all benefited greatly, and were all willing to sell the spiritual plants they harvested from the sea to Lu Ping. It wasn't easy for rogue cultivators to cultivate. Most of the time they only had incomplete inheritances. To these cultivators, any kind of cultivation knowledge was precious. At the very least, these explanations about spiritual plants could help them gain more benefits when they were exploring the wild, and in turn they could exchange them for more cultivation resources. What Lu Ping didn't realize was that while he was explaining to others, Xiao Sima, who was following behind Lu Ping, was quietly listening to him. Every time Lu Ping returned to his cave, Xiao Sima would change his relaxed expression from before, and instead he would hurriedly rush back to his residence. Lu Ping smiled and didn't mind. The transcendence energy in Lu Ping's body flowed along with his bloodline, like a surging river. The surging torrent split mountains and valleys as it advanced towards its target. However, along the way there would always be a sword aura that was like a giant rock that was stuck in the middle of the river, and the torrent had no choice but to go around it. Then, after being continuously scoured by the torrent, the edges of the giant rock were finally smoothed out, and then it started to loosen. Today the torrent finally launched its final attack on it. The giant rock swayed and finally moved from its position bit by bit. In the end it was carried by the surging torrent and rushed downstream. Lu Ping drew out a stream of clear water from the crystal glass bowl. Under Lu Ping's command, the clear water flowed around him like a river, and at the same time, it performed the circulation of the bloodline in Lu Ping's body. Suddenly, a wave splashed out from the river, and the wave instantly turned into a small sword in the air. Like a small fish that was wagging its tail, it left the river and began to swim around Lu Ping. Then a second wave appeared, a third, a fourth, until the 81st small swordfish appeared vividly in front of Lu Ping. There was still a wave splashing out from the river, but this time the wave only turned into a water sword, and it was not as agile as the swordfish. It only spat out a sharp light, and it guarded Lu Ping's surroundings. After a total of 324 waves splashed out, the small river suddenly seemed to become docile. It flowed smoothly and no more waves splashed out. However, it now had an indomitable will. Lu Ping looked at the 300 or so sword lights in front of him. At the same time, 81 of them had reached the level of spiritual communication, and he smiled in satisfaction. This was a blessing in disguise. After half a year of bitter cultivation, not only had he refined the sword qi that Taoist Jin Li had left in Lu Ping's body to cause trouble, but Taoist Jin Li's cultivation technique was actually the same as Lu Ping's. There were many things he could use as a reference. When Lu Ping refined this sword qi, he actually gained some understanding of the realm of his swordsmanship, and his swordsmanship level rose by another level. However, this improvement in his cultivation wasn't that great. Although he didn't lack alchemical pills, Lu Ping used his divine sense to observe that the 8th condensed blood pearl had finally grown to a third of the size of the other 7 condensed blood pearls. He still felt somewhat helpless. After all, this condensed heart pearl was a cheap trick. Even though it was said to be harmless, it actually prolonged the cultivation time. When Lu Ping came out of seclusion, he saw a glittering golden sound transmission talisman floating above the protective formation outside the cave. This was actually no different from an ordinary sound transmission talisman, except that it was a bit more extravagant and formal, and was usually used as an invitation. Lu Ping stretched out his hand and took the invitation, sending his divine sense into it. After a while, Lu Ping narrowed his eyes in amusement and muttered to himself, "An invitation from the Li clan? This is rather interesting." Chapter 209. Lu Ping knew that the Li family had guessed his identity as an alchemist. In the 3 months since Lu Ping entered the three family cities, he didn't try to hide his tracks. That day at the mortals' market, Lu Ping found a 1,000-year-old spiritual herb and exchanged it for a blood-condensing pill. This news caused quite a stir among the rogue cultivators. In addition, Lu Ping frequently visited the shops selling spiritual herbs and bought 500-year-old spiritual herbs without restraint. This further confirmed Lu Ping's identity as an alchemist. Lu Ping called Xiao Sima over and asked him about what happened on the three families' islands. From Xiao Sima, he found out that a group of cultivators wearing bright silver robes had arrived at the three family cities and were warmly received by the Wang family's patriarch. When Lu Ping heard this news, he squinted his eyes. No one knew what he was thinking. Then Xiao Sima felt that the Lu Ping beside him had suddenly changed. As for what changed, Xiao Sima couldn't tell. He only felt that Lu Ping seemed to have become more powerful. Lu Ping used the spirit concealment technique to raise his cultivation from the 6th layer to the 7th layer. Then, under Xiao Sima's guidance, they walked towards the Li family's residence. The Li family's patriarch, Li Maolin, personally came out to welcome Lu Ping. After all, the other party was a core forging cultivator. Even if Lu Ping was an alchemist, it wasn't worth it for a core forging cultivator to personally welcome him. Lu Ping hurriedly saluted. "Junior Lu Jiao. How could I dare to trouble Senior Li to personally welcome me?" Li Maolin brought Lu Ping to the living room and pointed to the two people already waiting in the hall. "This is my daughter Li Xiaozhu. I believe Lu Xiaoyu already knows the other one." Lu Ping had seen this Li family's young miss when he first arrived at the three family city, but he pretended to be meeting her for the first time. On the other hand, the Li family's head shopkeeper Li looked a little flustered. But when he saw Lu Ping, especially when he noticed that Lu Ping was at the 7th layer of the blood condensation realm, he heaved a sigh of relief, as if a burden had been lifted from his heart. Seeing this, Li Maolin smiled but didn't say anything. He ordered for the tea to be served, and after dismissing the servants he said, "Lu Xiaoyu is an alchemist, right?" Lu Ping didn't expect the patriarch to be so straightforward, so he replied bluntly, "That's right." Seeing that Lu Ping didn't deny it, Li Maolin wasn't surprised. Instead he said, "It's a bit rude to invite Lu Xiaoyu this time, but my daughter is about to break through to the core forging stage. I hope you can help my daughter refine a pill that can help her condense her core." Lu Ping picked up the bowl of tea on the table, took a sip and said, "Senior Li must be joking." According to this junior's knowledge, all pills that can help condense a core are half-step core forging stage pills. This junior is just an ordinary alchemist, so there's nothing I can do. Senior, please find someone else. I believe that with the Li family's strength, it's not impossible to invite an alchemy grandmaster. Lu Ping's refusal wasn't out of Li Maolin's expectations. Instead he said, "I won't hide it from little friend. Little friend's situation in the three family cities is not only known to my Li family, but also to the other two families. Little friend not only collected 500-year-old spirit grasses, but also bought a few 1,000-year-old spirit grasses from the shops in the three family cities at a high price. Especially when little friend bought the unknown 1,000-year-old spirit grasses from rogue cultivator Li Erqiang, you said it would be of great use to little friend. If little friend didn't have the confidence to refine a half-step core forging stage pill, how could you do this?" Lu Ping knew that his identity as an alchemist had long been discovered, but he didn't think that on the day he bought the 3 spirit grasses from Li Erqiang, his excited words would cause the Li family's patriarch to guess so much. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. Li Maolin saw that Lu Ping didn't speak, so he said, "I ask little friend to lend a hand to my daughter. My Li family will reward you handsomely." Lu Ping knew that a core forging stage cultivator had already given him enough face. If he continued to decline, he would offend the Li family. The 3 family cities were the Li family's territory. If that happened, whether or not he would be able to leave this place would be a problem. Lu Ping smiled bitterly and said, I'm very curious. With the Li family strength, it is entirely possible to invite an alchemy grandmaster, or even an alchemist who has reached the core forging stage. After all, with divine sense, the success rate of refining a half-step core forging stage pill will increase by a lot. Li Maolin saw that Lu Ping didn't refuse, and his expression relaxed. Even Li Xiuzhu and the shopkeeper beside him had a happy expression on their faces. Hearing Lu Ping's words, Li Maolin smiled bitterly and said, I ask little friend to forgive me. My daughter has her own difficulties. She can't wait that long and I can't invite an alchemy grandmaster to help. Lu Ping nodded and didn't pursue the matter. Instead he said, although this junior was lucky enough to refine a half-step core forging pill, due to the limitations of my skill, the success rate is extremely low. I'm afraid that senior will have to prepare more spiritual herbs. Li Maolin nodded and said, of course. The family has already prepared 3 sets of spiritual herbs. As long as little friend can refine 2 pills, it will be fine. Even if little friend fails, my Li family will not make things difficult for little friend. After sending off Lu Ping, the shopkeeper cautiously stepped forward and asked, Big brother, isn't this a bit too hasty? After all, the other party is only a blood condensation stage cultivator. I'm afraid it will be extremely difficult for him to refine a half-step core forging pill. Li Maolin didn't answer the shopkeeper's question. Instead, he turned to the young lady beside him and asked, Zhu, what do you think? Hearing this, Miss Li said, there's not enough time. No matter what, we have to gamble. Li Maolin sighed and said, yes, the Jianghu family has always been the most powerful family in Sanjia City. The Wang family and the Li family have always worked together to keep them in check. I didn't expect the Wang family to have dealings with the Crystal Palace. This really caught my Li family off guard. Miss Li said in a low voice, it's my daughter's fault for causing trouble for the family. If I wasn't on Ma Family Island, Li Maolin raised his hand and stopped Miss Li from speaking. He said, this matter isn't your fault. If it wasn't for this, our Li family wouldn't have known that the Wang family has already sided with the Crystal Palace. This can be considered a blessing in disguise. Moreover, the Wang family has sided with the Crystal Palace. The Jianghu family should be more anxious than us. Li Maolin paused and turned to look at shopkeeper Li. He said, if you spent more time on cultivation, you would have reached the late stage of the blood condensation realm by now. Do you think our Li family still needs a few hundred spirit stones? Shopkeeper Li smiled bitterly. Big brother, I know my own strength. Reaching the mid-stage of the blood condensation realm is already my limit. I never expected to advance to the core forging realm. The only thing I have left is to earn spirit stones. Li Maolin waved his hand. He knew that this brother of his was mischievous, so he didn't want to argue with him anymore. Instead, he ordered, try to collect as many herbs as possible to prevent this person from failing 3 times. 1 month from now, the Sanjia Island's underground trade fair will be held. At that time we must exchange all the herbs we have. Don't be stingy with spirit stones. We can always earn more spirit stones. As long as our Li family has another core forging realm cultivator, the situation on Sanjia Island will be stable for a while. Miss Li saw that her father was tired and said worriedly, Father, should we inform the ancestor? Nonsense! Li Maolin shouted. Then he lowered his voice and said solemnly, don't mention this again. Remember, our Li family is our Li family. There has never been any ancestor. If this matter is spread, our Li family will be annihilated. If we delay it, we won't be able to atone for our sins even if we die 10,000 times. Shopkeeper Li and Miss Li didn't dare to say anything. Li Maolin thought for a moment and said, you can invite Lu Jiao to the auction. He is a pill refiner, so his standards are higher than yours. Consider it our Li family will give him some face. At this time, Lu Ping had already returned to his cave abode. He was holding a jade slip in his hand. 7-step mark pill. This is a top-grade pill that can increase the success rate of pill condensation. Chapter 210. Naturally, Lu Ping didn't know that he had been dragged into the conflict between the 3 clans. At this moment he was concentrating on figuring out the pill recipe he got from the Li clan that could increase the success rate of pill condensation. The recipe for this 7-step marked pill was even more complicated than the heart-dissolving pill that Lu Ping had concocted. The heart-dissolving pill required a total of 49 types of spiritual herbs. Among them, there were 24 types of 1,000-year spiritual herbs. It was only 3 types of spiritual herbs away from the minimum requirement of 27 types of 1,000-year spiritual herbs for core forging realm pills. However, the 7-step marked pellet required 26 types of 1,000-year-old spirit herbs, which was almost the same as a core forging realm medicinal pellet. This was undoubtedly a severe challenge for Lu Ping's alchemy skills. The reason why Lu Ping agreed to concoct the 7-step marked pill was not only because of the Li clan's patriarch's request, but also because Lu Ping was interested in this pill that could increase the success rate of pill condensation. Now that he was at the 8th layer of the blood condensation realm, the core forging realm wasn't too far away for him. He needed to accumulate enough to break through to the core forging realm in the future. Moreover, as an alchemist he was naturally interested in collecting all kinds of pill recipes. This was also the professional conduct of a qualified alchemist. Of course, the most important thing was that Lu Ping had a trump card up his sleeve. The mysterious leaf grass. This was a 1,000-year spiritual herb that Lu Ping had exchanged from Li Erqiang for a blood-dissolving pill. In order to strengthen his divine sense, Lu Ping had chosen 3 methods. The first was the soul-nurturing technique which Lu Ping had been practicing all this time. The third was the soul-splitting technique. After Lu Ping had exchanged the earth core flame for the soul-nurturing wood, he had been using the soul-nurturing wood and enduring the pain of his divine sense splitting. However, Lu Ping had to give up on the second method. It wasn't because the second method was difficult to practice, nor was it because the soul-expanding pill was difficult to concoct. It was because the main ingredient of the soul-expanding pill was the mysterious leaf grass. This 1,000-year spiritual herb was extremely rare, comparable to some 3,000-year spiritual herbs. Ever since Lu Ping became an alchemist, he had been searching for this spiritual herb. He had even asked his master, Lu Xianling, and his second senior apprentice sister, Li Xianru. However, he had no results. He had originally given up, but unexpectedly, he had the fortune to find this spiritual herb in the 3 clans. With the mystic leaf cloak grass, Lu Ping would be able to concoct the spirit expansion pellet. It was also a half-step core forging realm medicinal pellet, but it only required 15,000-year-old spirit herbs. It was slightly more difficult to concoct than the golden resilience pellet, but far from being comparable to the heart-dissolving pellet. As for the other herbs, Lu Ping had already collected them. It was only because of the mysterious leaf grass that he had delayed until now. The concoction of the spirit expansion pellets went smoothly. When Lu Ping was concocting the golden invincible pellets, due to his improved purification technique, the success rate of concocting golden invincible pellets had increased to 4 per cauldron. Although concocting the spirit expansion pellets was harder than concocting the golden invincible pellets, Lu Ping's cultivation base was now at the 8th layer blood condensation realm. With this increase and decrease, the success rate of concocting the spirit expanding pill remained at 4 pills. 3 stalks of mysterious leaf grass produced a total of 12 spirit expanding pills. However, the number of 1,000-year spiritual herbs that Lu Ping had collected was decreasing. The spirit expanding pill was as black as ink. It looked as if it wanted to swallow the surrounding light. Lu Ping wrapped the spirit-expanding pill with his divine sense. The spirit-expanding pill was like a magnet, crazily swallowing the surrounding divine sense into the pill. As Lu Ping's divine sense continued to enter the pill, the spirit-expanding pill gradually shrunk as if it had melted. However, through his divine sense, Lu Ping knew that the spirit-expanding pill hadn't melted. Instead, as Lu Ping's divine sense entered the pill, it gradually transformed into a transparent ball of divine sense. When the spirit expansion pellet turned transparent due to the influx of divine sense, or rather an invisible divine sense ball, the pellet suddenly exploded and completely fused with Lu Ping's divine sense. Lu Ping immediately felt his divine sense's strength increase by 100 feet. His divine sense was now stronger than before, and his divine sense could reach up to 10 feet. Lu Ping carefully felt the newly increased divine sense. The entire process took about 4 hours and the results were not bad. However, Lu Ping knew that this was because of the initial effects of the spirit-expanding pill. By the second pill, it was already good enough for his divine sense to increase by 70 to 80 meters. As the spirit-expanding pill continued to be consumed, the effect would become weaker and weaker until it was negligible. Half a month later, when Lu Ping received an invitation from the Li clan to participate in the underground auction in the 3 family cities, Lu Ping had already consumed all 12 spirit-expanding pills. The strength of his divine sense had expanded by 30 meters, allowing Lu Ping to have a complete understanding of the area around him that was more than 200 meters around him. On this day Lu Ping called Xiao Sima over. While listening to him talk about the interesting things that had happened in the three family cities, he continued the process of sweeping up the spiritual grasses in the three family cities. Recently, the most powerful Zhang clan still hadn't changed much. On the other hand, the Li clan's activities had decreased recently. Even if there were cultivators that went out, they would be very careful with their words and actions, as if they were afraid of causing trouble. The Wang clan was the most active during this period of time. They often held large banquets and invited some of the famous rogue cultivators and small gangs in the three family cities. It was said that the Wang clan's patriarch had visited the Li clan a few times. Along the way, Lu Ping listened to Xiao Sima talk about the various things that had happened in the three family cities recently. Not long after, the two of them arrived at the mortal market. However, they found that the market was very noisy. Lu Ping raised his head and looked at the market. He saw a cultivator wearing a silver robe, accompanied by a young man and a middle-aged man. They were arguing with a rogue cultivator who had set up a stall in the market. When Lu Ping saw the silver robe, he wanted to avoid it. However, there were already many cultivators in the market who saw Lu Ping's figure. They all shouted, "Senior Lu is here, Senior Lu is here." Everyone looked at Lu Ping. The three people led by the silver robe also stopped arguing and looked in Lu Ping's direction. Seeing that he couldn't avoid them, Lu Ping brought Xiao Sima into the market. As soon as Lu Ping entered the market, Li Erqiang, who had already reached the blood condensation realm, appeared out of nowhere. He handed 2 jade boxes to Lu Ping and said, "Immortal Master Lu, do you think these 2 spirit herbs can be used?" Lu Ping opened the boxes and heard Xiao Sima muttering behind him, 7 stalks of 500-year-old jade containing grass and 5 stalks of blood night grass. Lu Ping turned to look at Xiao Sima. "You recognize these 2 spirit herbs?" Xiao Sima blushed. "I've been following Immortal Master for a while now. I've seen many spirit herbs, so I recognize them." Xiao Sima's eyes were filled with apprehension. Lu Ping didn't deny it. He turned to Li Erqiang and said, "You've just reached the blood condensation realm. This is the time to consolidate your cultivation and advance by leaps and bounds. Why aren't you cultivating in seclusion? Why are you adventuring in the endless sea realm?" Li Erqiang smiled but didn't answer. Lu Ping knew that Li Erqiang was taking care of Li Daqiang's 2 children. It was said that these 2 children were quite talented in cultivation. Lu Ping guessed that Li Erqiang was in desperate need of cultivation resources, so he said, "These 7 stalks of jade containing grass are the main ingredients for the late blood condensation realm jade containing pill. It's what I need right now." These 5 stalks of blood night grass aren't the main ingredients, but they're indispensable to many blood condensation realm pills. They're worth quite a bit. Take them first and consolidate your cultivation. With your blood condensation realm cultivation, you should have no problem providing for your 2 children's cultivation. Li Erqiang clenched the things that Lu Ping handed to him tightly. Although he was extremely excited, he didn't show it on his face. He only bowed to Lu Ping and hurried back to his courtyard. When he was sure that no one was around, he opened his tightly clenched hands and revealed a small storage pouch. Li Erqiang sent his divine sense into the pouch and found a bottle of China root pills and 2 mid-grade spirit stones inside. Wang Yishan was furious. It wasn't easy for him to invite a distinguished guest of his family to visit the 3 family cities. He even invited his family's alchemist to accompany him. This distinguished guest was also an alchemist and could even refine half-step core forging realm pills. If he could win the favor of this half-step grandmaster and refine a few pills that could help him break through to the core forging realm, he would become the 4th core forging realm cultivator in his family. He would become the Wang clan's first successor and the #1 expert of the younger generation in the 3 family cities. This would be the first time he would be able to trample on the arrogant Li Xiuzhu. Even the Zhang siblings, Zhang Xingqian and Zhang Xingquan, would have to look down on him. Wang Yishan was originally secretly applauding his plan, but the distinguished guest suddenly became interested in the mortal market of the 3 family cities. Wang Yishan didn't understand why an esteemed alchemist would want to go to a place where rogue cultivators gathered. Although the 3 family cities weren't as prosperous as the markets on the large islands, the city's facilities were quite complete. Wang Yishan couldn't figure it out. Seeing that his alchemist didn't object, he could only attribute it to the eccentricity of alchemists. Then, when he arrived at the mortal market, Wang Yishan really realized how hateful these rogue cultivators were. Each of them pretended to be knowledgeable, commenting on the spirit herbs in their hands, as if they were sitting on the ground and raising the price. Could it be that they were more knowledgeable than the 2 alchemists beside him? Seeing the 2 alchemists' repeated attempts to purchase the spirit herbs from these rogue cultivators to no avail, Wang Yishan felt that his family's distinguished guest was giving him too much face. Although the distinguished guest looked unhappy, he was still patiently bargaining with these unruly people, obviously showing respect for his identity. Wang Yishan thought that his opportunity had come. Why should he be polite to these rogue cultivators? As long as he reprimanded these rogue cultivators with his identity as the Wang family's eldest young master, letting these unruly people know who was the master of the three family cities, would they not obediently sell their spirit herbs to his family's distinguished guest? In this way, not only would he show his dignity and the status of his family, he would also be able to leave a good impression on the distinguished guest in front of him. Thinking of this, Wang Yishan suddenly felt that he was wise and powerful. Things were often unexpected. Just as Wang Yishan put on the dignity of the master of the three family cities, the Wang family's eldest young master, and loudly reprimanded an old mortal who was unwilling to sell his spirit herbs, the rogue cultivators who had set up stalls in the mortal market actually accused the Wang family of taking advantage of their power to bully others, and that the price of the spirit herbs was far lower than the actual value of the spirit herbs. The Wang family's eldest young master's attempt to show his image as the master of the three family cities had failed, and instead he was accused by a group of unruly people, causing him to fly into a rage out of humiliation. Since when did rogue cultivators have such great courage? Since when did rogue cultivators have such a deep understanding of spirit herbs? The Wang family's eldest young master immediately argued with the rogue cultivators in the market. The Wang family's alchemists who had come together with him wanted to stop them, but it was already too late. The Wang family's eldest young master, whose face was flushed with anger, was determined to restore his image in front of everyone, but he did not know that his image was getting worse and worse. Chapter 211. The Wang family's pill master didn't expect his young master to stoop to the same level as a rogue cultivator in the mortal market. It was too shameful, but he couldn't persuade the young master to stop. He wanted to leave, but there was still a distinguished guest of the Wang family nearby. The Wang family's pill master felt inferior to this esteemed guest. He had just learned how to refine late blood condensation pills, but this esteemed guest was only in his 30s. Despite being a late blood condensation cultivator, he could already refine half-step core forging pills. After interacting with this esteemed guest for the past few days, the Wang family's pill master felt that his knowledge and experience were far inferior to this esteemed guest. The Wang family's pill master saw the distinguished guest watching his eldest young master quarrel with a group of rogue cultivators with a smile on his face. He had no choice but to accompany the distinguished guest awkwardly. From time to time he would say a few words to mediate, but it often had the opposite effect. At this time someone in the market shouted, "Senior Liu is here. Master Immortal Liu is here." The rogue cultivators who were quarreling with eldest young master Wang dispersed one after another. They took their harvest from their stalls and ran towards the young man who brought a child into the market. The one in front was the person who the honored guest had previously wanted to purchase the spirit grass but was unable to obtain it. Later on he had helped his young master quarrel with him. The man exchanged a few words with the newcomer before handing over all of the spirit herbs that the esteemed guest had taken a fancy to the young cultivator. Then, he took something that the young cultivator had given him and hurriedly left in a somewhat excited manner. Grand Wang young master was instantly enraged. He was about to step forward and argue with the young man, but he was suddenly stopped by someone. When Grand Wang young master turned his head to look, it was the distinguished guest who stopped him. Grand Wang young master's exasperated expression immediately changed. He forced a smile and said, "Brother Liang, why are you doing this?" The silver-robed cultivator shook his head and didn't say anything. He walked towards the young man. Lu Ping was looking at the spirit herbs in the hands of an old mortal cultivator. The silver-robed cultivator suddenly walked towards him and said, "It seems like this fellow Taoist is also a pill master. However, the spirit herbs in this old man's hands are what I urgently need to concoct a batch of pills. I wonder if fellow Taoist is willing to part with them?" Lu Ping glanced at the silver-robed cultivator and calmly asked, "Mimosa is quite useful for breaking through bottlenecks. Fellow Taoist wants to concoct a pill that can help break through to the core forging stage?" The silver-robed cultivator was startled. He looked at Lu Ping with a trace of respect and said, "Fellow Taoist, your knowledge is indeed extraordinary. May I know your name? Which sector you from?" "I am Liang Shirlan from the Crystal Palace. Nice to meet you." Lu Ping sneered inwardly. He was going to use his status to intimidate others. So he said, "My surname is Lu and I'm ranked 9th. I'm just a free cultivator, not worth mentioning." As soon as Lu Ping finished speaking, the silver-robed cultivator's gaze clearly lightened. The middle-aged cultivator next to him also became more relaxed. The young man who was the loudest was walking over. When he heard Lu Ping's words, he sneered and said, "You sure have a lot of power in this market. I thought this market belonged to you." Lu Ping saw that this person was arrogant and spoke without any scruples. He guessed that this person was a playboy without much experience in dealing with people. He was probably a disciple of one of the 3 big clans. Lu Ping ignored him and said to the silver-robed cultivator, "This mimosa happens to be of use to me. I'm sorry." The silver-robed cultivator didn't think that after he said the name Crystal Palace, this person still wouldn't let go. This was clearly not something a loose cultivator would do. This person was not simple. Lu Ping didn't think that because he rejected the silver-robed cultivator just because this mimosa was one of the main ingredients of the 7-step marked pill that he had just obtained a few days ago, the silver-robed cultivator unintentionally looked up to him. Because Master Wang was a step slower, he had been standing behind the silver-robed cultivator. His previous sarcastic words were ignored by Lu Ping and he was already very dissatisfied with Lu Ping. As a disciple of a big clan, he was born to be flattered by others. Everything he did was self-centered and he was used to being in the limelight. Now, not only was the guest that he couldn't afford to offend ignoring his words, even this loose cultivator in front of him treated him as if he didn't exist. In addition to the dispute with the group of loose cultivators earlier, he instantly vented his anger on Lu Ping. "Kid, don't think that you can pretend to be a pill refiner just because you know a few spiritual herbs. Do you think it's that easy to pretend to be a pill refiner? Besides, you're just a loose cultivator. Even if you became a pill refiner by luck, how can you compare to Brother Liang? Brother Liang is a pill refiner from the Crystal Palace. He's a blood condensation realm alchemist who can refine half-step core forging realm pills. This mimosa will only be a waste in your hands. Since you're a loose cultivator with shallow knowledge, how many spirit stones did you use to exchange for this spiritual herb? My Wang clan will add another 1,000 spirit stones to give you face." Lu Ping was puzzled. No matter how domineering a cultivator was, he was still a late blood condensation realm cultivator. How could a late blood condensation realm cultivator do such a thing in public? Wouldn't he be making enemies out of his own clan? Lu Ping didn't understand what was going on. It had to be said that the Wang clan was not the kind of loose cultivator clan that did a one-off business. Rather, it was a cultivator clan that had taken root here. They were particular about prosperity and harmony. In the world of cultivation there were both open spears and covert attacks. From a young age, the members of the clan had been taught what they could and could not do. This was so that they would not provoke those they should not provoke and bring disaster to the clan. Lu Ping was still wondering why this young master was targeting him. On the other side, the Wang clan's pill refiner had already tugged on Grand Wang clan's clothes, hinting that he might offend someone with his words. Just when Grand Wang clan's young master realized what was going on, he heard a woman's voice coming from afar. She sneered, "Grand Wang clan's young master is really generous. I thought you were going to say, 'How many spirit stones do you want for this herb? My Wang clan will double the price, but you only added 1,000 spirit stones.'" Grand Wang clan's young master's face darkened. "Zhang Xinkuan, since you're here, show yourself. Don't sneak around and embarrass the 4 young masters of the 3 family cities." A gurgling sound could be heard. A woman dressed like a man and a cultivator dressed like a scholar walked over together. The people along the way made way for them. Clearly these 2 were not ordinary people. They were probably disciples of the Zhang clan. Zhang Xinkuan continued, "This title of 4 young masters is just a title given by the cultivators in the 3 family cities. Big Brother and I have never thought that we are worthy of such a title. I believe Sister Xiaozhu from the Li clan feels the same way. I'm afraid only you, Grand Wang clan's young master, can't forget this title. This one doesn't dare to be called 4 young masters, but this one also doesn't dare to have a sister like Zhang Xinkuan." At some unknown time the Li clan's young Miss Xiaozhu also arrived at the mortal market. She was dressed in a professional attire and had a valiant aura around her. Lu Ping took advantage of the fact that all of the cultivators in the mortal market were attracted by the 4 young cultivators of the 3 family cities and inadvertently retreated to the side. This scene was becoming more and more interesting. Chapter 212. Just as Li Xiuzhu finished speaking, Zhang Xingquan giggled and said, "The Li clan's elder sister is always so unreasonable. No wonder my eldest brother is so devoted to elder sister, but he always finds it hard to make elder sister smile." The cultivator beside Zhang Xingquan blushed and scolded with a smile, "You little girl, is there a sister who would ridicule her own brother like you?" Wang Yishan didn't expect that a mimosa would attract the attention of the four most famous young cultivators of the three family cities. Hearing Li Xiuzhu's words, his expression changed. Among the three family cities, the Zhang family was the most powerful. The Wang family and Li family had always worked together to resist the three families. Although Li Xiuzhu was arrogant in the past, he still cared about Wang Yishan's face. Today it seemed like he was targeting the Zhang family brother and sister, but in reality he had also thrown away Wang Yishan's face. Wang Yishan glanced at the silver-robed cultivator beside him thoughtfully. Coincidentally, the silver-robed cultivator was also looking at him. Wang Yishan quickly put on a smile and nodded at the silver-robed cultivator. After calming down, Wang Yishan finally regained his ability to think. The four people's auras were divided into three groups, and they refused to give way to each other. Immediately, the market became turbulent. Everyone avoided each other, unwilling to get involved in the fight between the three families' forces. With the Zhang family brother and sister working together, they naturally had the upper hand. In the past, Wang Yishan and Li Xiuzhu would choose to work together to fight against the Zhang family brother and sister. Today, however, Li Xiuzhu came alone. There was no sign of him working together with Wang Yishan. Wang Yishan was the weakest among the four. After a short while he was at a disadvantage. Under the pressure of the three people's auras, his face turned red and he took a step back. The Wang family's alchemist was a little anxious. After all, Wang Yishan represented the Wang family. If he embarrassed himself in front of others, the Wang family would lose face. However, he was considered one of the older generation in the Wang family. It was not good for him to interfere in a fight between the younger generation. Thus, he looked at the silver-robed cultivator for help. The silver-robed cultivator chuckled and took a step forward. Magic power surged from his body. Surprisingly, he was also a peak blood condensation cultivator. The two of them worked together to push back the incoming aura. The Zhang siblings looked at the calm silver-robed cultivator with solemn expressions. The silver-robed cultivator was clearly not going all out. Now, Li Xiuzhu had become the weakest link. Naturally, the Zhang siblings would not mind letting her suffer a bit. Wang Yishan's face was also gloomy. He secretly hated Li Xiuzhu for not giving him face earlier. The mortal old man beside Lu Ping was already trembling in fear. To him, it was as if the gods were fighting and the mortals were the ones to suffer the consequences. Lu Ping knew that this mimosa was not something a mortal should have. After thinking for a moment, he whispered a few words to the old man and handed him a few spirit stones. Although the old man was a mortal, he knew that the thing in his hand had become a life-threatening object. Just as he was hesitating, he heard Lu Ping's words and quickly took the spirit stones. He happily handed the jade box in his hand to Lu Ping and jogged away. He did not look old at all. When the four young masters saw Lu Ping put the mimosa into a jade box, the Zhang and Wang family cultivators' expressions immediately changed. At this time, Li Xiuzhu was the one in the most difficult situation. This capable woman was quite unyielding. Under the pressure of the four young masters' auras, she was already drenched in sweat. She was like a lamp without oil, but she did not take a single step back. Lu Ping sighed. He knew that ever since he accepted the Li family's invitation, he was already considered a member of the Li family in the eyes of the other two families. Moreover, he had been staying in the Li family's inn. In order to concoct the 7-step marked pill, he would have to visit the Li family frequently. The three family cities might be big, but it was not far for cultivators. News of what happened in the mortal market spread throughout the city in the blink of an eye. Many cultivators rushed to the mortal market to watch the show. Lu Ping took a step towards Li Xiuzhu. In the end, he decided to lend Li Xiuzhu a hand. So it's someone from the Li family. This person is overestimating himself. This is a battle between 5 peak blood condensation experts. He's only at the 7th layer of the blood condensation realm. Isn't he just looking for trouble? That might not be the case. Maybe he wants to play the hero and save the damsel in distress. You probably don't know about this. This person often appears in the shops selling spiritual herbs in the city. He also frequently comes to the mortal market to trade for spiritual herbs. He should be an alchemist. That's right. This person has a good reputation in the mortal market. He never purposely lowers the price of spiritual herbs. He also often gives some pointers about spiritual herbs. His price is also considered fair. This person has already joined the Li family. Someone saw him accepting the Li family's invitation and entering the Li family's manor. When the Zhang siblings and Wang Yishan saw that Lu Ping was overestimating himself and actually wanted to interfere in their game, they looked at Lu Ping mockingly. They were waiting for him to make a fool of himself. When Li Xiuzhu saw Lu Ping acting like this, he wanted to warn him. However, the Zhang and Wang clans seemed to want to see Lu Ping make a fool of himself. They simultaneously increased the pressure of their auras. Li Xiuzhu opened his mouth but no words came out. Lu Ping didn't have much interest in these games of battle qi. Not to mention his divine sense cultivation base and arcane energy cultivation base allowed him to stand up to a mid-core forging realm enlightened master Shen Jing's aura during the apprenticeship ceremony. Not to mention he was still able to speak. A few peak blood condensation cultivators were nothing to him. Just as everyone was waiting to see Lu Ping make a fool of himself, the Zhang and Wang clans gradually withdrew their mocking attitude. From their divine sense, they could sense that after Lu Ping stepped into Li Xiuzhu's group, the Li family's aura suddenly became like an unfathomable lake. No matter how hard the cultivators from both sides tried, they could only create a few ripples on the surface of the lake. At this moment, Li Xiuzhu was also quite surprised to see this cultivator in front of him who seemed to be slightly younger than him. When Lu Ping stepped into the range of his aura, his nearly exhausted aura suddenly seemed to be injected with a stream of fresh water. Li Xiuzhu, who was standing on the edge of the cliff, was suddenly pulled back. Looking at the cliff behind him, he only felt waves of lingering fear. When the surrounding cultivators saw that Lu Ping was able to resist the combined pressure of the two sides with ease after joining the battle, they all had expressions of amazement on their faces. From Lu Ping's point of view, although these people were all at the peak of the blood condensation realm, only Li Xiuzhu and the silver-robed cultivator's strength had reached the level of the 18 generals of the North Sea. Although the Zhang siblings were not bad compared to Li Xiuzhu, they were still slightly inferior. Wang Yishan's strength was the weakest. Obviously it was because he didn't have a solid foundation. A peak blood condensation cultivator like him would only be looking for trouble if he encountered Lu Ping. Lu Ping didn't reveal too much of his strength. When he saw that both sides had retreated, he turned around and smiled at Miss Li. Without looking back, he walked towards his cave abode. Behind him, a little brat followed from afar. Li Xiuzhu stared at Lu Ping's back. No one knew what he was thinking. Then he turned around and gave the Zhang and Wang families a cold look before leaving as well. Wang Yishan gritted his teeth and was about to say something when he saw the distinguished guest beside him finally put away his previously calm expression and walked towards the Wang family. Wang Yishan was startled. He hurriedly called for his family's pill refiner to catch up with him. The Zhang siblings looked at each other, their eyes flashing. No one knew what they were talking about. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared, leaving only the cultivators who had come to watch the commotion. Only a few of the more observant cultivators had their own thoughts when they saw the strange scene in the wandering cultivators' market. For a time, undercurrents were surging in the three family cities. Visible and invisible forces, both inside and outside the islands, were playing games with each other. Even the mortals gradually noticed that the atmosphere in the city had become strange. At the same time, the Li family's new disciple, Lu Jiao, also entered the sights of the three family cities. Another half a month later, Lu Ping was led to an inconspicuous shop in the center of the three clan cities by the young lady of the Li clan, who looked like a man. There was also an alchemist nurtured by the Li clan. He was a middle-aged cultivator with a fiery red face. Along the way he didn't speak much with Lu Ping. Clearly he was doubtful that a young 7th-layer blood condensation realm cultivator like Lu Ping could concoct half-step core forging realm medicinal pellets. But since he was highly valued by the clan master and the young miss, he didn't say anything. After all, he was only proficient in mid-blood condensation realm medicinal pellets. His success rate for late blood condensation realm medicinal pellets was only 20% to 30%, far from the standard of half-step core forging realm medicinal pellets. This is the place where the underground trade fair is held? Lu Ping looked at the shabby shop in front of him with uncertainty. If Li Xiuzhu hadn't brought him here, he definitely wouldn't have noticed that this shop was actually the entrance to the underground trade fair. Most of the people on the Three Families Island were rogue cultivators. Most of them were brave cultivators who often ventured out to sea. Although the three families had the Zhang, Wang, and Li families' influence on the island, These three families obviously couldn't compare to some of the big sects and families on the Three Families Island. As a result, whenever the Three Families cities held an auction, it would always be accompanied by a bloody storm. In the end, the Three Families cities cancelled the auction and instead established a secret underground trade fair. Lu Ping followed Li Xiuzhu into the shop and received 3 cloaks from a hunchbacked old cultivator. Li Xiuzhu took one and draped it over his body. Not only did it cover his appearance, but when Lu Ping used his spiritual sense to investigate it, he found that the cloak contained a powerful magic power that hindered Lu Ping's spiritual sense. This was a good thing. Lu Ping took the cloak and draped it over his body. Unfortunately, this cloak could only hide his identity and not his whereabouts. The three of them came to an empty room behind the shop. A complex array formation had been engraved on the floor of the empty room. Lu Ping knew that this was a short-distance teleportation array. It seemed that the place where the trade fair was held was a secret. However, the three families should know where the trade fair was held. Li Xiuzhu inserted dozens of spirit stones into the array formation. The hunchbacked old man then activated the array formation. With a flash of white light, the three of them disappeared from the empty room. The hunchbacked old man slowly walked out of the room and came to the shop, waiting for the next batch of cultivators to participate in the underground trade fair. Chapter 213. As the strength of Lu Ping's divine sense grew stronger, the negative effects of teleportation became negligible. The moment the teleportation ended, Lu Ping sensed that there were 8 or 9 people who arrived at the same time. Li Xiuzhu said that there were several ways to reach the underground trade fair. The cultivators participating in the trade fair would be teleported in at different times and locations. They wouldn't know each other and they wouldn't speak to each other. This way they wouldn't expose their identities. Therefore, when Lu Ping arrived, he didn't know which of the 8 or 9 people was Li Xiuzhu or the Li family's pill refiner. He could only be separated from the two. The trade fair was built in an underground cave, but Lu Ping didn't know the exact location. It could be considered an underground place. There were only 100 cultivators who could participate in the trade fair. Other than the recommendation from the 3 major clans, there were also 50 teleportation talismans sold in the name of the Northern Alliance. These talismans could only be sold to late blood condensation cultivators on the 3 islands. Each talisman was worth around 1,000 spirit stones. 100,000 spirit stones would be used to invite a core forging enlightened master from the Northern Alliance to host the trade fair. It would also serve as a way of confirming that the trade fair was under the Northern Alliance's protection. It would also serve as a declaration of the Northern Alliance's sovereignty over the 3 islands. However, after the talismans were sold, the Northern Alliance and the 3 major clans didn't have to worry about who would get their hands on the talismans. Lu Ping chose a nearby seat and sat down, quietly waiting for the trade fair to begin. About 2 hours later, several batches of cultivators arrived, bringing the total number of cultivators in the underground cave to around 80 to 90. Lu Ping's divine sense moved, and he looked towards the center of the underground venue. A divine sense pressure that only a core forging Taoist master could possess instantly covered the entire cave, causing the relaxed atmosphere in the cave to become solemn. Nearly 100 cultivators wearing black cloaks stood up and said, "Greetings, Taoist master." A short and fat cultivator suddenly appeared in the center of the cave, as if he had walked a long way and was tired. He took out a small towel from his pocket and wiped the sweat off his forehead. He smiled at the crowd and said, "No need to stand on ceremony, everyone. I'm a cultivator from the Northern Alliance's Cicada Sect Cicada Hall. I was invited to host the trade fair. I'm just here to watch the show. Everyone feel free to do as you please." After Enlightened Master Bai finished speaking, he took out a chair out of nowhere and sat beside the platform in the center of the cave. He was about to doze off when he seemed to have thought of something. He hurriedly struggled to stand up from the chair and said, "I almost forgot that there's also the throwing a brick to attract jade format. Sai, it's not easy to earn spirit stones." As Enlightened Master Bai spoke, he took out a jade box from his pocket and opened it. He placed it on the stone table in the center of the platform and said, "I was chased by a big bird on my way here, so I had no choice but to kill it. I'm quite lucky to have obtained 9 condensed blood pearls of the wood and wind attribute. Those who want them can exchange with 1,000-year spiritual herbs. I'll exchange 1 for 20 spiritual herbs for 20 spiritual herbs, and I'll exchange 1 for 4 spiritual herbs for the main ingredient." Hehe, the precious spiritual herbs will be given priority, and the ones with the most quantity will be given priority. Let's begin. Enlightened Master Bai was indeed a core forging enlightened master. He immediately brought out 9 condensed blood pearls, attracting the attention of most of the cultivators in the cave. After all, most of the cultivators here were in the late blood condensation realm, so the core forging realm was not far away for them. Everyone started bidding according to their number. Not long after, 3 people had exchanged their 1,000-year spiritual herbs for 4 of the condensed blood pearls. Lu Ping was sitting at number 57, so it was not his turn to bid. He did not want the condensed blood pearls at all, so he did not participate in the bidding. He already had a plan for Lu Ping to advance to the core forging realm. A moment later, another 3 condensed blood pearls were exchanged. At this moment, the cultivators in the trade fair had increased the number of items exchanged to 25 spiritual herbs for supplementary spiritual herbs or 5 spiritual herbs. Lu Ping was secretly speechless. These cultivators who participated in the trade fair were quite wealthy. Jinren Bai's condensed blood bead set off a climax as soon as it appeared. He put away more than 100 ordinary 1,000-year-old spiritual herbs and close to 20 rare 1,000-year-old spiritual herbs in satisfaction. He waved his hand for the others to come in order, then he sat on the chair and began to doze off. With Perfected Being Bai's example, although the other cultivators could not compare to Perfected Being Bai's generosity, they still tried their best to exchange some of their important items. Hence, they were much less unreliable, making everyone feel that their trip was worthwhile. The cultivator sitting at the first seat took out a top-grade magic tool and asked for some late blood condensation pills. If there were none, mid-blood condensation pills would do. This top-grade magic tool was worth about 40,000 spirit stones. If it was used to exchange for ordinary late blood condensation pills, it could be exchanged for about 10 bottles. If it was mid-blood condensation pills, it could be exchanged for close to 20 bottles. Although Lu Ping had some in stock, it was not enough for his own cultivation. Naturally, he would not exchange for it. Moreover, he did not lack top-grade magic tools at the moment. In the end, this attack-type top-grade magic tool was exchanged for 2 bottles of late blood condensation pills, 6 bottles of mid-blood condensation pills, and 20,000 spirit stones. Following that, the cultivators on the stage displayed all kinds of spiritual materials, spirit ores, spiritual herbs, magic tools, pills, secret techniques, pill recipes, cultivation techniques, spells, and so on. Other than the spiritual herbs that appeared, Lu Ping was not interested in anything else. Thus he did not gain much. The 19th cultivator took out a jade box from his storage pouch and said, "It's very rare for us Sea Realm cultivators to encounter Earth attribute demonic beasts. I was fortunate enough to encounter a 4th layer blood condensation realm pangolin demonic beast. After killing it, I obtained these 4 condensed blood pearls from the tiger bloodline. I hope they can be exchanged for some mid and late blood condensation realm cultivation pills or a top-grade fire attribute defensive artifact." Although Earth-type Yao beasts with tiger bloodlines were rare in the ocean region, there were not many cultivators who cultivated Earth-type cultivation techniques in the ocean region. Thus, despite the rarity of the 4 condensed blood beads, they were not that expensive. At most, they were worth around 40,000 to 50,000 spirit stones. Using them to exchange for a top-grade defensive magic artifact was somewhat of a stretch. Seeing this, Lu Ping was overjoyed. Debao had finally reached the peak of the early blood condensation realm. Initially, Lu Ping was still worried about him breaking through to the mid-blood condensation realm. He had been collecting spiritual herbs to concoct the barrier-breaking pills for him. Now all his efforts were in vain. Whether it was the foundation bloodline or the attribute of cultivation, these 4 condensed blood pearls were suitable for Debao's breakthrough. At this time, someone had already sent a voice transmission talisman to the cultivator to discuss the matter. Lu Ping counted the mid-stage blood condensation pills he had on hand. Seeing that this person cultivated a fire-type cultivation technique, he specially picked out a few bottles of blood spirit pills that he concocted using the fire-type condensed blood spirit pills. He hadn't used them because their attributes were incompatible with each other. Now he could finally use them. Naturally, Lu Ping wouldn't give away all the pills he had. Instead, he quoted a price of 10 bottles of mid-stage blood condensation pills and 15,000 spirit stones. He specifically pointed out that 5 of the bottles were blood spirit pills that were specially concocted for fire-type cultivators. As expected, the moment Lu Ping's voice transmission talisman was sent over, cultivator number 19 replied, 15 bottles of mid-stage blood condensation pills and 10,000 spirit stones. The more fire-type blood spirit pills the better. We can discuss further. Lu Ping smiled faintly and replied, I can only add 2 more bottles of pills and 12,000 spirit stones. A few moments later, the cultivator on the stage declined the other cultivators who were bidding. Instead, he sent a voice transmission talisman to Lu Ping and said, Deal. Lu Ping used a storage bag to store 12 bottles of pills and 12,000 spirit stones. The storage bag flew into the cultivator's hand. The cultivator scanned it with his divine sense and a satisfied expression appeared on his face. Then he tossed the jade box in his hand to Lu Ping. Chapter 214. The Underground Trade Fair continued. On the stage, cultivator number 26 actually took out a talisman treasure to be auctioned. One should know that talisman treasures were a life-saving trump card for blood condensation realm cultivators. Lu Ping himself had used talisman treasures several times to escape from powerful enemies or defeat them. This talisman treasure was a defensive-type talisman treasure. Generally speaking, defensive-type magic treasures were more valuable. However, for talismans, offensive talismans were more practical. After all, talismans were the last trump cards of blood condensation cultivators. One was to defeat the enemy, and the other was to escape. From these two purposes, offensive talismans were more practical. Even so, this talisman treasure still caused a commotion among the cultivators present. Lu Ping was no exception. He had already used up all his talismans. Without a trump card, it was inevitable that he would feel a lack of confidence. However, this cultivator needed at least 2 top-grade spiritual materials. Lu Ping checked his own storage ring. There were a few top-grade spiritual materials inside. They were all obtained from the Flying Spirit Islands refining hall and Lu Ping's spoils of war. Lu Ping thought for a moment, then took out a sound transmission talisman. He wrote down the names of Deep Sea Cold Steel and Fang Lingshi and passed it to the cultivator on the stage. At this time, the cultivator had already received several sound transmission talismans. He was looking through them one by one, occasionally replying to 1 or 2. A moment later, Lu Ping also received a reply. If you have 2 more top-grade spiritual materials or top-grade second-grade spiritual materials, I can trade with you first. Lu Ping sneered. This person was starting to raise the price. Second-grade spiritual materials were the first choice for most cultivators. It wasn't something that could be exchanged with an early-stage core forging defensive talisman. Even if he had 3 or 4 top-grade spiritual materials, Lu Ping still felt that it wasn't worth it. As expected, after the cultivator sent out several sound transmission talismans, there was no reply. Seeing that a treasure that was originally highly sought after was ignored, the cultivator couldn't help but feel anxious. He took out a few sound transmission talismans and sent them back. Lu Ping also received one. This time, it said that he only needed 3 top-grade spiritual materials. After receiving the sound transmission talismans, Lu Ping ignored it. This time it was time for the other cultivators to return the money. As expected, only 2 or 3 sound transmission talismans returned. Although Lu Ping couldn't see the cultivator's expression under the cloak, he could guess that it must be very interesting. After a while, the cultivator replied with a few sound transmission talismans. Lu Ping received one and opened it. I am willing to trade with you for the Deep Sea Cold Steel and Fang Ling Stone. You only need to add 10,000 spirit stones or 2 bottles of late blood condensation pills. This price was more or less reasonable, but Lu Ping wouldn't use pills to exchange for it. Thus, he sent the Fang Ling Stone, Deep Sea Cold Steel and 10,000 spirit stones over. A moment later, the cultivator sent the talisman to Lu Ping. This talisman contained a defensive spell for early core forging cultivators. It was called Thousand Spirit Wall. Although the name sounded impressive, it was actually a protective spiritual light. After activating it, the cultivator's body would be wrapped in a layer of spiritual light, just like a protective astral chi. However, the effect was naturally much stronger than a protective astral chi. While Lu Ping was admiring the talisman treasures in his hands, the trade fair had already reached the 43rd cultivator. He walked onto the stage and took out 7 high-grade spirit stones from his interspatial pouch. I came across a fortuitous encounter and obtained 7 high-grade spirit stones. I'm willing to exchange them for some late blood condensation medicinal pellets or second-grade top-grade spirit materials. If you can't find them, I'm willing to exchange them for some spirit stones. When the cultivator took out the 7 high-grade spirit stones, Lu Ping couldn't sit still. High-grade spirit stones had many additional uses. Although the spiritual energy contained in high-grade spirit stones was only equivalent to 100 mid-grade spirit stones, high-grade spirit stones could be used for alchemy, artifact forging, talismans, formations, and so on. Therefore, the actual value of each high-grade spirit stone was much higher than 10,000 spirit stones. Over the years, although Lu Ping had collected 7 or 8 high-grade spirit stones, he had already used up 5 or 6 high-grade spirit stones in the process of concocting medicinal pellets. Hence, he was in dire need of high-grade spirit stones. For example, when Lu Ping was concocting the heart-dissolving pellet, he was missing a 1,000-year-old spirit herb that was worth around 2,000 spirit stones. Hence, he had to replace it with a high-grade spirit stone. Although it was a waste, it ensured that the heart-dissolving pellet wouldn't fail due to a missing spirit herb. Lu Ping sent out a voice transmission talisman. The price was 100,000 spirit stones. However, the cultivator's voice transmission talismans flew towards the cultivator on the stage like snowflakes. Lu Ping was stunned. Only then did he realize that he had underestimated the power of high-grade spirit stones. Lu Ping rummaged through his storage ring again and suddenly saw a crystal whip. This must be a top-grade magic tool that he had obtained from the Overflowing Seas Gang's Hall Master. Its attributes were suitable for Lu Ping. However, Lu Ping had always been a swordsman. Moreover, this crystal whip was too eye-catching, so it was not convenient for him to use it. Lu Ping took out another voice transmission talisman and said, "A top-grade magic tool, crystal whip. 5 high-grade spirit stones will be enough." The cultivator on the stage clearly did not expect the 7 spirit stones to be so popular among the cultivators. Even Perfected Bai, who was sitting at the side, opened his eyes and glanced at the cultivator on the stage. He lowered his head and muttered to himself for a moment, but eventually he closed his eyes and returned to his half-asleep state. The cultivators on the stage obviously noticed Perfected Bai's action. Seeing that he seemed to have his eyes on the 7 high-grade spirit stones, everyone felt uneasy. If Perfected Bai were to make a move, nobody would have the guts to compete with him, not to mention that a core forging Perfected Master's wealth was far greater than everyone else's. Even if Perfected Bai offered a moderate price, nobody would have the guts to compete with him. The cultivators on the stage were obviously more concerned about the second point. When Perfected Bai opened his eyes, their hands froze. Seeing that Perfected Bai closed his eyes to rest again, they quickly sent back a few voice transmission talismans. Lu Ping received the voice transmission talisman immediately. It was an exorbitant price, 7 high-grade spirit stones for the crystal whip and 100,000 spirit stones. Lu Ping secretly cursed. These cultivators really dared to offer high prices. Initially he wanted to reject them, but he really could not bear to part with the 7 spirit stones. One must know that high-grade spirit stones were usually used by perfected masters and Laozu in the cultivation world. Even perfected masters would not have too many high-grade spirit stones. This was also why Perfected Bai was tempted by the few high-grade spirit stones just now. After a few rounds of bargaining, Lu Ping finally exchanged the crystal whip for 4 high-grade spirit stones while the other 3 were exchanged with cultivator number 72. Out of reluctance, Lu Ping glanced at cultivator number 72. Coincidentally, cultivator number 72's cloak was also tilted towards Lu Ping's direction. This cultivator had exchanged for spirit herbs and the like several times before. Some of them were spirit herbs that ordinary cultivators could not use. Therefore, Lu Ping was almost sure that the other party was also a pill refinement master. Perfected Bai, who was resting with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes. He glanced at cultivator number 72 and then looked at Lu Ping suspiciously. He then lowered his head and pondered about something, as if he had found something wrong but he was not too sure. Lu Ping, on the other hand, was shocked and furious at the same time. Just when he was being stared at by cultivator number 72, Lu Ping's spirit sense suddenly discovered a slight spiritual power fluctuation on his body. When Lu Ping wanted to find out the source, the fluctuation disappeared without a trace. Lu Ping dared not be careless for a moment after being on the verge of death for a few times. He carefully checked his entire body with his spirit sense, but he did not find anything wrong. Lu Ping was not at ease. Just when Lu Ping sensed the mysterious fluctuation, Perfected Bai was looking at Lu Ping suspiciously. It was obvious that Perfected Bai had sensed something, but he got nothing in the end. The more Lu Ping thought about it, the more gloomy his face became. Could it be that a core forging sage had already sneaked into this cave to avoid Perfected Bai's spirit sense? He was being stared at by a core forging sage. Immediately, Lu Ping was shocked by his own thoughts. Lu Ping, who had personally fought with a core forging sage, knew these sages' methods very well. Lu Ping contracted all of his spirit sense and merged it layer by layer. He built a thick spirit sense wall around his body and began to check his entire body layer by layer. Lu Ping did not hide the intense fluctuation of his spirit sense on purpose. He could not hide it completely. Anyway, with the cloak covering him, Lu Ping was not afraid that the cultivators in the cave would discover his identity. Strictly speaking, the exploration range of Lu Ping's spirit sense was no weaker than a core forging sage who had never cultivated spirit sense or spirit sense. It was just that spirit sense was more profound than spirit sense. Even though Lu Ping's spirit sense was powerful, it was still far from spirit sense. However, when Lu Ping completely compressed his spirit sense, which was more than 200 meters wide, around his body, this forced method made Lu Ping's perception of himself almost no longer inferior to spirit sense. Found it? Under the edge of Lu Ping's cloak, a faintly discernible and extremely obscure spirit sense was finally captured by Lu Ping. At this moment, Lu Ping did not feel the slightest joy in his heart. On the contrary, a chill suddenly wrapped around Lu Ping from head to toe. This was indeed a tracking method that only a core forging sage could use. The spirit sense that supported this restriction was also the true essence of a core forging sage. After a blood condensation cultivator advanced to the core forging realm, their magic power would successfully transform into true essence. Lu Ping immediately used his spirit sense to attack this restriction in an attempt to disintegrate the spirit sense. At this moment, he no longer cared about what kind of shock his spirit sense would bring to the cultivators present. This action of Lu Ping suddenly formed a tide of spirit sense around him. While the cultivators marveled at Lu Ping's exquisite spirit sense cultivation, they also secretly wondered why Lu Ping was like this. Chapter 215. Perhaps there were only two people present who understood what Lu Ping was doing. One of them was cultivator number 72. Even though he was wearing a cloak, his cloak kept twisting towards Lu Ping's direction. On the surface, he looked no different from the other cultivators. However, Lu Ping knew that he had loosened the tracking restriction due to the continuous attacks of his divine consciousness. Every time his divine consciousness loosened a restriction, the cultivator would twist his cloak towards Lu Ping. As for the other cultivator, it was Enlightened Master Bai. As the only Enlightened Master in the cave, Enlightened Master Bai scanned Lu Ping's location with his divine sense. Naturally, he knew what Lu Ping was doing. He glanced at Lu Ping, then at cultivator number 72. For some unknown reason, he closed his eyes and fell asleep again, as if everything happening in the cave had nothing to do with him. This was also the reason why Lu Ping did not ask Perfected Bai for help after he realized that he was being plotted against. Lu Ping did not know if this was considered as an unspoken rule of the underground trade fair, but Perfected Bai was only a representative sent by the Northern Alliance. His symbolic meaning was greater than his actual meaning. Once the trade fair ended and he got out of the crypt, Lu Ping would naturally become someone else's prey. As long as he did not attack in the crypt, Perfected Bai would clearly not offend another potential core forging perfected person for him. The cloak on Lu Ping's body kept fluttering under the waves of divine consciousness. The tracking restriction on the cloak kept loosening and disintegrating. Suddenly, a tearing sound was heard. The divine consciousness restriction was finally removed from the cloak by Lu Ping. However, at the same time, a part of the formation on the cloak that concealed a cultivator's aura was also removed. Lu Ping's aura immediately leaked out from the broken formation. Dozens of divine consciousness in the crypt swarmed towards Lu Ping like sharks that smelled blood. They wanted to see the true identity of this cultivator who caused such a huge commotion in the crypt. As soon as the array formation on his cloak was erased, Lu Ping noticed something was wrong. He immediately cast the spirit concealment spell to conceal his presence and change his cultivation base. At the same time, he formed a shield wall with his divine sense to block them from probing him. When the cultivator's divine senses penetrated through the broken array formation, they could feel Lu Ping's aura suddenly changing. Then his aura gradually weakened. Lu Ping's cultivation base dropped from 7th layer blood condensation realm to 6th layer, 5th layer, and finally 4th layer before it stabilized. As the cultivators stared in shock, Lu Ping used his divine consciousness to completely seal off the holes on the cloak, cutting off the other cultivators from probing him. Then he turned his attention back to the cultivators who were trading on the platform. At that moment, the trade had reached the 56th cultivator. Next, it was Lu Ping's turn. Before this, Lu Ping had been focused on dealing with the divine consciousness imprint on his body. Naturally, he missed a lot of treasures. When it was Lu Ping's turn, everyone was looking forward to it. They wanted to see how this cultivator who caused such a huge commotion would perform. Lu Ping had quite a lot of items with him. However, those who could come here were the elites of the blood condensation realm. Lu Ping had quite a number of high-grade magic artifacts. However, only top-grade magic artifacts could attract enough attention in a situation like this. This caused Lu Ping's original plan to dispose of his stolen goods to fall through. No matter how he thought about it, it could only be pills. However, Lu Ping was clearly reluctant to trade late-stage blood condensation pills. Lu Ping walked to the platform with a jade box in his hand. Under everyone's expectant gaze, he opened the jade box. Inside were 10 blood condensation pills that he had prepared beforehand. As expected, the crowd gasped. Before coming here, Lu Ping had only concocted one batch of blood condensation pills. Lu Ping's pill concoction skills had been improving. His success rate of concocting blood condensation pills, which were as difficult as late-stage blood condensation pills, had reached 70%. In addition to Lu Ping's previous spoils of war, gathering 10 blood condensation pills was not a problem. Before the crowd could speak, Perfected By suddenly sat up straight. "Kid, you're a pill concoction master?" Lu Ping did not dare to be slow. He quickly replied, "I was lucky enough to gather a few batches of pills and managed to gather this bottle of pills." Perfected By nodded. "That's rare. Kid, are you interested in working for the Northern Alliance? I, Old Bai, recommend you to join the Northern Alliance's pill hall." Although he couldn't see the faces of the crowd, Lu Ping's divine sense was able to pick up some clues. He could tell that the North Alliance's alchemy hall was an extraordinary place. In fact, Lu Ping's previous understanding of the East Sea was that the East Sea represented the highest standard of the overseas cultivation world. It was almost on par with the Middle Earth and far surpassed the current situation of the North Sea's cultivation world. After coming to the East Sea, Lu Ping had a better understanding of the East Sea. However, the East Sea was not peaceful. Other than the Crystal Palace, which was the overlord of the East Sea, there were other powerful sects and organizations. Naturally, they could not be compared to the Crystal Palace, but each of them was definitely stronger than the major sects in the North Sea. The Northern Alliance was one of them. The northern part of the East Sea was a relatively barren area in the East Sea. There were no major sects and inheritances here. Over time, it became a paradise for independent cultivators. Later on, sensing that independent cultivators were weaker than the major sects in the East Sea led by the Crystal Palace, the independent cultivators in the sea and some small and medium-sized sects and families joined forces to form the Northern Alliance of Independent Cultivators. After thousands of years, they built a mature and perfect inheritance system to compete with the major sects in the East Sea. It could be said that in the Northern Sea, the Northern Alliance was the final destination that all independent cultivators yearned for. There, they could obtain perfect inheritance and protection. They would no longer have to wander around and cultivate by groping for stones to cross the river. Of course, everyone also knew that there was no point in being envious. After all, Lu Ping was an alchemist. The current state of the cultivation world and the price one had to pay to become an alchemist had determined the lofty status of an alchemist. No matter where they went, they would be welcomed by all forces. Lu Ping was obviously prepared for such a situation. He bowed slightly and said, "Thank you for your appreciation, senior. However, I am used to living a free life. I have no plans to join any forces at the moment." Enlightened Master Bai did not pester him. Firstly, he was wary of Lu Ping's identity as an enlightened master. Secondly, he was wary of Lu Ping's identity as a pill master. Hence he said, "Oh, that's a pity. If I want to join a force and enjoy life in the future, you can come to the Northern Alliance and look for the old man in the Cicada Hall of the Cicada sect." Lu Ping bowed again and thanked him. Then he turned to the others in the cave and said, 10 blood-condensing pills. I will only exchange them for spiritual herbs. 1,000-year-old spiritual herbs will be prioritized. 1 pill for 2,000-year-old spiritual herbs, or 8 supplementary spiritual herbs. If you don't have any 1,000-year-old spiritual herbs, you can use the spiritual herbs used to concoct blood-condensing pills. 1 pill for 12 spiritual herbs. As for the other 500-year-old spiritual herbs, I will only choose those that can be used to concoct late blood condensation pills. Chapter 216. The blood-condensing pill was an essential item for any group or organization of cultivators. It meant that a group or organization could grow healthy and strong. It also meant that they could pass on and nurture their reserves. Lu Ping intentionally raised the requirements for the blood-condensing pill. In large sects such as Zhenling, as long as a disciple could gather 8 stalks of blood-condensing pill, they could exchange for 1 blood-condensing pill from the sect. However, Lu Ping wanted 12 stalks. Even so, the cultivators who exchanged with Lu Ping for the blood-condensing pill were still fighting with each other. Lu Ping initially thought that after Enlightened Master Bai's exchange of 9 condensed blood beads, the cultivators wouldn't have too many thousand-year-old spirit herbs. But in the end, Lu Ping still underestimated the cultivators. After all, they were the cultivators with the highest hopes of breaking through to the core forging realm on the Three Clans Island. Hence, they had at least a few thousand-year-old spirit herbs to prepare for their future. As soon as Lu Ping finished speaking, he received more than 10 sound transmission talismans. Lu Ping looked through them carefully. The first talisman asked for 5 blood-condensing pills. However, Lu Ping found that the other party wanted to exchange for the blood-condensing pills were a mix of 1,000-year-old spirit herbs and 500-year-old spirit herbs. There were spirit herbs for both late-stage blood condensation pills and condensed blood pearls. Lu Ping followed the order he set earlier. He picked out a rare 1,000-year-old spirit herb, then chose 12 other 1,000-year-old spirit herbs. After that, he sent 2 condensed blood pearls to the other party. Once again he told them the order he wanted to pick the spirit herbs. Just like that, Lu Ping used 8 blood-condensing pills to exchange for 3 rare and 28 ordinary 1,000-year-old spirit herbs. On top of that, he also got 36 500-year-old spirit herbs for blood-condensing pills. Just as Lu Ping was about to pick the 500-year-old spirit herbs for late-stage blood condensation pills, a sound transmission talisman suddenly flew over from a cultivator's hand. Lu Ping was startled and looked in the direction of the talisman. A cultivator nodded at Lu Ping, but Lu Ping couldn't find anything under the black cloak. Out of caution, Lu Ping first used his divine sense to cover the talisman. After confirming that there were no problems, he carefully inserted his divine sense into the talisman. After a while, Lu Ping tried his best to maintain a calm expression, but he couldn't help but reveal a hint of excitement in his eyes. Without hesitation, Lu Ping handed the last 2 blood-condensing pellets to the cultivator who sent the last message. The cultivator glanced at the 2 blood-condensing pellets and put them away. Then he took out a jade slip and flew it to Lu Ping. Lu Ping scanned the jade slip with his divine sense and nodded in satisfaction. He turned around and walked down the stage, ignoring the complaints of the other cultivators. The cultivator who followed Lu Ping took out an item and immediately attracted everyone's attention. Even Lu Ping couldn't help but stop after hearing the cultivator's introduction. He turned around and looked back before returning to his seat. The cultivator continued. Therefore, this 100 flowers baneful energy is a rare treasure of heaven and earth. It is an important choice for cultivators to cultivate their protective astral energy or divine arts. Especially because of its youthful appearance, it is a good choice for female cultivators. I hope to exchange this treasure made from the essence of the 100 flowers baneful energy for 2 pill recipes that can aid in breaking through to the core forging realm, or 2 similar medicinal pills. Lu Ping looked at the 100 flowers baneful energy undulating in the cultivator's hand and curled his lips. The 100 flowers baneful energy was naturally a good item. For cultivators who cultivated wood attribute cultivation methods, the 100 flowers baneful energy could not only purify spiritual energy, but it was also useful for healing injuries. In addition, the 100 flowers baneful energy was similar to the myriad meteorite origin evil chi in that it could also be used to protect against certain poisons. Of course, this was all based on the fact that the 100 flower baneful energy was pure and abundant. However, Lu Ping looked at the 100 flower baneful energy that was only about a foot in size and not much thicker than the fog. If a cultivator used it to condense a skill, the skill wouldn't be that impressive. Compared to the 1,000 poison meteorite energy that Lu Ping used to condense the 1,000 poison meteorite energy, the 100 flower baneful energy was like night and day. Although this 100 flowers baneful energy also had the effect of dispelling poison, after being condensed by a cultivator, if Lu Ling took a bite of it, it would take her 4 to 6 hours to expel the poison. Whether it was quantity or quality, this 100 flowers baneful energy was far inferior to the myriad poison deadly energy. Moreover, the 100 flowers baneful energy's effect was to cure poison, while the myriad poison deadly energy's effect was to devour it. Obviously, they were 2 extremes that restrained each other. Lu Ping was indifferent towards this 100 flowers baneful energy. He just watched the other cultivators on the stage constantly exchanging messages with cultivator number 58 using sound-transmitting talismans. Obviously, there were many cultivators who were interested in this 100 flowers baneful energy. After all, although a heaven and earth extraordinary energy couldn't be compared to a heaven and earth spiritual treasure, it was still a rare item for cultivators. However, looking at cultivator number 58 constantly shaking his head, it was obvious that the transaction did not go smoothly. After all, whether it was a pill recipe or a medicinal pill, it was not easy to obtain a half-step core forging stage cultivator. Even if a cultivator could obtain it, they would treasure it as much as their life. After all, the difference between a divine art and a core forging stage cultivator was self-evident. After many cultivators communicated with cultivator number 58 to no avail, they helplessly gave up on this 100 flowers baneful energy. Only cultivator number 72 was still communicating with him through a sound-transmitting talisman, seemingly bargaining for a price. In the end, cultivator number 58 seemed to have made a decision and accepted cultivator number 72's proposal. The two of them exchanged items. Cultivator number 72 gave him a jade bottle and a pill recipe. Clearly there was at least one half-step core forging stage item, possibly even two. Watching cultivator number 58 gracefully walk off the stage, everyone felt as if they could see his wish being fulfilled. He was confident that he would soon reach core forging stage. At the same time, they looked at cultivator number 72 with a mixture of envy and jealousy. However, cultivator number 72 clearly didn't care about this. The trade fair continued, and in the blink of an eye, it was cultivator number 72's turn. Because of the spiritual sense imprint, Lu Ping naturally saw this person's every move. After the 72nd cultivator stepped onto the stage, he calmly took out a whip-like magic tool from his storage bracelet. Seeing that no one was surprised, it was clear that they didn't know what this magic tool was used for. He proudly said, "This is the Thunderclap Whip. I found it in an ancient cultivator's cave. There is a treasure restriction placed on it. It is a magic tool without a doubt." When everyone heard that cultivator number 72 had a magic treasure in his hand, a wave of commotion swept through the crowd. Almost every cultivator wrapped their spiritual sense around the Thunderclap Whip, wanting to see the true appearance of this magic treasure. Although Lu Ping had two magic treasures in hand, he still couldn't resist the temptation of a magic treasure. However, out of caution, he only hid a small strand of spiritual sense behind everyone else's spiritual sense and probed the Thunderclap Whip. Just as Lu Ping was studying the treasure restriction in the Thunderclap Whip that was completely different from the treasure restriction in the herb-pounding pestle, a majestic aura suddenly shrouded all of the cultivator's spiritual senses that were wrapped around the Thunderclap Whip. It enveloped the entire Thunderclap Whip in an instant. Dozens of spiritual senses retreated like beggars who encountered an emperor. Lu Ping knew that it was a spiritual sense, so naturally he knew that the Thunderclap Whip had attracted Perfected Being Bai's attention. However, when everyone retreated their spiritual senses from the Thunderclap Whip, Lu Ping paused inexplicably. Then, for some reason, he followed the route that Perfected Being Bai's spiritual sense had just explored. At this moment, Lu Ping suddenly heard Perfected Being Bai say to the cultivator on the stage, "Young friend, this magic treasure is quite unique. I'm quite interested in it as well. What are you planning to trade for, young friend? Can I join in?" Cultivator number 72's voice was filled with surprise and anxiety as he said, "Since Senior has taken a liking to it, there's no reason for me to reject. I can even give this magic treasure to Senior." Seeing that Perfected Being Bai had taken a liking to the magic treasure, the cultivators knew that they could not offend a core forging perfected being, so they declared that they could not use the item. Perfected Being Bai laughed out loud and said, "Since everyone is giving me face, I won't beat around the bush. As a cultivator of the Northern Alliance, how can I take your item for free? Tell me, what do you need? Let's see if the old man has anything suitable for you." Cultivator number 72 was slightly hesitant as he said, "I'd like to trade this magic treasure for a second-class spiritual material of wood and fire attributes and a treasure restriction related to it to refine my natal magic weapon. I'm planning to upgrade it to a natal magic weapon after I advance to core forging stage." "Hee hee," Perfected Being Bai interrupted the cultivator's words with a smile upon hearing that. He said, "That's easy. I happen to have a second-class spiritual material here, geocentric iron. It's originally a ball of liquid iron from the magma in the Earth's core. After a volcano erupted and spewed it to the surface, it condensed into a piece of iron. It's suitable to give it to you, young friend. I also have a treasure restriction that's suitable for fire attribute magic weapons. It's something that the old man has collected over the years. Take it as well. Cultivator number 72 initially thought that although his magic treasure was precious, he would have to go through a lot of trouble to trade for what he wanted. He did not expect to succeed so easily. He was overjoyed and said repeatedly, "Thank you, Senior. Thank you, Senior." Lu Ping looked at Perfected Being Bai, who was pretending to be forthright, and sneered. Just when Lu Ping followed the trail of Perfected Being Bai's divine sense and delved into the treasure restriction within the Thunderclap Whip, Lu Ping realized that there was another treasure restriction within the outer layer of the treasure restriction. If it was not for Lu Ping's divine sense that was different from an ordinary person's, Lu Ping's divine sense would not be able to penetrate the inner layer of the treasure restriction even with Perfected Being Bai's divine sense's guidance. Perfected Being Bai had obviously noticed that this was a magic treasure with 2 treasure restrictions. Exchanging a second-grade spiritual material for a treasure restriction was a great bargain. Lu Ping had heard Chen Lian talk about this kind of treasure before. It was called the Mother-Child Chain Treasure Seal. This treasure seal was usually created by the same cultivator. It was a unique symbiotic treasure seal that was created by the same cultivator. When the 2 treasures were combined into a mystic treasure, not only would it be incredibly powerful, but it also had many other marvelous uses. When the mystic treasure was combined with the cultivator's own skills, it would be even more powerful. Perfected Being Bai handed a piece of fiery red wrought iron and a divine sense jade slip that had its seal removed to cultivator number 72. The cultivator presented the Thunderclap Whip respectfully while the Thunderclap Whip flew slowly towards Perfected Being Bai. Just when Perfected Being Bai was about to accept the Thunderclap Whip with a chuckle, the Thunderclap Whip that was coiled together suddenly stretched out. Under Perfected Being Bai's horrified gaze, the whip stretched and curled, tying the Perfected Being Bai to the chair. Chapter 217. Just when Lu Ping was secretly criticizing Perfected Being Bai for not being as generous and selfless as he seemed, not only did the Thunder Whip catch Perfected Being Bai off guard, all the cultivators in the crypt stood up and were on guard. Perfected Being Bai did not expect to fall into someone else's trap due to his moment of greed. The treasure was clearly a trap for Perfected Being Bai, and Perfected Being Bai really jumped into it. At that moment, some of the cultivators in the crypt realized that something was wrong. A few of them shouted, "Who dares to disrupt the trading fair on the 3 islands? Aren't you afraid that the Northern Alliance will punish you?" At the same time, they rushed to the stage with their magic tools, attempting to save Perfected Being Bai, who was tied up. Lu Ping shook his head secretly when he saw the few cultivators who were obviously trying to express their goodwill to the Northern Alliance through this method. Since they dared to trick a core-forging Perfected Being, it was obvious that they were well prepared. How could a few blood condensation cultivators mess with them? As expected, cultivator number 72 on the stage only squeezed a word through his teeth: "Kill." Suddenly, a few cultivators among the cultivators around the crypt leaped up and attacked the cultivators around them. "How dare you? What are you doing? Stop. Ah, watch out, who's that?" At that moment, angry shouts and cries of pain were heard. The few cultivators who wanted to rush to the stage to save Perfected Being Bai were blocked by the attacks coming from nowhere. They had no choice but to stop and defend themselves. "How dare you?" Perfected Being Bai's fat face was flushed after being tied up by the Thunder Whip. He roared at cultivator number 72, "How dare you attack a cultivator from the Northern Alliance? Who gave you the guts?" Cultivator number 72 did not answer. Instead, he took out a jade talisman from his storage bag. Clearly, Perfected Being Bai recognized this item as he said loudly, "Can this Thunder Whip trap old Bai in your hands? I'll let you know that no matter how good a treasure is, it depends on who's using it." As soon as Perfected Being Bai finished speaking, a silvery white glow shone from his body, pushing the Thunder Whip that was coiled around him away. The glow from the jade talisman in cultivator number 72's hand slowed down. He chanted a few incantations in a blur and pointed his left hand at Perfected Being Bai. The Thunder Whip that was pushed away by Perfected Being Bai suddenly exploded with blue lightning, penetrating the light barrier that Perfected Being Bai raised and striking him directly. Enlightened Master Bai's body stiffened. His rotund body abruptly straightened and the silver barrier of light that he had spread out shrank. By then, cultivator number 72 had finally completed his preparations. He tossed the jade talisman in his hand at enlightened Master Bai's feet. The jade talisman exploded, transforming into tens of silver lines that landed at different spots beneath enlightened Master Bai's feet. The formation that had teleported Reverend Bai here earlier suddenly reappeared. Amidst Reverend Bai's roar, a dazzling light flashed. Reverend Bai's figure was no longer on the stage, only a 30-feet-long thunder whip was left on the ground. At this moment, Cultivator number 72 seemed to have unloaded a heavy burden. He took a few heavy breaths, and his black cloak constantly expanded and contracted along with his breathing. The underground cave was currently in a mess. Due to the cloak's concealment, the cultivators could no longer identify the few cultivators who launched the sneak attack in the beginning as they moved around. Everyone was in danger, as if every cultivator around them could be their enemy. Coupled with the incitement of someone with ulterior motives, a chaotic battle broke out among almost 100 cultivators in the underground cave within a short period of time. In the beginning, Lu Ping was also ambushed by a cultivator behind him. However, Lu Ping was already on high alert when he realized Perfected Being Bai was tied up on the stage. Sensing the sneak attack from behind, Lu Ping immediately raised his protective chi barrier. However, Lu Ping did not expect the person who ambushed him to use a flying needle magic tool. This type of magic tool was most effective against the protective chi barrier. The flying needle pierced through the protective chi barrier directly and almost made a small hole on Lu Ping's inner armor. Lu Ping broke out in cold sweat from the shock. He quickly raised his cloudy sky. Fortunately, the magic power of the high-grade flying needle was corroded by the meteorite vital poison when it pierced through the protective chi barrier. Eventually it was blocked by the inner armor. Otherwise he would have been severely injured even if he did not die. Lu Ping, who was ambushed, was extremely enraged. Before he turned around, the Qinghan sword had already turned into a stream of light and slashed towards the direction where the flying needle came from. A scream was heard. When Lu Ping turned around, he saw a tall and skinny cultivator looking at Lu Ping with hatred. The cloak on his head and his left arm had been cut off by the Qinghan sword. Due to the cover of the black cloak, Lu Ping actually did not know who had ambushed him with the flying needle. However, Lu Ping could not care so much now. It was either he did not do it or he did it to the extreme. As Lu Ping's divine sense fluctuated, the Qinghan sword turned around and stabbed back at the tall and skinny cultivator again. The tall and skinny cultivator was panicking. Ignoring the pain of his broken arm, he forcefully took out a high-grade defensive magic tool. However, the Qinghan sword struck him and he lost his head. With the deepening of Lu Ping's cultivation and the further cultivation of the North Sea Wave listening spell, Lu Ping's killing methods became more and more domineering and direct when fighting with other cultivators. Lu Ping's thunderous methods caused the cultivators around him to avoid him. They did not want to provoke this fiend. This was also the reason why Lu Ping had taken the opportunity to attack just now. This was a situation where ants could bite an elephant to death. Once he was surrounded, he would definitely die. Lu Ping could only intimidate the cultivators around him from the beginning to have a chance to escape. However, just as Lu Ping put away the storage bag of the tall and skinny cultivator, a three-legged cauldron suddenly rose from the center of the cave. The mouth of the cauldron suddenly opened and a stream of fire burst out. The surrounding cultivators were swept by the stream of fire. 2 cultivators were instantly burned into nothingness. Several cultivators who dodged quickly also had their protective magic tools and gang chi damaged. This was definitely the flame of a heavenly spirit fire that had lost its spirituality. The bright yellow flame raged in all directions. Lu Ping looked at cultivator number 72 who was standing quietly under the cauldron. At this moment, cultivator number 72 seemed to have discovered Lu Ping's location. A bright yellow stream of fire shot straight towards Lu Ping. Lu Ping did not want to reveal too many methods. He spread out his left hand and a red flame appeared in his palm. He used the fire control technique and his magic power surged. The flame suddenly expanded and turned into a fire umbrella, firmly blocking the incoming stream of fire in front of Lu Ping. Lu Ping sighed inwardly. After all, the North Sea Wave listening technique was a water attribute technique. Although it was fine to use it to control the Crimson Phoenix's fire seed, due to the nature of the fire, it consumed a lot of magic power. Moreover, the fire seed's full power was difficult to display. Lu Ping's methods had obviously attracted the attention of cultivator number 72. Just as he looked at Lu Ping and was about to launch an all-out attack, as if he suddenly received a message from Lu Ping. He let out a long howl and a few cultivators leaped out from the crowd and flew towards him. At the same time, a shuttle-shaped mystic instrument appeared in his hand. The mystic instrument expanded and the cultivators all sat inside. The long shuttle rammed into a wall, shattering the array formation used to stabilize the cave's surface. The shuttle flashed and disappeared into the cave wall. Chapter 218. When the teleportation array in the cavern began to crumble, the array formation used to stabilize the cavern walls also began to crumble. The entire cavern began to shake and crumble. Lu Ping quickly realized something was wrong and quickly took Debao out of the spirit beast pouch. The cultivators in the cave also realized that something was wrong and used all sorts of methods to escape from the cave. With a rumbling sound, the cave started to collapse. Lu Ping rode on Debao's body and slammed into the cave walls. The man and the mouse immediately disappeared. In a small forest, the ground suddenly exploded and a green flying sword flew out from the dust cloud. It circled around and Lu Ping grabbed Debao and dashed out from the ground with his face covered in dust. After confirming that there was no danger in the surroundings, Lu Ping patted Debao's head and said, "I've prepared a condensed blood bead for you this time. It's from a pangolin beast. Go back and make a good breakthrough. Next time, don't run out of spiritual energy when you're halfway through." At this moment, Debao was like a large piece of rotten meat in Lu Ping's hands. Lu Ping didn't expect that this sealed cave was built several tens of meters below the surface. Debao had already used up a lot of spiritual energy to carry Lu Ping. When they were several meters away from the surface, they ran out of spiritual energy. The man and mouse were stuck in the ground just like that. Lu Ping could only use the Qinghan sword to dig a hole in the ground and rush out. Lu Ping spread out his divine sense in the forest and discovered that he was actually on a small island. Seeing that there was no one around, Lu Ping wrapped himself in a cloud and slowly rose into the sky like a white cloud. From a bird's eye view, Lu Ping discovered that this small island was southeast of Sanjia Island. There were many small islands scattered around the island, so he didn't expect Sanjia Island's underground trade fair to be held here. Not far from the small forest, there was a small mound that was currently collapsing. Presumably the crypt was located below it. At that moment, several dozen cultivators suddenly emerged from the ground in a sorry state. Some of them immediately sat cross-legged on the ground to recover their spiritual power. Others felt that they couldn't stay here for long and planned to leave. At that moment, the long shuttle-shaped magic artifact suddenly broke through the ground not far away from them. The dozen or so cultivators on the long shuttle-shaped magic artifact flew down and charged towards the dozen or so cultivators. It looked as though the dozen or so cultivators were ambushing the dozen or so cultivators. In reality, that was indeed the case. Among the 100 cultivators in the cave, more than 20 of them died in the chaotic battle. Other than this group of cultivators who even dared to plot against enlightened being Bai, there were only 40 to 50 of them who managed to escape from the underground. Moreover, most of them had exhausted their magic power. If it wasn't for the help of Debao's earth escape technique, Lu Ping would have to spend a lot of spiritual power to get out of the cave. In the blink of an eye, nearly 10 of the cultivators who rushed out from the underground were killed. The remaining cultivators gathered together and barely managed to resist the cultivators who escaped from the long shuttle-shaped magic artifact. Just as Lu Ping was hesitating whether he should help the 40 or so cultivators who were besieged by the dozen or so cultivators on the island, a fire chain suddenly stretched out from behind Lu Ping and silently swept towards Lu Ping. Naturally, Lu Ping would not let it hit him. He slashed backwards with his Qinghan sword and the fire chain that was several meters long was immediately cut into two. However, the broken fire chain was still circling around each other and twisted towards Lu Ping. Lu Ping pointed with his finger and a stream of water flowed towards the two fire chains. As the water and fire collided, a series of rumbling sounds could be heard. A thick white mist immediately formed in the sky. Lu Ping's divine sense swept out, but he still could not find the location of the sneak attacker. At this moment, a huge cauldron suddenly appeared above Lu Ping's head and smashed down towards Lu Ping with the force of Mount Tai. The moment the huge cauldron appeared, Lu Ping caught the source of the spiritual power fluctuation. Ignoring the huge cauldron above his head, he pointed with his right hand and the Qinghan sword issued a sharp whistle in the sky. Hundreds of sword lights drew a long sword shadow in the sky and stabbed towards the sneak attacker. Just as the huge cauldron was about to fall, a huge square seal suddenly appeared on the side of the huge cauldron and slammed horizontally towards the huge cauldron. Amidst the loud bang, it seemed as if the island below also shook. The people who were fighting on the island didn't know what was going on. They all retreated to the side and looked towards the sky. Although the huge cauldron was a high-grade magic tool, magic tools like pill cauldrons were special. In the hands of a core-forging enlightened master, the power of a high-grade cauldron magic tool was no less than a magic tool. However, Lu Ping's landslide was not weak. It was a top-grade magic tool refined from deep-sea silver iron and had the potential to become a magic tool. Moreover, it actively slammed horizontally, so it immediately knocked the huge cauldron away. The cultivator who sneaked an attack on Lu Ping was originally surprised by Lu Ping's superb swordsmanship and was trying his best to block the attack of Lu Ping's Qinghan sword. At this moment, when the huge cauldron was knocked away by the landslide, the cultivator was caught off guard. His divine sense sank and his hand suddenly slowed by half a beat. The Qinghan sword took the opportunity to attack. With a chi-la sound, the black cloak was cut. Lu Ping caught a glimpse of the cultivator and a silver gauze quickly covered the cultivator's exposed appearance, blocking Lu Ping's divine sense. A female cultivator. Although he couldn't see the cultivator's face clearly, it didn't prevent Lu Ping from determining the cultivator's gender. Lu Ping didn't expect that the cultivator was actually a woman. Moreover, it was very likely that she was also an alchemist. After all, the huge cauldron was a high-grade pill cauldron. Lu Ping shook his Qinghan sword and was about to cut the cultivator's veil. At this time, two top-grade magic tools suddenly flew from behind the cultivator and firmly blocked Lu Ping's attack. It turned out that the cultivators on the small island had discovered that Lu Ping had the upper hand and quickly sent two people to assist him. They just happened to block Lu Ping's Qinghan sword. Umph. The cultivator whose cloak was cut by Lu Ping snorted coldly. Suddenly, Lu Ping felt an indescribable sharp object rushing toward Lu Ping's mind. Through Lu Ping's divine sense, he felt as if it was being torn apart. A divine sense attack technique. This person was clearly only at the peak of the blood condensation realm, but he had mastered an offensive technique that could only be cultivated with divine sense. His divine sense was far weaker than Lu Ping's, but it was extremely condensed. It was comparable to divine sense and was far superior to Lu Ping's divine sense. Lu Ping suddenly understood. It seemed that this person had cultivated a secret technique that allowed him to transform his divine sense into divine sense in the blood condensation realm. Therefore, although this person's divine sense was comparable to a core forging enlightened master's divine sense in terms of quality, it was far inferior in terms of quantity. No wonder this person was able to plant a tracking mark on him in the cave, causing Lu Ping to think that this person was a core forging enlightened master in disguise. In the blink of an eye, Lu Ping had already figured out the cause and effect. Now that he knew that no core forging enlightened master was involved in this matter, he immediately relaxed. Lu Ping retracted his divine sense and once again built a divine sense wall around him. Although the enemy cultivator's divine sense attack was unstoppable, breaking through Lu Ping's divine sense defense layer after layer. But in the end, Lu Ping was unable to withstand the attack due to the lack of momentum. Chapter 219. After Lu Ping blocked the opponent's spiritual sense attack, Lu Ping and the cultivator simultaneously turned to look behind them. Lu Ping wore a thoughtful expression and his expression relaxed. However, the dozen or so cultivators suddenly stopped and quickly retreated towards the eastern sea. Cultivator 72 took out his shuttle again, and after the dozen or so cultivators entered it, the shuttle flashed in the air. When Lu Ping looked again, it was already 1,000 meters away. At that moment, three powerful spiritual pressures suddenly appeared on the island. Lu Ping pretended to be out of magic power and landed on the island. The remaining 30 or so cultivators on the island all sat paralyzed on the ground, without the slightest trace of a cultivator's demeanor. Three long roars came from afar, and there was a trace of anger in the voices. After a while, the three figures stopped on the island. The three figures emitted a vast spiritual force and divine sense. It was clear to everyone that these three were core forging stage experts. Lu Ping recognized the cultivator on the far left as the Li clan's patriarch, Li Maolin. From this, it seemed that the other two were the patriarchs of the Zhang and Wang clans. At this moment, Lu Ping was already standing together with the remaining cultivators. Seeing the three spiritual masters arrive, it seemed that they were aware of the changes in the underground trade fair. Some of the more quick-witted cultivators had already taken off their cloaks. Lu Ping also followed suit and took off his cloak. At that moment, several streaks of light flew behind the three spiritual masters. These streaks of light were the children of the three great clans. Among them were the 4 young masters, the Wang clan's alchemist, and the Li clan's alchemist. Lu Ping was surprised when he saw Li Xiuzhu and the others. Then he remembered that the underground trade fair was originally organized by the 3 great clans. It was normal for the disciples of the 3 great clans to have life-saving methods in the underground cave. After the disciples of the 3 great clans escaped, they quickly notified their respective clans and the 3 spiritual masters arrived. After hearing the news, everyone realized that this group of cultivators didn't leave behind any loopholes. They only knew that the dozen or so cultivators were at the peak of the 9th layer of the blood condensation realm. They were stronger than cultivators in the same realm. Their sneak attack was well planned and didn't leave much information for the 3 core forging enlightened masters. In fact, Lu Ping had discovered something about the leader of the group, number 72. However, he obviously wouldn't say it out loud. The whole sneak attack was complicated and confusing. Even the core forging enlightened masters were involved. It was obviously not the work of an ordinary force. In fact, not only Lu Ping but the other 40 or so survivors of the 3 clans were also wary of this sneak attack. Their suspicious gazes were all directed at the 3 great clans. The news of the underground trade fair being attacked quickly spread throughout the 3 clans' islands. The cultivators in the 3 clan cities discussed it, and all kinds of rumors and slanders spread through various channels. The survivors of the 3 clans' islands quickly disappeared from the eyes of the cultivators of the 3 clans' islands. Even if the cultivators wanted to find out what happened, they couldn't find them. Lu Ping was warmly invited to stay in the Li family's manor by the Li family's patriarch. The patriarch repeatedly apologized to Lu Ping for the underground trade fair. Lu Ping didn't mind. After all, the incident was too sudden. 2 of the Li family's cultivators had died in the attack. The Li family had already prepared the spiritual herbs needed to concoct the 7-step marked pill. Lu Ping decided to start concocting the pill in the next few days. Li Maolin was naturally overjoyed. He gave the order and Lu Ping's requests were all fulfilled. 2 days later, the rumors in the 3 clan cities became more and more widespread. The spearhead was quickly pointed at the 3 great clans. The transmission talismans that allowed the underground trade fair were in the hands of the 3 great clans. Most cultivators believed that only the 3 great clans had the ability to send the same group of cultivators into the underground cave. Of course, there were also cultivators who believed that it couldn't be ruled out that the culprit had been plotting against the 3 clans for a long time. However, the possibility of this was not high. Some people said that it was the Jianghu family's doing. They wanted to unify the 3 clans' islands and push aside the other 2 clans. However, this theory was obviously not accepted by everyone. The Jianghu family had always followed the lead of the Northern Alliance. They wouldn't do anything to enlighten Master Bai. Moreover, the Jianghu family didn't have the power to fall out with the Northern Alliance. Some people said that it was the Li family's doing. However, this was even more unlikely. The Li family was the weakest in the 3 clans' islands. They were usually the most cautious. The Li family's disciples never caused trouble or participated in it. They acted as a neutral party on the 3 clans' islands, staying between the Jianghu family and the Wang family. Then the biggest suspect was the Wang family. The Wang family had always been at odds with the Jianghu family for the position of the number 1 family on the 3 clans' islands. However, the Northern Alliance had always supported the Jianghu family. This caused the Wang family to always be at a disadvantage in the battle between the 2 clans. Presumably, the Wang family had a lot of complaints about the Northern Alliance. What was more coincidental was that not long ago, a group of cultivators from the Crystal Palace set up a secret stronghold on a small island attached to the 3 clans' islands. Not only did the cultivators from the Crystal Palace who had their hands in the Northern Alliance's territory not let the matter rest, they even sent a group of cultivators to investigate the cause of their cultivators dying in the Northern Alliance's territory. After this pair of cultivators came to the 3 clans' islands, they were warmly received by the Wang family. The disciples of the Wang family accompanied the cultivators from the Crystal Palace in and out of the 3 clans' islands market. It could be said that the cultivators from the 3 clans' islands had witnessed this. Lu Ping almost had a conflict with these people in the market that day. It seemed that because the Wang family was dissatisfied with the Northern Alliance's favoritism of the Jianghu family, after getting the support of the Crystal Palace, they disrupted the trade fair to attack the reputation of the Jianghu family and the Northern Alliance behind them. This made sense. Only 1 day after this message was spread, the cultivators from the Wang family who went out to the 3 clans' islands were attacked by an anonymous cultivator. 2 Wang family disciples died. This seemed to be a signal. Another day later, the cultivators from the Wang family who went out to hunt with the cultivators from the Crystal Palace were attacked by an unknown force again. The attacker even gave up on the cultivators from the Wang family and turned to attack the cultivators from the Crystal Palace. When the reinforcements from the Wang family were about to arrive, the attacker killed the 2 cultivators from the Crystal Palace. After the 2 attacks, the Wang family seemed to be identified by all the cultivators from the 3 clans islands as the participants of the underground trade fair attack. The mastermind behind the attack was naturally the cultivators from the Crystal Palace who were in cahoots with the Wang family. The Wang family naturally tried to defend themselves. At the same time, they announced that they would severely punish the people who slandered the Wang family and hunt down the murderers of the 2 attacks. However, the development of the situation was beyond the expectations of the Wang family. The cultivators who survived the underground trade fair appeared one after another and questioned the Wang family. Because these cultivators were either the leaders of some small forces or had quite a reputation among the cultivators, otherwise they would not have been allowed to participate in the trade fair by the 3 clans' teleportation talismans. Therefore, these people's doubts made the situation of the Wang family even worse. The cultivators from the Wang family and the cultivators from the Crystal Palace frequently met with danger outside. On this day, the coercion of a core-forging enlightened master once again descended on the 3 clan cities. The master of the Li family and the others were alarmed. Li Xiuzhu and the others returned after a while, but Li Maolin went to the Jianghu family. Lu Ping found out that enlightened master Bai, who was schemed against by someone with a magic weapon in the underground trade fair, was sent to the sea thousands of miles away. He brought a group of cultivators from the Northern Alliance and returned to the 3 clans' islands angrily. There were also 2 core-forging enlightened masters from the Wind Cicada Hall and the Fire Cicada Hall from the Northern Alliance. At this time, the 3 clans and some famous forces and cultivators from the 3 clans' islands gathered at the Jianghu family to discuss the attack on the trade fair. The entire 3 clans' cities became jittery because of enlightened Master Bai's return. Chapter 220. 2 days later, the 3 major families, including the Wang family, reached an agreement to jointly expel the Crystal Palace cultivators from the 3 families' island. At the same time, Enlightened Master Bai and the other 2 Enlightened Masters represented the Northern Alliance to announce that the Crystal Palace was not welcome in the Northern Alliance's sphere of influence. They requested the Crystal Palace cultivators to return to their own sects immediately. The Crystal Palace's 36-people team, which was originally made up of late blood condensation cultivators, was not weak, but there was no concrete evidence to prove that the Crystal Palace cultivators had anything to do with the trade fair. However, they did not dare to violate the agreement made by the enlightened masters of the 3 families' island. Although these cultivators had repeatedly stressed that the trade fair had nothing to do with the Crystal Palace and pulled out the Crystal Palace's strong name, the cultivators of the 3 families' island had clearly determined that the Crystal Palace cultivators were plotting something on the 3 families' island. The Crystal Palace cultivators had no choice but to leave the 3 families' island and return to their own sections. After the Crystal Palace retreated, the eldest son of the Wang family, Wang Yishan, also left. It was said that he was recommended to become the personal disciple of an enlightened master of the Crystal Palace. The situation on the 3 families' island changed. On the surface, the Wang family was being suppressed, and the Northern Alliance declared its suzerainty. However, the Crystal Palace had planted a chess piece in the Northern Alliance through the Wang family, extending their influence into the Northern Alliance's sphere of influence in another way. At the same time, although the Wang family was slightly weaker than the Jianghu family, it was not easy for the Jianghu family to occupy the 3 families' island with the support of the Northern Alliance. Therefore, the Li family became the target of the Jianghu family. At the same time, the Northern Alliance also made a promise to the Li family. Although the Li family remained neutral in the 3 families' island as usual, they began to part ways with the Wang family and secretly began to flirt with the Jianghu family. Their previous awkward position in the 3 families' island had been alleviated a lot. The changes in the 3 families' island did not affect Lu Ping, who was preparing to refine the 7-step marked elixir. Just as Lu Ping was about to go into seclusion to refine pills, he received another invitation from Li Maolin. When Lu Ping arrived at the Li clan's reception room, apart from Li Maolin and his daughter, there was also a female cultivator playing with a jade pendant in her hand. She looked at Lu Ping with a scrutinizing gaze. Li Maolin pointed at the unfamiliar female cultivator and introduced her with a smile. Brother Lu Jiao, this is the daughter of a good friend of the old man. Her name is Chu Ting. We haven't seen each other for decades. I didn't think that this niece of the old man would also be fated to receive the inheritance of an alchemist in her early years. Now she can actually refine pills that are half a step into the core forging stage. The old man is very pleased that his old friend has such a daughter. Lu Ping was startled. He bowed slightly and said, I am Lu Jiao. Greetings, Miss Chu. Out of politeness, Chu Ting got up from her seat and greeted Lu Ping. After the two sat down, Li Maolin was about to say something, but Chu Ting spoke first. I didn't expect Brother Lu to be able to refine pills that are half a step into the core forging stage even though you have just reached the late blood condensation stage. It's really admirable. Lu Ping could tell that although this Miss Chu spoke politely, there was a trace of arrogance in her tone. She must be a cultivator of noble birth. He calmly replied, I was just lucky. It's not worth mentioning. Chu Ting obviously didn't care about Lu Ping's perfunctory reply. She continued to ask, May I ask what kind of pills Brother Lu has refined in the past? This was a bit rude. Lu Ping glanced at her and didn't answer. Li Maolin quickly said, The difficulty of refining a 7-step marked pill is no less than an ordinary core forging stage pill. Moreover, the spiritual herbs required to refine a 7-step marked pill are extremely difficult to find. My Li family has been collecting spiritual herbs for many years, but we barely managed to gather 4 furnaces. This matter concerns whether my daughter can successfully advance to the core forging stage. The old man has to be cautious. Brother Lu will refine 2 furnaces, and niece Chu Ting will refine the other 2 furnaces. Both of you only need to refine 1 7-step marked pill each. What do you think? Lu Ping naturally knew that the Li family didn't trust him. After all, the Li family invited him here based on their own guesses. Compared to the Li family, the daughter of Li Maolin's old friend was obviously more trustworthy. As an alchemist, Lu Ping naturally had his own pride. He quietly stood up and said, Since Clan Master Li doesn't trust me and even invited a brilliant alchemist, I'll withdraw from the concoction. However, the recipe for the 7-step rune pellet has already been memorized in my mind. Forgive me for not being able to return it. Lu Ping's words were quite heavy. Li Maolin suddenly panicked. However, he was, after all, a Taoist master. He immediately weighed the pros and cons. Once today's matter was spread out, he was afraid that in the future, no alchemist would come to the Li family. Every single alchemist was arrogant to death. At the same time, they were also extremely conservative and paranoid. If Lu Ping was directly driven away by Chu Ting today, in the eyes of the alchemists, Lu Ping deserved to be humiliated because his skills were inferior. However, if the Li family invited a brilliant alchemist and they despised Lu Ping's alchemy skills, then not only would the Li family become the enemy of the alchemists, but Chu Ting would also be isolated by the alchemists. Chu Ting obviously wasn't familiar with these unspoken rules among the alchemists. Although Li Maolin wasn't an alchemist with his hundreds of years of experience, he had obviously heard a lot about these unspoken rules. He hurriedly stood up and stopped Lu Ping saying, Brother Lu, please calm down. It's not that the old man doesn't trust Brother Lu. It's just that whether or not my daughter can advance to the core forging stage is of great importance. Brother Lu must have some understanding of the situation on the Three Families Island. The Li family is weak. If we can't produce another Taoist master, I'm afraid we won't be able to have a foothold on the Three Families Island. Seeing Li Maolin like this, Lu Ping knew that a Taoist master had given him enough face. Moreover, he had also taken the 7-step marked pills recipe. If he just left like this, it would be a bit dishonorable. So he said, since Patriarch Li has said so, this junior is not someone who doesn't know what's good for him. I will do my best. Li Maolin was overjoyed and hurriedly ordered his servants to lead Lu Ping to the alchemy room. At the same time, he sent 2 furnaces of spirit herbs to refine the 7-step marked pill. After Lu Ping left, Li Xiaozhu asked in a puzzled tone, Father, since senior sister Chu has already arrived, we can only speculate about this Lu Jiao's alchemy skills. We haven't seen it with our own eyes. If he wants to leave, he can leave. Why did Father stop him? What if this person is just a deceiver? Wouldn't it be a pity to waste 2 furnaces of spirit herbs? Li Maolin shook his head and explained some of the alchemist's rules one by one. Although he was explaining it to Li Xiaozhu, he was actually telling it to Chu Ting. After Chu Ting heard everything, she placed the jade pendant on her waist and murmured, No wonder Master repeatedly told niece to befriend an alchemist no matter how good or bad his alchemy skills are. Niece didn't think much of it, but it turns out this is the secret. Li Maolin shook his head and said, that person's alchemy skills aren't necessarily bad. Ever since he came to the Three Families Island, the rogue cultivators in the market square often asked him for some spirit herbs. He answered all of them one by one. He has never encountered a spirit herb that he doesn't recognize. It's obvious that his alchemy foundation is quite solid. Chu Ting thought for a moment and said, this Three Families Island is only a small area. I'm afraid there won't be any rare spirit herbs here. It shouldn't be too difficult for him to recognize all of them. Although Chu Ting said so, the arrogance on her face had disappeared and was replaced by a trace of seriousness. Li Maolin didn't pay attention to Chu Ting's words and continued, moreover, this person is very mysterious. I can't see through him. He should have a high-level secret technique that allows him to completely change his aura. Moreover, he might not be a 7th-layer blood condensation realm cultivator. I'm afraid you might not be his opponent. When Li Xiuzhu heard his father's words, he said in disbelief, how can that be? Doesn't that mean he's a core forging realm cultivator? Li Maolin said seriously, nonsense. Zhu, do you think you're invincible among the blood condensation realm cultivators? I'm afraid even your senior martial sister Chu isn't his opponent. Li Xiuzhu knew he had said the wrong thing, but he was still a little unconvinced. Chu Ting said thoughtfully, indeed. Junior martial sister Li, do you remember the cultivator number 57 from the trade fair? That person's strength is very high. I'm afraid even I am not his opponent. Originally, I thought that person must be a core forging enlightened master who sealed his cultivation. Now that I think about it, I feel that person is similar to Lu Jiu. No wonder I felt a sense of familiarity when I saw him. When Li Maolin heard this, he was shocked and asked in unison, is this true? Chu Ting shook her head and said, I can't be sure, but it feels similar. That person was extremely cunning. He didn't leave any traces of himself behind. He was even able to break a spiritual sense imprint. Moreover, that person should be proficient in a concealment technique that lowers his cultivation. This is also the reason why I suspected he was a core forging enlightened master. Li Maolin said, it's a pity that I couldn't meet Martial Niche Chu at that time. Otherwise, that person wouldn't have taken advantage of the chaos to sneak into the crowd of survivors. Martial Niece, are you sure your identity hasn't been discovered by that person? Chu Ting thought for a moment and said, I don't think so. The moment the cloak broke, I used the cloud shroud to conceal my appearance and aura. I don't think that person noticed me. In the Li clan's pill refining room, Lu Ping had already made up his mind. Regardless of whether the 7-step marked pill was successfully refined or not, he had to leave the Li clan as soon as possible. Lu Ping didn't expect that the people involved in the underground trade fair attack were from the Li clan. Moreover, that Chu Ting just now was Cultivator 72 who fought with Lu Ping. That day, Lu Ping and Cultivator 72 fought twice. Although Lu Ping used the Qinghan sword to cut the Cultivator 72's cloak, the other party's reaction was very fast. In an instant, she covered her face with a layer of muslin, only allowing Lu Ping to know that she was a woman. However, when Lu Ping saw Chu Ting, he saw that the jade pendant she was playing with was exactly the same as the one on Cultivator 72's waist. Moreover, Lu Ping also smelled a serene and distant fragrance. This fragrance was very familiar to Lu Ping. It was a rather elegant fragrance that cultivators would have after taking the 100-flower pill. Although the 100-flower pill's fragrance could be changed according to the cultivator's preferences, as an alchemist, he would naturally know whether the fragrance came from the 100-flower pill or not. Moreover, Chu Ting's fragrance hadn't changed, it was exactly the same as the one emitted by Cultivator 72. The cloud shroud concealed one's appearance and aura, but it couldn't conceal a cultivator's body fragrance. This was probably what it meant to know a woman by smell. Chapter 221. Lu Ping obviously realized that the Li family was not as simple as it seemed on the surface. There was also a mysterious force supporting him, and this mysterious force was obviously not on good terms with the Northern Alliance or the Crystal Palace. The underground trade fair incident not only suppressed the arrogance of the Wang family and the Crystal Palace, but also changed the weak state of the Li family on Sanjia Island. They also schemed against the two giants of the East Sea, the Crystal Palace and the Northern Alliance, causing the two families to have a face-to-face conflict. Perhaps the reason was because of the Crystal Palace. Lu Ping seemed to think of something. Through Lu Ping's understanding, before the Crystal Palace cultivators entered the Wang family and the Li family joined forces to resist the Zhang family in Sanjia Island. But first, the Li family's eldest daughter removed the Crystal Palace's secret stronghold on Majia Island. Then, the Crystal Palace cultivators came to Sanjia Island to investigate the disappearance of the Crystal Palace cultivators in the sea near Sanjia Island. After the Wang family and the Crystal Palace got close, the trade fair broke out. The Crystal Palace cultivators were expelled and the Wang family was suppressed. Throughout the whole incident, Lu Ping finally noticed a clue. The mysterious force behind the Li family was against the Crystal Palace. As for provoking the Northern Alliance, suppressing the Wang family, and improving the Li family's position on Sanjia Island, these things were just incidental to a series of plans against the Crystal Palace. In the face of the game between these forces, Lu Ping knew that these things were far from what he could participate in now. The only thing Lu Ping wanted to do now was to refine a 7-step marked pill and then stay away from these things. The East Sea was far richer and broader than the North Sea. Since he accidentally came to the East Sea, he naturally had to take a look. Lu Ping had already concocted half-step core forging realm medicinal pellets several times. Although the medicinal pellets he concocted this time were no weaker than core forging realm medicinal pellets, he was still confident that he could concoct a 7-step mark pellet with each cauldron. However, Li Maolin had already stated that Lu Ping only needed to refine one of the 2 furnaces worth of medicinal pellets. Although Li Maolin had doubts about Lu Ping's alchemy skills and was pretending to be magnanimous, Lu Ping could still use this statement to claim the extra 7-step mark pellets for himself. Because of Li Maolin's words, Lu Ping tried every possible way to delay the time of alchemy and refine the spirit expansion pill, which strengthened Lu Ping's divine sense once again. Moreover, Lu Ping still had a treasure that he was reluctant to use. It was the amethyst royal jelly that AI Shutao gave him in the 7-star sky. The amethyst royal jelly was an extremely precious treasure in the eyes of alchemists. It was a precious spirit item used for alchemy. In the hands of an alchemy master, it could increase the success rate of core forging stage alchemy pills. Legend had it that it was also used to refine Dharma phase alchemy pills. It was a treasure that alchemy masters and even alchemy grandmasters yearned for. In the Li family's alchemy room, only Lu Ping was left. Lu Ping recalled the process of refining the 7-step marked pill. Then, with a wave of his hand, he placed an array plate and a dozen array flags in the Li family's alchemy room. After a while, Lu Ping disappeared from the alchemy room and was replaced by an impenetrable white fog. Compared to the complex and huge protective array outside the Li family's alchemy room, Lu Ping trusted the simple fog array plate that Hu Lili personally made. At this moment in the Li family's living room, Li Maolin smiled helplessly and said, "It seems that this person is really cautious. This small fog array is not difficult to break, but once it is broken, it will be discovered by this person in advance." Li Xiuzhu said, "Since this person has received Father's promise, he is still so cautious. It is obvious that he is guarding against our Li family. Could it be that he has some hidden methods?" At this time, Chu Ting seemed to have already expected Lu Ping to be like this. She said, "Alchemists cherish their own alchemy skills. If I were refining pills for someone I am not familiar with, my defensive methods would be even stricter than this person's." Li Xiuzhu said, "Then can we take advantage of the time he is refining pills and suddenly break in? If we do that, he won't be able to retrieve the fire seed he used to refine pills in time. At that time, it will be clear whether this person is the cultivator who used the scarlet nightmare fire that senior sister Chu saw that day." Chu Ting unhappily rolled her eyes at him and didn't say anything. Li Maolin said in a low voice, "Don't mention this matter again. If we do that, then for an alchemist, our Li family will become a mortal enemy." Alchemist Lu Jiu's identity has long been known by the cultivators of the Three Families Island. It has already attracted the attention of many people. Now that our Li family situation in the Three Families Island has just eased, the Zhang clan and Wang clan will soon be aware of the trade fair. Only if you quickly reach core forging stage can we reverse our Li family's disadvantage in the Three Families Island. Chu Ting thought for a moment and said, "Martial Uncle Li is right. Right now is the time for the Li family to hide our strength and bide our time. It is indeed not good to attract too much attention. How about this? I will first refine a 7-step marked pill for junior sister Li. I believe I will be able to refine at least 2. If this person can also successfully refine 1, then niece will try to break through to core forging stage here. Once successful, the Li family will have 2 more core forging enlightened masters. That should be enough to deter the forces of the three families' island. Li Xiuzhu was overjoyed. Although Li Maolin was happy, he still cautiously said, Ting, are you ready to condense your gold core? Condensing a gold core is no small matter. This concerns your future cultivation path. If your master finds out that you are hastily condensing your gold core here, I'm afraid I won't be able to explain it to your master. Chu Ting smiled and said, Martial uncle, don't worry. I, your niece, have already made preparations to break through to core forging stage. It is only because master has repeatedly emphasized that I need to consolidate my foundation and not rush to condense my gold core that I have been suppressing my cultivation. Now that martial nephew has mastered the divine sense transformation secret technique, after advancing to core forging stage, my divine sense will increase by leaps and bounds. I have already accumulated enough so I can break through at any time. Hearing this, Li Maolin relaxed and hurriedly arranged an alchemy room for Chu Ting, preparing to refine a 7-step marked pill. 2 days later, in the alchemy room arranged for Chu Ting, Li Maolin and Li Xiuzhu accompanied a hale and hearty old man as they looked in the direction of the alchemy room. Li Maolin respectfully said to the old man next to him, Father, it seems that Ting really is a rare alchemy genius. The difficulty of refining a 7-step marked pill is almost the same as refining a core forging stage pill. I didn't expect Ting to successfully refine it on her first try. Junior sister Chu has a daughter like this? The old man snorted, interrupting Li Maolin's words and said, Is there still no movement from the other alchemy master's alchemy room? Li Maolin knew that he had just said the wrong thing, but Li Xiuzhu quickly followed up. It seems that even if this person is an alchemy master, his alchemy skills can't be compared to senior sister Chu's. This person entered the alchemy room half a day earlier than senior sister Chu, but now there is no movement. Perhaps the 2 precious spirit grasses will be wasted by him. The old man kindly looked at his granddaughter, then turned to Li Maolin and said, Regardless of whether this person can refine a 7-step marked pill or not, our Li family must treat him with respect and not neglect him. Li Maolin respectfully complied, and the old man turned around and walked away. Li Xiuzhu's eyes turned and he quickly chased after the old man. It was unknown what he said to the old man, but the two of them chatted and laughed. Soon they arrived at the depths of the Li family manor. Chapter 222. 4 days later, Chu Ting's alchemy room once again emitted a pill fragrance. Li Maolin and Li Xiuzhu once again came to the alchemy room and waited for Chu Ting and Lu Ping to come out. The protective array formation outside Chu Ting's alchemy room glowed brilliantly and split open at the same time. Chu Ting's graceful figure slowly walked out amidst the overflowing pill fragrance. Li Xiuzhu quickly stepped forward and asked in a low voice. The 2 women chatted and laughed as they walked towards Li Maolin. At this moment, the alchemy room on the other side also slowly opened. Lu Ping, dressed in blue robes, walked out with a calm expression. He reached out and brushed his robes as if he had meditated for a long time. Chu Ting stepped forward and handed a jade crystal bottle to Li Maolin. She said, Niece has only refined 3 7-step marked pills. Refining 2 7-step marked pills on the second try is already Niece's limit. Li Maolin happily said, Very good, very good. Niece's alchemy skills have exceeded my expectations. 3 7-step marked pills will be enough for your junior sister to break through to the core forging stage. After Chu Ting finished speaking, she and Li Xiuzhu both looked at Lu Ping, obviously provoking him. With 3 7-step marked pills in hand, Li Maolin looked at Lu Ping with a relaxed expression. Without waiting for Li Maolin to speak, Lu Ping smiled and said, Miss Chu's alchemy skills are really extraordinary. I admit defeat. This is a 7-step marked pill that I tried my best to refine. Please seniorly appreciate it. Lu Ping also handed over a jade crystal bottle to Li Maolin. When Li Maolin saw that there was indeed a 7-step marked pellet in the bottle, he was overjoyed and praised, I didn't expect little brother Lu's alchemy skills to be so extraordinary. It's our Li clan's honor to have little brother Lu's help. When Li Xiuzhu saw that Lu Ping had actually refined a 7-step marked pill, his opinion of Lu Ping had clearly changed. Together with Li Maolin, he thanked Lu Ping. To be able to refine a pill like the 7-step marked pill, there was no doubt that Lu Ping was an alchemy grandmaster. Thus, the Li family's father and daughter treated him with even more respect than before. Lu Ping, on the other hand, did not care. In any case, he did not intend to stay in the Li family for long. Instead, Chu Ting's gaze made Lu Ping feel somewhat unfathomable. There was a faint trace of disappointment in her eyes, as if the fact that he had refined the 7-step marked pill had caused her to lose the basis for her judgment. Lu Ping declined the Li family's warm invitation to stay and returned to the cave outside the manor. Outside the cave, Xiao Sima was squatting on the ground and drawing something with a branch. When he saw Lu Ping walking over, Xiao Sima threw the branch over and welcomed him with a joyful expression. Lu Ping looked at the drawing on the ground. It was a drawing of a 500-year-old wind-him herb. With just a few strokes, the wind-him herb was perfectly drawn. Lu Ping did not say anything. Instead, he smiled and asked, "Xiao Sima, I haven't seen you for a few days, and your cultivation has already broken through to the mid-blood refining realm?" When Xiao Sima saw that the drawing he drew on the ground did not attract Lu Ping's attention, he could not help but feel slightly disappointed. However, when he heard Lu Ping's praise, he still replied excitedly, "It's all because I earned some spirit stones from Senior. I only managed to break through the mid-blood refining realm the day before yesterday." After entering the cave, Lu Ping sat cross-legged on the cultivation platform. Xiao Sima stood beside him with his hands clasped behind his back. Lu Ping did not speak for a long time. Xiao Sima did not know why Lu Ping had called him here, so he could not help but feel a little anxious. He secretly glanced at Lu Ping. Lu Ping suddenly opened his eyes. Xiao Sima, who was looking at Lu Ping, was startled and quickly looked away. Lu Ping smiled and asked, "Xiao Sima, do you want to learn alchemy?" Xiao Sima was shocked by Lu Ping's sudden question again. He was momentarily speechless. However, he was a quick-witted person after all. He quickly reacted and kneeled on the ground. He said, "I dare not lie to Senior. Xiao Sima indeed wants to be Senior's disciple and learn the art of alchemy." Lu Ping smiled and asked, "Do you know why alchemy is so difficult?" Xiao Sima shook his head and said, "I do not, please enlighten me, Senior." Lu Ping shook his head and did not explain. Instead, he took out a jade scroll and said, "The art of alchemy cannot be passed down in a day. I plan to roam the Eastern Sea, so I will not be staying here for long. This jade scroll contains my understanding of alchemy during my early years. If you really have the determination and luck to become an alchemist, you must study this jade scroll carefully and build a solid foundation. The path of an alchemist is vast and boundless. Being able to recognize a few stalks of spiritual herbs is only the most basic ability." Xiao Sima knew that his intelligence had been seen through by Lu Ping. His face flushed red and he stuttered, unable to speak. Lu Ping continued, "In a few days the Li clan will make a move in the 3 family cities. If there are any new shops opened by the Li clan, I have already discussed it with head shopkeeper Li. You can go and apply for a job to purchase spiritual herbs. As for how much you can learn, it will all depend on your own efforts and fate." When Xiao Sima saw that Lu Ping had stopped talking, he knew that today's matter had come to an end. He was smart to begin with. Although he did not become Lu Ping's disciple, he was able to enter the Li clan's walls and obtain Lu Ping's inheritance. As long as he worked hard, his future achievements would not be small. Lu Ping looked at Xiao Sima, who kowtowed to him and then left the cave dwelling. Lu Ping sat there deep in thought. In the pitch-black cave dwelling, only Lu Ping's eyes shone brightly. Unbeknownst to him, Debao had been thrown out of the spirit beast pouch by Lu Ping. Recently, Debao's life had been very miserable. This was because Debao wasn't a talented monster. It was only because of Lu Ping's continuous supply of medicinal pellets that it grew from an inconspicuous spirit-seeking mouse to a peak early blood condensation realm monster for the past decade or so. Debao's growth was all thanks to Lu Ping's continuous supply of medicinal pellets. When Lu Ping struggled to concoct pills for the blood refining realm in order to become an alchemist, Debao became Lu Ping's only customer. That was until Lu Ping obtained his second demonic beast. From Lu Ping's point of view, Debao's cultivation was like a castle in the air. His foundation was ridiculously weak. If he didn't do something soon, even if Debao broke through to the mid-blood condensation realm, it would be impossible for him to reach the core forging realm. He might not even be able to advance to the late blood condensation realm. Therefore, after Lu Ping exchanged for the pangolin's condensed blood bead, he didn't let Debao refine it immediately. Instead, he released Samling, Lu Dague and Lu Qin and started training Debao. To put it nicely, it was to solidify his foundation. Due to Lu Ping's indulgence, Debao was used to being lazy. Lu Ping's other spiritual beasts were more or less dissatisfied with it. Samling was jealous. He was jealous that Lu Ping favored Debao. From Samling's point of view, Lu Ping, who saw him as a father, could only give them his love. From Lu Qin's point of view, Debao was an obscene rat who flaunted the tiger's might. He was good at acting cool and sneaking around, but he was not good at fighting enemies head-on. From Dague's point of view, Debao was a problematic spiritual beast. It didn't have the attitude to work hard for its master. Debao was mercilessly placed on the tea table by Lu Ping. He used each and every one of them to escape from the other's abuse. Debao wanted to escape, but there was a talkative bird on its head. Debao wanted to dig a hole, but there were 3 snakes following it. Debao wanted to escape through the earth, but Lu Ping had cast a spell on the ground of the cave, and Debao had bumped into a bump. Debao wanted to slack off, but Dague was a very dutiful spiritual beast, constantly watching over it. It had to be said that the fastest way for a spiritual beast to improve was to let it continuously fight with other spiritual beasts. When it was used on Debao, it was constantly running away. Debao wasn't born with only 2 innate talents, spirit-seeking and earth-escape. However, the other spells it comprehended were all related to these 2. Hence, in this hide-and-seek battle, Debao finally became more and more slippery. The various spells and arrangements it used also became more and more reasonable. Even when the other 5 spiritual beasts joined forces, it was still very difficult to catch this spiritual beast with the lowest cultivation in the cave. Of course, Debao's weight also changed. If Debao in the past was like a fat pig with a small head whose belly was about to fall to the ground, the current Debao was like a clay ball without legs. When it walked, it was impossible to see its 4 legs, only a ball rolling around. At this moment, Lu Ping also couldn't explain why its weight was directly proportional to its ability to escape. At this time, Lu Ping had been in seclusion in the cave for half a year. Finally, Debao received Lu Ping's approval. It swallowed a condensed blood pearl and refined it, beginning to break through to the mid-stage blood condensation realm. Seeing how Debao fell into a deep sleep so quickly, Lu Ping knew that Debao's cultivation had already reached the peak of the 3rd level of the blood condensation realm and was only 1 step away from breaking through. That was why Debao's breakthrough was so smooth. After refining the essence of the condensed blood pearl, it would successfully break through to the mid-stage blood condensation realm. Lu Ping saw that other than Debao, the other spiritual beasts had also improved. Dague had finally entered the 5th level of the blood condensation realm. Under Lu Ping's intentional suppression, Samling's cultivation was also at the 5th level of the blood condensation realm. Lu Ping had high expectations for Samling. He didn't want them to neglect a solid foundation because of their rapid growth and cultivation. The Blue Phoenix's cultivation was progressing steadily, but because it had entered the late stage of the blood condensation realm, its cultivation speed had slowed down. Now, it was also on the verge of breaking through to the 8th level of the blood condensation realm. Lu Ping was satisfied with the spiritual beast's progress, so he turned his attention back to the 12 gentian pearls revolving around Lu Ping. Lu Ping had gone through many twists and turns to obtain these 12 spiritual pearls. These 12 spiritual pearls were made of high-quality materials, and they were compatible with Lu Ping's cultivation technique. They were the best choice for Lu Ping to use as his natal Dharma artifact. Although Lu Ping's natal gentian diagram repeatedly stated that this natal Dharma artifact was extremely powerful, it wasn't easy to forge and use. However, after Lu Ping obtained the 12 spiritual pearls, he didn't hesitate to forge it. Although Lu Ping was fully prepared for the difficulties, Lu Ping didn't expect that the difficulty of forging this natal Dharma artifact was still beyond his imagination. In the past 6 months, Lu Ping focused on the forging of the natal Dharma artifact. Other than normal cultivation, it could be said that he put aside everything else. Because the forging of the natal Dharma artifact was rarely done by others, everyone didn't want their last resort to be known by others. Lu Ping had only consulted Chen Lian about many questions regarding the natal Dharma artifact. Although Lu Ping wasn't good at forging, he had to forge it himself. In order to ensure the quality of his natal Dharma artifact, Lu Ping was careful in every step of the forging. He didn't dare to be careless. He would rather spend a lot of time, energy and mana to carve it carefully. In addition, there were a total of 12 gentian Dharma artifacts. The number far exceeded that of ordinary people, so the time spent was even longer. However, with the hard work of the past 6 months, the natal Dharma artifact was finally close to perfection. Lu Ping looked forward to the 12 pearls even more. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.